This woman is the Crown Prince's fiancée, envied by all women. However, in her past life she was a poor and unloved college student, mysteriously transported into a romance novel. She became the antagonist who only knows how to envy the female lead, and in the novel she's just a plot device to advance the main couple's relationship. Her name is Elise and she now only wants to quickly break off the engagement. Today is the day she enters the palace to meet the Crown Prince. Sure enough, as soon as she enters she sees the male lead Crown Prince chatting intimately with the female lead Helena. Helena is the daughter of an impoverished count, now serving as the Crown Prince's maid. In the novel, Helena and the Crown Prince fall in love and he eventually marries her as his empress. Helena notices Elise and greets her warmly. The Crown Prince looks displeased and scolds Elise for being even later than usual. Elise can only curtsy and apologize while lifting her skirts. Helena smiles and tells Elise to please sit down. The Crown Prince is extremely concerned, saying they're all friends so Helena doesn't need to be so formal with her, then turns to Elise and says, "Isn't that right, miss?" At this moment, Elise thinks to herself that the male lead really can't stand to see Helena suffer even the slightest grievance. Helena is a maid, so isn't it normal for her to use honorifics when addressing a duke's daughter? If following the original novel's plot, Elise would definitely bully Helena now, but the current Elise doesn't want to do that. She sits down gracefully and asks if Helena can refill her tea. But the Crown Prince is displeased again and sarcastically asks Elise if she never learned to pour tea herself or if her hands are unwell. Elise innocently asks back, "Is it really such a breach of etiquette to have a friend pour tea?" The Crown Prince angrily starts to rebuke Elise. Helena interrupts him, saying she poured the tea because Elise is her friend. In just a few sentences she soothes the Crown Prince. Helena truly has an innocent and straightforward personality, no wonder everyone likes whatever she does. At this time, a man also arrives at the tea party, warmly embracing the Crown Prince and Helena. The man is called Asen, the eldest son of a duke family, but he's better known as Asen the hero. He's a pitiful man who secretly loves Helena. Sure enough, Asen completely ignores Elise as well. It takes him a good while before he remembers to greet her. Elise is a bit angry but still responds politely. Asen winks and acts cute, telling her not to be so cold and to just call him by name. Elise jokingly says that as the Crown Prince's fiancée, how could she dare address him so casually? The atmosphere becomes awkward for a moment. Elise emphasized fiancée in front of Helena. The Crown Prince must be very angry, right? The Crown Prince's fist is clenched tight, veins popping out. Asen senses something's wrong and quickly tries to stop him from getting angry. After all, there are many eyes watching here. But the Crown Prince says through gritted teeth that he doesn't need to mind others' gazes. Elise can't help but mock him, saying only one person in the world can do that, but even that person has to be mindful of political enemies. The atmosphere freezes again. It seems this tea party can't continue. This woman was mysteriously transported to another world and became the Crown Prince's fiancée. This is a world where divine power and magic coexist, yet she's merely a plot device to advance the main character's relationship. The awkward atmosphere at the tea party makes her want to leave for a moment. Helena calls out to stop her, but this time doesn't use an honorific, instead calling out Elise directly. Elise tells her expressionlessly that their statuses are different, so she should mind her manners when speaking in the palace. Helena lowers her eyes and agrees dejectedly. The Crown Prince slams his fist on the table again. He loudly demands to know what Elise means. Helena quickly grabs the Crown Prince's hand, saying she's fine. Only then does the Crown Prince calm down. He really loves Helena too much. Asen also comes to Helena's side to comfort her. He can't bear to see his love interest upset either. Elise feels there's nothing left for her here and turns to leave. The weather is lovely today, sunny with birds soaring happily in the sky, but Elise's mood is far from beautiful. The heavy makeup and jewelry on her body feel oppressive. Her attendant asks if she enjoyed herself. It takes her a long while to respond with just a Back home, Elise has changed clothes and is now lying bored on the sofa. She recalls how she's already tried various methods to return to her original world. Jumping from a high tower, drinking poison used for assassinating political enemies. She even tried using a knife to end her own life. But the causal laws of this world don't allow Elise to escape the plot. When she jumped, someone guarding the stables caught her. The poison turned into an effective sleeping pill. When using the knife, she couldn't injure herself fatally. Every suicide attempt ended up like this. It's a super unlucky fate, unable to die no matter what, and extremely painful too. If it wasn't painful, she wouldn't feel so wronged. With no other choice, Elise asks her maid to find a powerful fortune teller, thinking she can only use supernatural means to counter this. The next day she chooses a simple outfit. Her maid thinks Elise should dress more glamorously for this rare outing, but Elise refuses, saying she's just going to see a fortune teller and will be back soon. Then she sets off to meet the fortune teller. Guns exist in this world, so it seems more modern than medieval. The streetlights are also made using magical engineering. It's a bit amusing that a country which shuns magicians for serving the gods would develop magical technology. She soon arrives at her destination. Elise tells her attendants to go back, wanting to explore on her own. Elise enters the fortune teller's shop. The table is covered with books and vials of magical potions. Elise remarks, "This doesn't feel like a fortune-telling shop." She reaches out to pick up a book from the table. Just then a voice speaks from behind her, "If I were you, I wouldn't touch that casually." It's the fortune teller, a stylish woman with red hair and blue eyes. Elise tells her she came because of a trouble, and if she's not a fraud she must know what the trouble is. The fortune teller smiles confidently and answers, "Of course I know. Or should I call you, poor stranger from another world?" Elise is stunned to hear this. The female college student was transported into a cliché novel. She became a plot device to advance the main couple's relationship. She wants to return to her original world, but the laws of causality won't let her escape the plot. So she finds a fortune teller, who immediately sees through that she's not from this world. Then the fortune teller takes Elise to a mysterious cottage. Elise gets straight to the point, "Since you know who I am, I want to go back to where I came from." But the fortune teller tells her it's not so simple being a stranger from another world, and she can smell the scent of Elise's soul. It seems Elise has already tried various ways to return. She hands Elise a bowl of red magical potion and tells her to drink it. Naturally, Elise can't just drink it directly and asks what it is. The fortune teller tells her if it's poison, wouldn't that be a good thing for her? Hearing this, Elise doesn't hesitate much and gulps it down. But the taste of the potion makes her want to vomit. The fortune teller thoughtfully gives her a piece of candy. She then says directly to Elise, "You must have realized, I'm not just a fortune teller." As she speaks, she opens her palm and blue flames emerge. Elise is stunned by the sight before her. The fortune teller then introduces herself. Her name is Medea, and she's the last witch in this land. Elise thinks back, there were no witches appearing in the novel's plot. Medea also sees that Elise has many questions, but says she can only answer what Elise is allowed to know. Elise asks, "Does last witch mean there are none left besides you? Also, your name has no surname. Do witches not have descendants?" Medea answers, "To avoid persecution by the empire, everyone else fled far away. She's the only witch left in this empire. Moreover, they value individual existence more than family, so they only call each other by first names." Elise clearly has many more questions for her, but Medea says, "You should ask what you're most curious about." Elise doesn't beat around the bush. "Please tell me how to return to my original world." Medea says, "If you can bear the risk of death, perhaps I can help you." But this is her first encounter with someone from another world, so she still needs to seek advice from her sisters. Elise asks how long it will take. Medea tells her it could take half a month at the quickest, but since her sisters are no longer in this empire, it will consume more time. Elise nervously asks, "What if I don't want to risk death?" Medea doesn't know how to answer this question for a moment, because magic and theology are different. Theology is about creation, while magic is about transformation. So if you want to create a method that doesn't exist, you should ask at the Grand Temple, but there's no guarantee they'll have the method you're looking for. Elise says she understands, and places a bag of payment on the table. Medea says payment isn't necessary. Elise explains it's to make her take this matter seriously. Her secret is even more deadly than Elise's own, so she trusts Medea won't exploit this. Medea smiles and says since it's money concerning her life, she'll accept it. Finally, she reminds Elise to carry a mirror with her. She'll tell Elise immediately when she finds out any information. As Elise walks out, she feels confused about why a character not in the novel has appeared. Whether it's good or bad fortune, she'll have to try to find out. But why are there so many people here? Elise now sees the street ahead is bustling with activity. It turns out this is the sweet shop the maid mentioned, but with so many people queuing, no matter how delicious it is, she doesn't want to join this crowd. Suddenly she bumps into a man face to first. Elise loses her balance and twists her ankle. Just as she's about to fall, the man catches her from behind. He gently asks Elise, "Are you alright?" Elise recognizes him at a glance. This is the man who sacrificed all his divine power to resurrect Helena in the novel, and wished for Elise to sit in hell. He is Eurus from the Grand Temple. This man is Eurus, a priest from the Grand Temple. He's very friendly to Elise now, but he will certainly come to hate her in the future. Because in the original novel, Elise loved the Crown Prince, but he ended up marrying Helena. Helena is a kind and innocent flower, pursued by all the men in the novel, including Eurus. After the Crown Prince married Helena, Elise became extremely jealous. She angrily smashed everything in her home, then went mad with revenge. Blinded by insecurity and envy, Elise poisoned Helena, feeling she had stolen what belonged to her. But Elise met a tragic end and was eventually executed by hanging. After Elise's death, the Grand Priest Eurus sacrificed all his divine power to resurrect Helena after her death, finally bringing about a happy ending with the Crown Prince. In other words, Eurus will become Elise's enemy in the future. Eurus snaps Elise out of her thoughts, asking who she is. Elise feels immense pressure, like she can barely breathe, as Eurus' penetrating gaze pierces through her. She wonders if she should confess everything, since Medea told her to seek a method at the Grand Temple, and the man before her is a priest of the Grand Temple. But if he learns she's not the real Elise, she might be taken away for experiments. If the Crown Prince found out too, he'd probably think her mad and lock her away on an island. She can't let that happen, so she tells Eurus, "You ask who I am? Isn't it strange for a priest to not recognize an unmarried noble lady?" Eurus is a bit exasperated, saying that's not what he meant, but before he can finish, people on the street start gossiping. Isn't that the Crown Prince's fiancée? Why is she out on the streets? Eurus wants to find a less crowded place to talk. He's clearly concerned about others' gazes. It makes sense, since Elise is the Crown Prince's fiancée after all. Being seen chatting with a man in priest's robes on the street would certainly draw attention. Elise doesn't back down either, saying, "You were interrogating me so fiercely just now, but now you want to keep quiet?" Eurus quickly waves his hands, saying he wasn't interrogating her. How could a priest interrogate her? But Elise definitely felt like she was being interrogated. She tells Eurus, "If I touched your chest now, would it not count as molestation just because I'm a woman?" Eurus never expected Elise to be so unreasonable. He immediately apologizes, saying he misspoke. Surprisingly, Elise accepts his apology readily, then leaves. On the way home, Elise starts to regret not asking Eurus more. Eurus is a priest in the Grand Temple, and ordinary people rarely have a chance to approach the Grand Temple. Recalling Medea's words, there might really be a way to return to her original world without dying at the Grand Temple. She feels a bit troubled now, thinking she should have confessed her true identity to Eurus. Honestly, she feels wronged. Rather than death, it would be better to beg that Eurus who hates her. But she only skimmed the original novel, so she doesn't know what happens next. She can only pray to meet Eurus again. Just as Elise gets out of the carriage, she's stopped by a knight. The knight says, "The knight appointment ceremony will be held soon. Do you still not plan to choose a personal knight this year?" Elise feels confused. The knight continues, "Having a personal knight would be convenient in many ways, and they could handle private matters according to different situations." This makes Elise very tempted, but thinking about it, she decides against it. She's about to leave anyway, so why create more trouble for herself? The knight still persists, following behind Elise, saying many people dream of becoming her guard. Sacrificing one's life for a beautiful lady is a knight's romance. Elise suddenly gets angry, so sacrificing one's life for an ugly lady has no value? She really doesn't want to bear the burden of someone else's life. It makes her feel awful inside. She refuses the knight. "Some people might like that kind of romance, but I don't, so you should dedicate your life to yourself instead." The Grand Priest Eurus loves sweets very much, but he's often mocked for buying them on the street. How could the dignified Grand Priest like such frivolous sweets? So because of his position, he always secretly enjoys sweets in moderation. Helena also knows Eurus likes sweets, so she often secretly waits in line to buy them for him. The two became close through this. Helena also loves good food, so when she buys sweets she brings an extra portion for Eurus. Although Eurus is a priest, his life is bound by various restrictions, so he's always been repressed until now. It's thanks to Helena that he can finally openly pursue his hobby. All this is what Elise recalls from the novel's content about the start of Eurus' unrequited love. He was lingering near the sweet shop yesterday. Does that mean he hasn't fallen for Helena yet? Should she make the first move then? If he falls for Helena, he'll become her enemy. Elise calculates that if she can get Eurus to keep her secret, someone of his character won't go around telling a woman's secret. To see him again, she just needs to go to yesterday's sweet shop, right? Though she doesn't want to steal Helena's love, there's no choice but to go to the sweet shop and wait for Eurus to appear. But just then, her maid relays a message: "The king summons you to the palace." This woman was transported into a romance novel and became the villainous female rival. She was about to go make nice with the Grand Priest Eurus, but was unexpectedly summoned to the palace by His Majesty. Elise curtsies to the king, lifting her skirts. This is her first time meeting the king, and she doesn't know why he urgently summoned her. The king seems to have no good impression of Elise either, asking flatly how she wants to hold her coming-of-age ceremony. Although this is unprecedented, the king hopes to hold Elise's coming-of-age ceremony in the palace. Because he's heard rumors that the crown prince especially cherishes Helena, a commoner, and looks down on Elise. This is tantamount to insulting Duke Mion, and Duke Mion is very angry about it. The initial engagement between the crown prince and Elise was a political card played by the king to ally with the noble faction. Therefore, by holding Elise's coming-of-age ceremony in the palace, the king wants to declare to the outside world that there's nothing wrong with this marriage. Elise doesn't argue against this, figuring it's best not to waste words since it will be as the king wishes anyway. Then the king starts talking to Elise about Helena, saying there are rumors the crown prince is very close to her. Elise explains that because Helena is the daughter of the crown prince's wet nurse, they've played together since childhood. Although the king now looks like a kindly old grandfather, he's actually a terrifying person capable of killing his own son. He once executed the first crown prince on charges of attempted rebellion, without any evidence. The reason the implicated empress was able to survive was because she was pregnant with the current crown prince. The king asks Elise if she's jealous of Helena. If it were the Elise from the novel, she would definitely use this chance to complain. But the current Elise just answers decisively, not jealous. The king tells her to come closer. Elise lifts her skirts and walks over, and they talk face to face. The king holds Elise's hand and says, more important than love is the power and status that man can bring her. He and her father have made an agreement that she will definitely become the crown princess. When that time comes, the palace will be filled with her people, and her future child will become the crown prince. It sounds like he's coaxing Elise, but he's actually saying, Elise, you must become the crown princess. This is the royal power's threat to her. Elise can only answer that she'll keep it in mind, but the king has picked the wrong person. The current Elise is a stranger from another world. Never mind her family's death, even the entire empire has nothing to do with her. Nominally, Elise is still the crown prince's fiancée, so since she's here she should go see him. On second thought, maybe not. She just got indoctrinated with those outdated ideas about marrying well by the king. If the crown prince annoys her too, she's afraid she won't be able to control her expression. Just then, a hand grabs her from behind. This black-haired, green-eyed woman is the only daughter of a noble duke family. However, in her past life she was just an ordinary 21st century college student. Elise had just walked out of the palace when someone grabbed her shoulder from behind. Elise angrily pushes them away, turns around and sees Helena has fallen to the ground. She scolds Helena for startling her, asking how she could run around so casually in the sacred palace. Helena explains she just saw Elise and wanted to say hello. Elise feels exasperated, thinking, couldn't you just call out? Why do something so thoughtless? Unexpectedly, Helena responds, the crown prince quite likes this. Elise just feels a headache coming on. Is she an idiot? She sees Helena's hand is injured and quickly helps her up. Helena says it's nothing, she'll just go to the royal physician for treatment. Elise is confused, how could the royal physician who treats the royal family treat your wound? But Helena says, that royal physician really cares for me. Originally Elise was worried she might be charged with a crime for making Helena get hurt. Now it seems she worried for nothing. She turns and strides away, with Helena chasing after her, thinking she made Elise angry. Elise suddenly pauses, wondering why Helena is still calling her by name. Elise tells Helena that according to etiquette, as the daughter of a duke she doesn't need to be polite to a palace maid like her. But despite this, she still maintains proper manners towards Helena because the empress and crown prince dote on her so much. Helena also becomes nervous, quickly saying she just wanted to become closer with Elise, since they're friends. But for Elise, she doesn't need such fake friends. Helena is the protagonist of the novel. Her memories only involve the crown prince and Aeson. If she really considered Elise a friend, why are there no memories about Elise? So Elise says to Helena, let's end our friendship then. Helena falls silent, unable to accept this sudden end to their friendship. Suddenly, the crown prince comes over and grabs Elise's hand. He says sarcastically, you really haven't changed at all, no, you've become even more shameless. Elise retorts, for people of high status, this is a virtue. The crown prince glares angrily, you dare mention status in front of me? Elise says calmly, it's precisely because it's me that I can discuss status with you, because we're engaged. The crown prince rages, a mere engagement, I can completely break it off. Even if it's not you, there are many women who could become my fiancée. Elise shakes off the crown prince's hand, sneering, are you saying the king plans to do that too? The crown prince continues to mock, all you know how to do is flatter the king, right? Seeing things escalating, Helena quickly tries to stop the crown prince, saying it's all her fault and Elise was just teaching her manners. The crown prince then notices Helena's injured hand and asks what happened. A maid suddenly appears, pointing at Elise and saying she saw her push Helena. Fearing things would get worse, she called for the crown prince. Elise is speechless, thinking, yes, I did push her, but why doesn't the maid mention that Helena startled me first? The crown prince angrily walks towards Elise. Helena tries but fails to stop him. With a crisp sound, the crown prince's hand lands on Elise's cheek. This woman was originally an ordinary college student who accidentally transported into the role of the crown prince's fiancée. But the arrogant crown prince hates her deeply and has fallen for another woman, Helena. On this day, the crown prince learns that Elise hurt Helena. He flies into a rage and slaps Elise across the face. Elise can't believe it. Did she really just get slapped? The crown prince says self-righteously, you hurt my person first, so I have to hurt you once too. That's fair. Elise touches her reddening cheek and thinks, how is this fair? It would be better to let Helena hit me herself. She's furious. Although she saw this scene in the novel, experiencing it herself makes her want to curse, even thinking of slapping him back. But she decides against it. If she gets thrown in prison for this, she might never be able to go back. To avoid suspicion, she needs to play the role of Elise well. The crown prince is about to leave with Helena. Elise speaks up, saying the crown prince is engaged to the Mion ducal family, not to her personally. The crown prince looks surprised. Elise continues, her marriage partner isn't you, but the royal family. So no matter how much the crown prince dislikes her, he will end up marrying her. The naive Elise thought the crown prince would ultimately choose her, but the crown prince just laughs. He says sarcastically, not long ago you told me you wanted to marry me because you loved me. Is this your true intention? Elise is mentally screaming, not expecting that Elise to have said such things. Did the Elise in the novel truly love the crown prince? But in the latter half of the novel, Helena said Elise's feelings weren't love. But neither Helena nor the current Elise understood the real Elise. If that Elise truly loved the crown prince, she still wants to respect those feelings. So she answers, I loved you before, but not anymore. The crown prince can't believe the woman who once begged for his love is now saying she doesn't love him. Elise continues, saying she mentioned the royal family to remind the crown prince that it's not her who wants this engagement. It's the marriage her father and the king want to arrange. If you don't want to be engaged, you should talk to the king directly, not take it out on me. Finally she says, I'm afraid our scene here has already reached the king's ears. Then she bids farewell and leaves. She returns to her carriage and wearily tells her attendant to go home. But the attendant says Aeson is in the carriage. Elise feels exhausted. The handsome Aeson greets Elise warmly. The next moment he sees her face and freezes. Elise says not to mind her cheek, it has nothing to do with him. She asks Aeson if he has some business with her. Aeson states his purpose. Regarding the night appointment ceremony, his family has some questions they want to ask Duke Mion, so he's hitching a ride in her carriage. Elise then asks why he's not going on his next adventure. Aeson explains that on his previous adventure he killed the dragon, the mother of nature, so he plans to lay low for a while. Regarding the dragon, Elise doesn't recall anything from the novel's plot. The novel only wrote that Aeson returned because he missed Helena. It seems there's more to the story. When Aeson was born, the Grand Priest prophesied he would become a dragon slayer. His family was already a general's household, so because of that prophecy Aeson had to undergo extremely harsh training from childhood. The novel's plot begins when Aeson returns to the palace after slaying the dragon, of course because he falls in love with the novel's heroine Helena. Originally raised as a tool for slaying dragons, he instinctively falls for Helena who treats him like a normal person. That's the novel's setup. Could it be that Aeson being set up as a dragon slayer has other reasons? There's still some distance from the palace to home, so Elise asks Aeson to tell more of his story. This woman is the crown prince's fiancée. Not long ago, she was harshly slapped by the crown prince. She also encountered Aeson, the hero, who will hate her for life in the future. Elise and Aeson are sharing a carriage. She asks him to tell more about his story. Aeson looks at Elise in surprise. Previously, she had always been indifferent towards him, but now she's actively showing interest. Regardless of her reasons, he won't refuse a lady's request. So he starts telling Elise about his dragon-slaying experience. Born into a general's family, he was prophesied to be a dragon slayer from birth. Because of this, he underwent extremely arduous training to slay the dragon, never slacking off for a single day. Sometimes he would complain, wondering if everyone would be happier if he just disappeared. Although he knew he would go to slay the dragon, he didn't know when that would be. To make himself stronger, he started wandering around. Everyone treated him as a tool for slaying dragons. Only Helena gave him warmth. Like an adventure from a fairy tale, he crossed mountains and seas to finally see the dragon. The dragon's massive body stood there like a giant boulder. Laughably, only after seeing the dragon did he realize that what he had always feared was his own fate. He wanted to live, wanted to escape, was full of resentment for all of this. Perhaps he felt this was his last chance. But the dragon's words shocked Aeson. The dragon actually welcomed his arrival, seemingly having expected him to come. In fact, the dragon was the true prophet. It had manipulated the priest to end its own life. In other words, the dragon slayer was the dragon's own prophecy. Aeson's life had been used as its sacrifice. What it did to die went against the laws of causality, but in the end it paid the appropriate price. With a huge roar, the dragon's flesh was torn apart. Only a beating heart was left waiting for Aeson to pierce. He raised his sword without hesitation and pierced the dragon's heart. With that, the Earth's axis began to shake violently, and he gained a new life. After hearing the story, Elise thinks it's good, but hard to empathize with. However, the part about the dragon manipulating the priest to die deeply intrigues her. Elise asks Aeson, who was the priest manipulated by the dragon? Also, what does it mean to go against the laws of causality? She feels this might be a clue to her returning to her original world. Aeson tells her the priest who prophesied for him as a child was Priest Mesius. He's elderly now and has reportedly returned to his countryside home. As for the laws of causality, he doesn't know either. The dragon only answered his questions and didn't explain what fate is. Elise feels a bit disappointed. It seems she'll have to stop here again. Asking more questions might raise suspicion, so she'll have to investigate on her own to find the answers. This beautiful woman's past life was just an ordinary college student. She mysteriously transported into a novel and became the villainous rival. Now she's chatting with Asen, who secretly loves the female lead. After finishing his story, Asen thinks their relationship has become closer and tells her to soften her tone and manner towards him. Elise is immediately speechless. As expected of someone who likes Helena, he's just as self-important as her. Elise tiredly says they're not that close, and besides, he's not someone she can treat casually. Asen hears this and becomes unhappy, but he can't refute her. He looks like a poor little puppy that's been scolded, but he's not really a little puppy, and has no effect on Elise at all. After a bumpy journey, the carriage finally arrives at Duke Mion's mansion. Asen gets out of the carriage and gentlemanly extends his hand to Elise. Elise reluctantly reaches out her hand. Just as she's about to leave, Asen calls out to her. He tells Elise not to blame the crown prince and Helena. They've been pampered by everyone in the palace, so they're a bit immature. Elise angrily replies, they're not children anymore. They can't use immaturity as an excuse to be so willful, can they? Then she shakes off Asen's hand and politely bids farewell. The maid Emma sees Elise's swollen cheek and cries out in horror, what happened to your face? Elise tells her not to make a fuss, she's fine. Emma wraps a hot-boiled egg and gently presses it against her red and swollen cheek, saying sympathetically, we need to reduce the swelling quickly. Otherwise, the Duke will be worried when he sees it during dinner. Elise looks puzzled. Emma explains that Elise hasn't dined with the Duke for a long time. Although she's gradually getting used to playing the role of Elise, the Duke is still difficult to deal with. Her desire to return grows stronger. She really doesn't like the elaborate etiquette of this world. In the evening, dinner time arrives. At the enormous table, there are only two of them, creating an awkward atmosphere. Elise can't help but steal a glance at her father. Seemingly noticing Elise's gaze, the Duke puts down the food in his hand and speaks softly, are you sure you don't want to appoint a knight? Elise states that the family's knights are enough. The Duke tells her that if she doesn't have a special reason, she should participate in the appointment ceremony. Because knights can go places she can't go, can do things she can't ask anyone else to do, and will absolutely never reveal anything. Someone who can die in her place if things are discovered. Her father is telling her to bring back such a person. Hearing this, Elise feels a bit creeped out. Perhaps for the previous cunning Elise, she really needed such a knight. It's not strange for the Duke to say these things, as he understands his daughter. However, Elise always feels like these words seem to be directed at the current fake Elise. No matter how she imitates, she's ultimately not the real Elise. Even subtle habits, preferences, and even tastes have changed. How could parents who have raised her for a lifetime not notice? But should she apologize? Something like, sorry bro, about your daughter's body. But if she tells the truth, will the Duke drive her away? Will he ask where the real Elise is, or will he torture her as a witch? Thinking of this, Elise feels her whole body trembling, even more terrifying than being discovered by Eurus. She feels like she owes them a debt. At this moment, the Duke stands up and slowly walks towards her. With hair as beautiful as the night sky, skin as white and luminous as snow, eyes as green as a lush forest, lips the color of roses, this world-class beauty is Elise. The maid Emma has been working at Duke Mion's mansion since Elise was born. She vaguely remembers the first time she held Elise when she was a baby. Snow-white skin, rosy cheeks, just like an angel. At that time, she thought all babies were that beautiful. That's how Emma fell completely in love with Elise. She hoped Elise would become the happiest person in the world. Elise grew day by day and became increasingly beautiful. People say the maid Helena in the palace is the most beautiful. That must be because they haven't seen Elise. Looking at her, one would even want to offer their heart. Emma has become a total fangirl, completely captivated by the angelic Elise. Elise is not only the only daughter of one of the empire's top noble families, but also the crown prince's fiancée. She has always enjoyed the best of everything since childhood. Therefore, there are always many people who envy her. Knowing the crown prince would attend the ball, Elise specially dressed up to go to the palace. But she heard others gossiping about her, saying how dare she have the royal tailor personally make her dress. Does she think she's already the crown princess? She's just a fiancée. Everyone mocks her for always acting so high and mighty. Elise had never been so insulted before. She told Emma to wait for her here, while she went to confront those gossiping people. She thought it was some lowly person speaking so rudely, but it turned out to be children of noble families. How dare you speak ill of others in the sacred palace, they're quite bold. Slandering the crown prince's fiancé is no different from insulting the royal family. What would happen if the king found out about this? Back then, Elise would never try to please those who disliked her. After her speech, those gossipers apologized one after another. On the way back to the city that evening, Elise sat in the carriage, looking unperturbed on the surface, but it wasn't so in reality. Emma, sitting opposite Elise, felt heartbroken for her. If only she could be happy, she truly deserved happiness. That night, Emma couldn't help but speak up, wanting to go directly to the Marquis to report what happened today. Elise replied it wasn't necessary, only by standing up for herself would those around her not be bullied. She didn't want to see others oppressing her servants because of their dislike for her. Since Elise was officially recognized as the Crown Prince's fiancée, the royal family began teaching her strict court etiquette and palace affairs. At that time, Elise barely had time to sleep, but she still persisted in going to the palace, not missing a single day. Although rumors said the Crown Prince disliked Elise, she never mentioned it, and Elise was also slowly sinking. One day, Emma accidentally discovered Elise crying alone. Elise had never cried before, even when others called her vicious and pointed fingers at her, she would never shed tears in public. Emma ran over and draped the blanket she was about to tidy up over her, telling her to get up quickly to avoid catching a cold. Elise said with a choked voice, "Is love that important? Can one become the empress just by smiling at the emperor? But the position of empress isn't something that can be maintained by love alone. The empress is supposed to assist the emperor, that's what the teacher taught me. I've tried so hard, he doesn't have to love me, but at least acknowledge me, right?" Helena clearly doesn't know anything, she just knows how to smile, but everyone likes her. This woman who transmigrated into the novel only wanted to go home. When she first became Elise, all she could think about was how to return to her original world. What she didn't notice was that some of her subtle changes had already been detected by her maid Emma. For example, she no longer tapped the table with her ring finger when thinking. She also no longer drank a glass of water when getting up in the morning. The habit of biting her nails had disappeared too. Even her tone, walking posture, and habits were no longer those of the Elise Miss that she knew. Emma wanted to ask who she was, but was it appropriate to ask that? She would be thrown out as a madwoman, right? Emma could only worry silently. Where had Miss Elise gone? So she asked the current Elise, "Do you remember falling off a horse and getting injured when you first learned to ride at 6 years old?" Elise calmly replied, "It wasn't at 6, but at 15. Hearing Elise's answer, Emma felt that she hadn't lost her memory, just some small habits had changed, but she still remembered important things clearly. Elise knew Emma was testing her, and pretended to be angry, telling her not to say such nonsense anymore. That night, Emma used a pen to draw out her inner thoughts in a small notebook. If Elise's body had been taken over by an evil witch, even if she asked for help from those around her, people would definitely burn her alive, because this world doesn't allow witches. This won't work, Emma thought with a troubled face. What could she do for Elise? At this moment, a sound came from outside the window. Emma turned her head and saw Elise outside. She was worried Elise might be in danger, because during this period, Elise had encountered quite a few accidents. Once she was even stabbed by a strange person, fortunately not fatally. Thinking of this, she suddenly stood up. She didn't even have time to put on her shoes before hurrying out to look for Elise. Emma raised the lamp and looked around. She clearly saw her walk this way. How come she couldn't find her? Emma panicked, she absolutely couldn't lose her. Finally, she saw Elise under a tree. Emma softly called out "Miss," and walked towards Elise. At this time, Elise was standing alone stupidly, her figure so lonely and desolate. Emma came in front of her and said, "It's dark and dangerous outside, let's go back quickly." But Elise said softly, "I want to go home, I miss my mom." The scene before her shocked Emma. Does Elise have sleepwalking disorder? And her mother? Elise interrupted her thoughts and continued, "I want to eat the spicy cabbage fried rice my mom makes." Emma stepped back in disbelief. At this moment she finally understood. The young lady before her was not the honest, arrogant, and lovely Miss Elise, but a poor soul forced to wander in someone else's dream, right? The next second, Elise burst into tears. She really wanted to go home. Emma looked at the out-of-control Elise, feeling very troubled in her heart. She discovered this fact too late. Emma held Elise's hand tightly and comforted her softly. "I will definitely help you, everything will be alright." This sad Elise reminded Emma of the first time she saw Elise cry. At that time, Emma wished so much that she was a witch, wanting to immediately bring down a heavy rain to hide Elise's tears. She hugged Elise tightly and said regretfully, "If only I could fulfill your wish." All she could do was pray for Elise. However, Elise's wish at that time was to disappear from this world forever. This woman was the daughter of a marquis, pampered since childhood. When she woke up, maids would bring food to her mouth, she just needed to open it. A seemingly carefree life, but Elise felt extremely uncomfortable. Because she had transmigrated, she didn't belong here. The commotion that happened in the palace that day was spread by word of mouth throughout the social circle in an instant. What's more annoying is that in a few days, there will be a grand knighting ceremony, and as the crown prince's fiancée, she naturally has to attend. Early in the morning, jewelers came to promote their wares. "This necklace is custom made for you." The jeweler's mouth continuously output flattery. Elise had no interest at all, looking indifferent. She thought to herself, everyone must be celebrating the fact that I was slapped by the crown prince, right? At this time, Elise caught sight of some maids whispering to each other not far away. Everyone was very curious why Elise hadn't made any move yet. If it were before, she would have cried to the king by now. Another maid immediately chimed in. Not only that, she would have gone straight to Helena's residence to make a scene. Hearing their discussion, Elise found it amusing. Why go find Helena? It would be better to find the crown prince, give him a club while he's sleeping. Although she really wanted to do that, she suddenly remembered the scene of eating with her father the other day. Her father walked up to her and patted her shoulder. Since then, Elise missed her family even more, perhaps because the Marquis's hand was about the same size as her dad's. Her relationship with her family in the original world was neither good nor bad. To be honest, she had once grown tired of everything at home. The family was always complaining about having no money, so she had long given up on her dreams. She wanted to go to a music academy but was opposed by her parents. During university she worked part-time while studying, the rest relied on scholarships. The pressure of her parents' expectations also weighed heavily on her. Since they had expectations for her, why didn't they care about her? She felt so wronged. Every time she returned home, Mom would casually ask, "Have you eaten?" If she replied that she had, there would be no further conversation. But it was different with her brother. When he wanted to eat mixed noodles, even if there were no noodles at home, Dad would go out to buy noodles, and then Mom would make it for him. She hated her parents who were infinitely tolerant of her brother. On Dad's birthday, she was busy with work and didn't go back. Mom called, saying Dad missed her, asking her to come back and make her favorite spicy braised chicken chunks. However, she perfunctorily said, "I'll come back when I have time in the future." She never liked spicy braised chicken chunks, and the family didn't even remember what she liked. She thought she could see them again whenever she wanted. Perhaps that's why she treated them even more coldly, because she knew her parents would always wait for her. Come to think of it, her brother was the type of child who knew how to act cute, and often helped parents with housework. And she, if they could meet again, she would definitely treat them better, not be so cold anymore. The next day, Emma told her to go to the palace, to see the clothes she would wear for the knighting ceremony. Emma looked expectant, but Elise couldn't be happy at all, because she really didn't want to go. The crown prince slapped her and didn't receive any punishment. Of course, he wouldn't feel sorry either. Sitting in the carriage, Elise felt like a cow being dragged to the slaughterhouse. Looking out the window, the weather was really nice today. Everyone on the street looked so happy. But why did only she have to endure? What did she do wrong? Why did she have to go see that guy who slapped her? And still smile at him? The more she thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. Elise angrily told the coachman to stop. She suddenly opened the carriage door. After getting off, she started running wildly. She wanted to shake off the knights. Elise hid in a corner thinking, why not just hide forever? If she fled for a lifetime, would this world give up on her? Then she could go home? She silently pleaded in her heart, let her go, doesn't this world only need Helena anyway? At this time, the coachman and guards found her. She was startled, took off her shoes and ran. She didn't want to be caught, didn't want to be dragged to the palace. Transmigrating into a novel to become the evil female supporting character and becoming the crown prince's fiancée. Now she wants to escape to get rid of the crown prince. She avoided the guard search. Just as she was about to find a place to hide, suddenly a hand grabbed her. It turned out to be a little boy. The boy asked if she wanted to hide. Although Elise didn't know who he was, she still nodded. The boy grinned at her. Then he whistled a few times. At this time, many children came out from all directions. They blocked the way between the guards and Elise. The little boy took Elise's hand and told her his friends would delay them, now he would take her to hide. Elise didn't hesitate, letting the little boy pull her along as they ran. Soon, the two arrived at the little boy's home, panting. Elise had finally escaped the guards' pursuit. The little boy suddenly reached out and asked Elise for a fee, saying, "You saw me call a lot of children just now, right? Don't think you can brush me off with snacks or something." Elise looked at the little boy in surprise. She searched around. It wasn't that she didn't want to pay, but her dress simply had no pockets. The little boy looked a bit disappointed. Elise also saw through the little boy's thoughts and took off her earrings to give to him. She didn't forget to remind him to be careful when using it. Even if he's considered a thief, it's not her business. The little boy's eyes lit up. He quickly took them and said there's no need to worry about that, it's their specialty. Suddenly there was a commotion outside. Elise thought the guards had found her so quickly. The little boy also quickly told Elise to hide. He hid Elise in the wardrobe and instructed her not to make a sound no matter what. Elise listened to the conversation outside from the wardrobe and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately it wasn't the guards who came. It was the little boy's brother who had returned. She peeked out through the crack in the wardrobe. She saw a man talking to the little boy. This man had no special features, typical of an extra character. The man's face suddenly became serious. He asked the little boy in a low voice, "Who did you bring home?" The little boy didn't want his brother to know, and said stiffly, "With this dusty house, who could I bring back?" The man sighed helplessly. He turned and walked towards the wardrobe. At this time, Elise also sensed something was wrong. She covered her mouth trying not to make a sound. She screamed in her heart, "Don't come over." With a creaking sound, the wardrobe door was opened. The man also saw Elise hiding inside and quickly told her to come out. Elise came out helplessly. The man suddenly turned his head to look at the little boy. The little boy was startled. The man reached out his hand. Without the man saying anything, the little boy knew what he meant. He tightly gripped the earrings in his hand, then reluctantly handed them to his brother. The man stuffed the earrings back to Elise, and the little boy's voice came from behind, "Don't give it back, that's what the sister gave me for saving her." Elise also spoke up, "It's true. He saved me, that was the fee I gave him, not something that was stolen." The man replied coldly, "I know," and then walked towards his brother. He stroked his brother's head and told him, "Getting involved with nobles never leads to anything good, don't you know that?" Elise looked at the earrings in her hand and threw them directly at the man. The man reacted quickly and steadily caught the earrings flying towards him. Elise told him, "It will be more troublesome if you don't take it." Because the reason she gave the earrings also included hush money. Both hush money and to exchange for more information. She asked the man to recommend a reliable information guild. The little boy excitedly wanted to speak but was stopped by his brother. Elise knew the man was in a difficult position, because in this world, it was harmful for commoners to get involved with nobles. Sure enough, the man said a bit embarrassedly, "Children don't understand anything, I'm sorry for bothering you. But no matter what you want, we can't satisfy you. So please take pity on us poor and incompetent people." Then he bowed to Elise and asked her to leave here as soon as possible. But Elise wanted to find the Mesias priest Yasin had mentioned, so the dismissal didn't work on her. She knew the man in front of her must be a smart person, which was just what she wanted. Then she said playfully, "If I go out now, your family will definitely think you kidnapped me." Then she sat down on a stool and continued, "Then not only you two. Even those children who helped block the way just now will be implicated. Is that what you really want? On the contrary, if you agree to my request, I can also help you turn the situation around. Just say you saved me from misfortune, what do you choose?" The little boy pulled at his brother's clothes as if seeking his approval. The man said helplessly, "Looks like there's only one choice." Elise continued, "I need an information guild that keeps secrets well and is capable. The most important condition is absolute confidentiality." At this time, the little boy shouted, "Sanchi's father in the back street is an information broker, and he's a very honest and reliable person." Elise was very satisfied after hearing this, planning to have him find out the location of Priest Mesias. The boy asked her for a commission fee. Elise patted her pocketless dress, saying, "You still want a deposit? So confident? It could be very troublesome if you can't find him." The little boy nodded confidently. The man, however, looked very uneasy. Elise looked at his sour face and said, "You look very unwilling." The man asked her, "Did you deliberately choose us?" Elise explained, "Before today, I didn't even know you existed, and I really was being chased." The man continued, "Nobles don't order strangers they've just met to find someone. Because no matter how much you emphasize confidentiality, there's always a risk of leakage." Elise walked closer to the man, "So you're suspecting me?" Elise brought her piercing eyes close to him. "If a mouse threatens to bite someone, do you think humans would be afraid of it? Just kill the mouse and dismiss all the rumors as bullshit, don't you?" Elise knew this man was well aware of this fact, which is why he was desperately trying to keep this child away from her. Hearing Elise's words, the little boy tightly hugged his brother's arm. Elise gently stroked the little boy's hair and softly told him, "Don't worry, as long as you don't leak the secret, no one will get hurt." The man said, "You nobles don't see us as humans at all." To dispel the man's concerns, Elise could only continue, "Not all nobles are the same." Elise thought to herself, "If you ask me why I can be so cruel? It's because to me, they're not real people. Everything now is just fictional characters in a novel. And everything I cherish is in the original world. To get these back, she was even willing to die. So she simply had no time to sympathize with these fictional characters in a novel. She spoke calmly, "Can you take me back now?" At this point, she had figured it out and no longer intended to hide, but to investigate the so-called fate. Perhaps by going against the law of causality, she could also change her fate. The man looked at Elise walking past him. She wasn't wearing shoes. So he took off his own shoes and helped Elise put them on. Elise anxiously asked him, "You don't seem to have extra shoes. What will you do after giving your shoes to me?" The man replied, "A lady can't walk barefoot." After helping Elise put on the shoes, he walked over to open the door. Elise clenched her fists tightly. "Yeah, I'm not even afraid of death. What's the big deal about being slapped by the crown prince? It's not a big deal. Why should I hide from him? I might as well kill the crown prince," she thought viciously. If the law of causality can live in this world, what would happen if the male lead was lost? It's really exciting to think about. This woman is so embarrassing. She stumbled and fell right in front of the man. With a flushed face, she hadn't expected to encounter such an embarrassing situation. The man was the great priest Huilis, who not only possessed divine power but could also see the color of souls. And the color of this woman's soul was one he had never seen before. Going back to a day earlier, Elise, who had originally planned to escape, returned safely to Marquis Mion's mansion. Faced with the servant's concerns, she said she just felt stuffy and wanted to go out alone for some fresh air. Tired from a long day, she couldn't wait to return to her room. Then she soaked in the bathtub to relieve fatigue. She began to organize her thoughts. She must see Huilis as soon as possible, this way she could find more clues about this world and herself. But remembering that day when she met Huilis on the street, she had so strongly denied her identity. Now she had to admit she wasn't from this world. It was quite embarrassing. How to break this awkwardness? Never mind, she'll just say there were too many people at the time so she couldn't admit it. Early the next morning, Elise got into the carriage heading to the palace. Upon arriving at the palace, she found it much more bustling this time, and to prevent her from escaping again, many nights had been arranged. The palace secretary told Elise that the king was out inspecting today, so he wasn't in the palace. And the crown prince was handling state affairs on behalf of the king, so she would have to try on the dress by herself. Elise politely responded, "It's a pity to have chosen the wrong day," but inwardly she was secretly relieved. Thankfully she had escaped yesterday. This was a purple floor-length bowl-shaped gown, looking regal and elegant. Everyone around was praising it. The costume designer couldn't help but sigh. The crown prince should be envied for marrying such a beautiful wife. Elise didn't care about these compliments. She just thought the dress's train was too long. Wouldn't it be difficult for the maids to wash? But she had no time to worry about others now. The designer told her the dress would be tidied up and sent to the marquis's mansion before dark. Elise hadn't been to the palace for a long time and planned to go for a walk, but her feet hurt from running barefoot yesterday. But what worried her more now was how to meet Huilis in this vast palace. If only she could suddenly appear like the crown prince or Helena. Thinking this, she actually saw Huilis. They were quite far apart, but Elise didn't want to lose this chance to meet. So she started running, which resulted in the scene at the beginning. Huilis asked if she was alright. Elise shouted, "Do I look alright to you?" At this moment, she felt terrible. Helena probably never experienced such an embarrassing situation, right? After all, everyone was always eager to find her. Huilis didn't respond, but used his divine power to heal the wound on her leg. Indeed, this man had the ability to change the law of causality. Just as he was about to leave, Elise grabbed him. "You've seen me before, right? You asked who I was then." Huilis turned back. "Yes, I did ask." He held Elise's hand and helped her up. His gaze couldn't leave Elise, not because of her outward beauty, but as if he was peering through this shell at something. Elise let go of Huilis's hand. She looked around, seeing no one nearby. Only then did she feel safe to ask him, "Who do I look like?" Huilis said he couldn't see the shape of souls, but he could see their colors. And there was no one in this world who had a color like hers. He thought it was just his imagination, but it seems that wasn't the case. Elise replied, "I didn't have time to tell you honestly that day." "That's right, as the great priest saw, I come from another world." This woman who was forced to transmigrate into a novel, was now anxiously asking, "Can I return to my original world?" She's done so much to get back to her old world, even to the extent of self-harm. Huilis told her, "No outlander can leave this world alive." This news was like a bolt from the blue. It felt so strange. She thought she didn't care about dying before, but it seems that wasn't the case. Elise didn't believe it. There must be a way, like a dimensional gate. Huilis looked sad. He didn't know how to answer Elise. She persisted in asking, "If there really is no way to leave alive, then how could I come to this world?" "So there must be a way, you just don't know it." She shook Huilis vigorously. "Please think of a way for me. You're the great priest, you can find historical records when you return to the temple, so?" Before Elise could finish, Huilis interrupted her, "If you're not from this world, then it means the original soul in this body must have disappeared." This news was even more unacceptable to Elise. She couldn't come to terms with it for a long time. Huilis continued, "The reason you could safely come to this world is because the soul in this body had already died. That's the law of life. In other words, if you want to return to your original world, it's only possible if the soul in that world dies. To be precise, the soul in your former body, but aren't you here? The body you left in that world is probably just an empty shell without a soul." Elise looked incredulous. Huilis calmly told her, "There's no soul left in that world that can die in your place. So you have no way to return alive. You'd better accept fate and live well in her place." Hearing this, Elise was even more shocked. Accept fate and live in her place? At this moment, her gaze was sharp. Does this man know what kind of life Elise had? Elise didn't have her own life at all. She felt a pang in her heart. How many more times would she have to hurt herself before there could be an end? Would there be an end? Would she break down first before that? If she had to accept someone else's fate, rather than being the crown princess, she'd rather make friends with witches and go on adventures. That's more her style. Then she told Huilis, "No, I don't care about any laws. I'm going back, even if I can't return alive." With that, she turned and left, leaving him anxious. Huilis told her to cherish the life given by God. Elise stopped in her tracks. "God? My life was given by my parents, not God. It's the same for you, great priest." Huilis watched Elise's departing figure and prayed silently, "Then may God bless you." Elise left gracefully. Who cares if he'll treat her as a heretic? Anyway, I'm not from this world. He can't denounce me as a traitor. At least the Huilis I know definitely wouldn't do that. Elise now felt more desperate. She had met Elise but gained nothing. She looked haggard and felt dead tired. She slowly walked towards the carriage and suddenly stopped. Helena was standing right in front of her at this moment. Elise looked impatient. What is she here for? Helena stammered and couldn't say a word. Elise simply strode past her. Helena suddenly grabbed Elise's hand. Elise asked her what's wrong. Helena pitifully told her she wanted to ask for her forgiveness. Elise looked confused and asked her what she meant. Helena said softly, about the crown prince slapping her. Elise couldn't help but facepalm. It wasn't you who slapped me, so you don't need to apologize or feel guilty. She turned to leave, but Helena was still holding her tightly. Even if you don't forgive me, it's okay. Even though I didn't personally slap you, you were slapped because of me. Elise didn't know what to say at this moment. Helena continued, I should have stopped the crown prince that day, and I should have clarified that it was my little maid who misunderstood. But I didn't do anything, just stupidly watched you leave. This is clearly my fault. So I'm sorry, please forgive me. Is this woman a kind-hearted white lotus or a scheming bitch? Helena held Elise's hand apologizing, begging for her forgiveness. Elise looked at the woman before her. Her straightforwardness was endearing. But instinct told her Helena's kindness was a facade. If so, she could hate her without restraint. Elise's gaze fell on the hands holding hers. She couldn't help but sigh. Why are they so white and beautiful? Seeing Helena's confusion, Elise said directly, I mean your hands. You're a palace maid, but your hands are whiter and more delicate than those of ordinary noble ladies. As soon as she finished speaking, Elise understood. Helena probably didn't have time to do rough work like washing clothes and cleaning. Because there were always people around her, everyone loved her. Everyone liked to chat with her. Naturally she was very busy. Elise suddenly felt Helena was very much like one of her classmates. Everyone liked the pretty and friendly girl. Although she liked her too, she could never get close to her. She was kind, but didn't understand the hardships of life, nor did she understand that without experiencing hardships. That's why she could be so innocent, and Helena was just the same. At this moment, some people did more rough work that wasn't originally theirs because of the palace maid Helena. But I won't use them as an excuse to say it's a reason to dislike Helena. Elise brought her thoughts back. She told Helena, I dislike people like you. Then she took back her hand. She said lightly, so there's no need to apologize to me, because I'll continue to dislike you in the future. Then she turned and left. Elise only realized at this moment that after transmigrating to this world and becoming a noble, she finally understood herself. She was just a person with a bad personality and hard to get along with. So Helena, someone like you who never harbors hatred towards others can completely dislike me too. The next day, the morning light slowly pulled back the curtain, thin mist slowly streamed through the gaps. Elise was struggling to put on the corset with the help of her maids. She really couldn't take it anymore. Even without the corset she was already thin enough. Finally, she put on the evening gown from yesterday. The maids looking at their dressed-up lady all exclaimed, "You're really too beautiful." At this time, the palace also sent a carriage. Elise reluctantly went out. Today was the knighting ceremony. Although the Marquis told her to hire new knights to find someone who could do things for her without revealing it. But she had already made up her mind to die. If she hired knights and died later, she didn't want them to bear the guilt of not protecting her well. The noble knights like beautiful ladies so much, she'll let them have a look, then quickly come back. At this time, she arrived at the palace and politely greeted the crown prince. "Good morning, your highness." Looking at the reluctant crown prince, Elise knew he came out to welcome her, probably on the king's orders. As everyone was admiring Elise's beauty, she reluctantly extended one hand, thinking to herself, I really don't want to hold this guy's hand first thing in the morning. The crown prince's face twitched, looking at Elise's sour expression. He also looked like he wanted to get angry. Seeing the crown prince make no move, Elise said lazily, "Do you want to keep standing here?" But she was thinking, as long as a man was handsome, whatever he do is right, but this guy is an exception. Suddenly the crown prince grabbed her hand and pulled her forward with big strides. Elise was furious. This guy is doing it on purpose, right? Suddenly she stopped. The crown prince looked back at her speechlessly, seeming to ask, "What are you doing?" Elise was expressing her dissatisfaction. Before she could finish speaking, the crown prince pulled her over. Then he gave her a princess carry. Elise angrily accused him, "You're being disrespectful to me." The crown prince calmly replied, "How is this disrespectful? Isn't this what you wanted, for me to carry you?" Hearing this, Elise really wanted to slap him. "You're so narcissistic, put me down quickly." The crown prince told her not to struggle, it would make both of them look bad. "Since you're marrying into the royal family anyway, just go in like this. Although I don't know what you said to the king, he personally instructed me to take good care of you." Elise said, "Are you blaming me for this?" The crown prince responded, "You're reacting so strongly, it seems it's true." Elise couldn't be bothered to argue with him anymore, silently complaining, "Why are you taking it out on me after being lectured by your own dad?" Elise suddenly reached out and pinched the back of the crown prince's neck. He let go of her in pain, and Elise was dropped. She pretended to look pitiful. "If you were tired, you could have told me, why force yourself?" It's my fault for being too slow to notice, can you forgive me? The Crown Prince looked at Elise in surprise, as he realized what was happening and wanted to explain something. Elise suddenly stood up and shouted, "Where are the attendants? Hurry and bring a parasol. On such an important day, who will be responsible if the Crown Prince faints?" At this time, a maid rushed over, "The parasol is here." The next second, it was shielding the Crown Prince's head. Elise pretended to be anxious and concerned about the Crown Prince. "Are you feeling better?" The beautiful girl shining before him was the Crown Prince's fiancée. At this moment, however, she was preparing to teach this arrogant Crown Prince a lesson. Elise took his arm. "Please smile. Didn't you say the king personally ordered you to take good care of me?" The Crown Prince looked displeased and said darkly, "You're going too far, relying on the king's favor." Elise smiled brightly. "Then why don't you ask the king to break off our engagement and marry Helena instead? If the king doesn't agree, you can also throw a tantrum." Behind the Crown Prince's line of sight, Elise withdrew her smiling face, her gaze somewhat sharp. "Or do you want me to kneel and beg with you?" The Crown Prince fell silent after hearing this. Elise secretly cheered. "You don't even dare to make a sound to your own father. Why do you always take it out on me?" At this time, a maid nearby said, "The pre-ceremony activities are about to begin." Elise immediately changed to a coquettish demeanor. Teased, "If we don't go now, we'll be late." She took the Crown Prince's arm, and they walked towards the ceremony venue. The Crown Prince said angrily, "Don't think the king will always favor you. After all, you have a talent for destroying any last bit of goodwill people might have towards you." Elise calmly replied, "Did you still have a bit of goodwill towards me? How surprising, but I don't have any for you." The pre-ceremony activities went on for a long time. Elise, sitting in the guest seats, was exhausted and felt like she was going to be sick. She couldn't help but stand up, wanting to go out for some fresh air. She walked slowly, soon becoming out of breath. The corset was already uncomfortable enough, and now she had to face the royal family. It was really killing her. Elise wanted to find a place to sit down and rest for a while. Suddenly she heard a commotion. Following the sound, Elise came to a grove. She saw several young nobles bullying a commoner. With several crisp slaps, they knocked the commoner to the ground, stomping hard on his back. They said viciously, "These presumptuous lowborns should be beaten." Watching this scene, Elise immediately understood, this should be a commoner who wanted to become a knight. In this empire, there were only two ways to rise in status, become a knight or become a magic engineer. In the novel, Helena was only able to marry the Crown Prince after clearing her family's false charges and regaining noble status. But what should she do now? They deliberately covered him with cloth. Were they afraid his clothes would get dirty and arouse suspicion? It seems they've been bullying others for a long time. Even if she helped him now, he would only be bullied more severely in the future. Although there were other ways, Elise didn't want to meddle in others' affairs. The voices of the nobles rang out again. They had grabbed the commoner. As the cloth slipped away, Elise finally saw the commoner's face. Wasn't this the older brother of the little boy she met the other day? The woman was witnessing a scene of bullying, and the bullied man also saw her. Elise knew from the man's eyes that he recognized her. Elise began to hesitate. Should she help him? But wouldn't that be meddling? Wouldn't it be seen as cheap sympathy and arrogance from a noble young lady? She recalled the scene where she had threatened the man earlier. It would be contradictory for the woman who had threatened him to now save him from bullying. She didn't want to give him charity-like kindness, as that would only make him more miserable. That's right, after all, it was the child she had made an agreement with, not him. The nobles' bullying continued. In the end, Elise left. The knighting ceremony began. Nobles hire knights from great noble families to form alliances. For them, the knighting ceremony is undoubtedly a perfect opportunity. Everyone in the audience looked uneasy, seeming worried that the knight they had their eye on would be snatched away. Since she hadn't planned to knight anyone anyway, she simply sat in the back. At this time, she accidentally noticed something strange. The knights still waiting to be knighted looked much older than those in front. What was going on? Her attendant, noticing Elise's confusion, explained, "These are knights who weren't chosen in the previous ceremony and had their knighting postponed." Elise asked, puzzled, "What if their knighting keeps getting postponed?" The attendant replied, "The first time might be due to bad luck, but if they keep not being chosen, everyone will assume there's something lacking about them. As time passes and they age, their physical strength naturally declines. They struggle on like this until after 10 years in the order, then give up and become mercenaries. Although being a mercenary can earn more money, it's not the outcome they want in pursuit of honor." Suddenly Elise noticed that man was also in this line. She continued to ask, "Will they be needed as mercenaries?" The attendant answered, "Compared to mercenaries of unknown origins, wealthy commoners prefer mercenaries with clear backgrounds as knights. If it's an impoverished knight of noble birth, their value skyrockets. Employers might even have their daughters marry them to raise their social status." Elise couldn't help but think that for nobles who care so much about face, this would be an absolute nightmare. The attendant now spoke a bit awkwardly. "Last time I said something about romance in front of you, I offended you. Élysée told him to let bygones be bygones. The attendant thanked Élysée for her forgiveness, but still ventured to advise, if there's no special reason, please do knight someone. Élysée was attending the knighting ceremony. Her attendant suddenly knelt and begged her to knight someone, as her choice might save someone. He pleaded desperately, even if you become dissatisfied with the knight later and dismiss him, he would easily be chosen by others. Élysée spoke calmly, so? The attendant continued, they've been constantly training to become knights. Wouldn't it be a shame if they didn't even get a chance? Élysée was a bit surprised, you want me to pity them? The attendant answered seriously, yes, please show them some kindness. Élysée was speechless. Should she save them? Saving someone means taking on responsibility. This would be saving a real, living person. After pondering for a moment, Élysée, standing at the knighting ceremony, pointed her finger towards the man not far away. I want to knight that one. Élysée's determined gaze, the man's incredulous look. He, born a commoner, knelt before Élysée. He became a knight, Élysée's knight. Élysée spoke slowly, under God's watch, can you swear loyalty and obedience to me, Élysée Mion? The man vowed, even if hardships and adversities continue endlessly, I willingly obey. At this moment, there was light in the man's eyes as he continued, no temptation will make me submit. As if Élysée was his savior, radiating brilliant light. Élysée didn't think this had saved the man before her. Even if not chosen by her, he would have continued waiting for other opportunities no matter how many years passed. But she owed him a favor, a kindness so trivial and small it could easily be overlooked. Élysée asked his name. The man answered with a dim gaze, shamefully, I have no name. Élysée fell into thought. She wasn't good at naming either. The scene became awkward for a moment. Élysée stroked his head, from now on, you'll be called Anakin. This is the name she bestowed upon the knight. At this moment, she suddenly remembered a scene from a novel. Surrounded by everyone's hatred, Élysée had only one person, only her black knight who loved her deeply from beginning to end. Élysée had chosen a man and completed his knighting ceremony, intending to leave afterwards. But today's ceremony gathered the entire royal family. The crown prince's fiancée couldn't leave without saying goodbye. She politely greeted the king and crown prince. The king praised Élysée for being beautiful and radiant, saying the royal purple suited her well. Élysée responded neither humbly nor proudly, the royal family had someone personally sew such a beautiful dress. I'm basking in its glory. After some small talk, the king asked her, I heard you originally didn't want to knight anyone. Why did you change your mind? Élysée said with a smile in her eyes, everyone was trying to convince me, so why should I go against the flow? The king roared with laughter, in stark contrast to the queen and crown prince beside him. At this point, Élysée gave the crown prince a look, signaling him to quickly request the king to break off the engagement. The crown prince, however, turned away and took a sip of wine. Élysée couldn't help but grumble inwardly. This guy clearly understood her meaning, he's really unfathomable. Élysée curtsied to the king again, wanting to take her leave. The king naturally agreed readily. Élysée walked slowly, holding up her skirt, unable to resist complaining in her heart, I must take off these high heels as soon as I get in the carriage. At this moment, a voice drifted over. She looked up. Not far away stood Helena and Ashen, seemingly arguing. Élysée remembered that there was such an important plot point at this time. Actually, in the novel, the knighting ceremony wasn't the focus. The focus was that after the ceremony, the hero Ashen vowed to become Helena's knight. At this moment, Helena was questioning Ashen, don't you know a knight's vow can only be made once in a lifetime? Ashen drew his sword and swore, it's precisely because it's only once that I want to vow to you. I, Ashen Carl, swear loyalty and obedience to Helena. Helena tried to stop Ashen, but Ashen continued, Helena, I want to protect you forever. Please allow me to be your knight. Helena stroked Ashen's head, signifying her acceptance. Watching this scene, Élysée couldn't help but sigh, how touching. Of course, it would be even more perfect if the crown prince hadn't witnessed it. It turned out the crown prince was watching from the side, his fists clenched tightly, trembling with anger. He must find it hard to believe that his good friend used the knighting ceremony as an excuse to confess to the woman he loved. She walked towards Helena and Ashen. Is there such a thing as pure friendship in this world that would vow to protect the other for life? If the sword were changed to a ring, this would be a marriage vow. Although Helena was very kind, she wasn't very worldly wise. Hearing footsteps approaching, Helena and Ashen turned back in surprise to see Élysée suddenly appear. Élysée said innocently, did I interrupt you? She slowly walked towards Helena and Ashen. Did I disturb you, Sir Carl? Ashen calmly replied no. Élysée turned to Helena, saying the queen seemed to be looking for her. Only then did Helena react. Before leaving, she didn't forget to thank Élysée and say goodbye to Ashen. The two watched Helena's retreating figure. Elise thought, now the crown prince will probably go find Helena, right? If not for her intervention, a cliché love triangle drama would have unfolded. She glanced at Ashen, carefully reminding him that he needed to pay more attention to his surroundings. Ashen expressed that he didn't understand her meaning. Elise suddenly thought of something. Wasn't Ashen a sword saint? She exclaimed, so you knew all along. Ashen didn't answer. Elise thought he couldn't possibly have not noticed the movements. He still did this knowing that the crown prince and herself were watching from the side. Ashen lightly twirled her hair, playing with it. Why do you look so puzzled? Elise swatted his hand away in disgust. Ashen continued, last time I told you not to blame them, but thinking about it carefully, you seem to have misunderstood the meaning. That was a warning to you. I've made it very clear this time, haven't I? Elise looked confused. Did he think that day she had bullied Helena and that's why she was slapped? It's understandable. After all, in the novel, Elise had tormented Helena for so long. It's comprehensible that Ashen hated Elise so much. Then why not kill Elise early on? Why drag it out and make people so tired? Having figured it out, Elise spoke up, telling him to do it to her. You're holding a sword right now, just use it to stab me. After saying this, Elise moved closer to Ashen, who was now bewildered. Elise wanted to use Ashen's sword to stab herself. Maybe this way she could leave this world? But in the next second, Ashen threw away his sword. The sound of the sword falling to the ground was crisp and loud. Ashen angrily grabbed her hand, demanding to know what she was trying to do. Elise coldly replied, before you warn someone, you must be prepared to kill them. Ashen looked at the woman before him in disbelief, finally managing to say, who are you? Elise walked past him, saying lightly, it's surprising that you ask this. Haven't you always been uninterested in me? In the carriage, Elise and Anakin sat quietly. Just as Ashen didn't understand Elise, she knew nothing about the Black Knight. In the novel, Elise's Black Knight didn't even have a name. His appearance wasn't described in detail either. Standing in the shadows was the only description of him. This man was Elise's only helper, and also the one who loved her deeply. But here, the Black Knight met her first, not Elise. If he doesn't fall in love with her because she's not Elise, then it's still possible he might betray her. Elise closed her eyes tightly. It was really worrying. At this moment, Anakin's voice came, why did you choose me? Elise asked in return, do you have another master you prefer? Anakin said he has no choice, but you do. You're the daughter of Marquis Mion, and also the Crown Prince's fiancée. With such a noble status, why did you choose me among so many knights? I don't think your choice was purely random. Elise stared at the man before her. It was hard to imagine he would fall in love with Elise. Then she impatiently waved her hand. I don't know what the family knights told you, but forget it all. Whatever kindness, salvation, I don't need to hear to know what they said. But I didn't choose you for these grand reasons. She recalled what the Marquis had said, find someone who can do what you can't ask anyone else to do, and who will never reveal it. If things go wrong, who can die in your place? Thinking of this, she said to Anakin, you just need to be able to die for me. Elise had grasped Anakin's weakness, and he couldn't resist her. Therefore, Elise wouldn't give up his life, which is why she chose him. Returning home, Elise collapsed on the bed, thinking that this long day was finally over. She noticed a mirror by the bedside and curiously picked it up. Unexpectedly, the witch Medea appeared in the mirror. She was so startled that she quickly threw the mirror away. Hearing the commotion, Emma hurried in to ask what was wrong. Elise calmed down and said it seemed there was a bug. Emma asked if she needed help dealing with it. Elise hid the mirror behind her back, saying it was fine and dismissing her. After Emma left, Elise looked at the mirror again. What was going on? As soon as she spoke, Medea's displeased voice came through. It seems you've been very busy. Elise suddenly remembered that Medea had told her to carry the mirror with her before. Elise quickly asked if she had found anything. Medea told her, mere humans cannot break the law of causality. Elise didn't understand, asking what this meant. Medea explained, violating the law of causality requires paying a corresponding price. However, human life is too cheap. At least the heart of the dragon, the mother of nature, is needed. Elise was shocked. It was just as Ashen had said. Medea then asked, have you been to the great temple to ask? Is there any way to leave alive? Elise repeated what Huilis had said. Only if the soul in her original world died would it be possible to leave, but that body is now just an empty shell, so it's almost impossible. Medea exclaimed in surprise. She remembered there might be a way to leave without violating the law of causality. This woman had crossed over, to return to her original world. She sought the witch's help. Medea said there might indeed be a way. The law of causality originally arose to fulfill the task life was given by the world. It's the same principle as heroes emerging in chaotic times. Some are born to save the world, some to act or even die to give others the motivation to save the world. The world is like a precise machine. If one part goes wrong, it will be destroyed. The existence of the law of causality is to prevent this from happening. Medea continued, so if you want to violate the law of causality, you need to pay a great price. Elise asked her, then what happens if the effect of the law of causality ends? Medea said, generally, they die. Only then is death allowed. Hearing this, Elise understood. In other words, one can only die after completing the task set by the law of causality. Thinking of this, Elise felt a bit overwhelmed, because her task was only one, to kill Helena. Medea continued, now you know what to do, right? Elise sighed, how could I possibly know what to do? If she killed Helena, she would be executed. In the end, she would still face death. Elise pressed, if you don't break the law of causality, how do you plan to help me? Medea answered, when a soul dies in this land, it will be reborn here. Elise became more confused as she listened. What does that mean? Are you saying that after I die, I might be reborn here? Medea told her, anyway, these are the rules of this world, but witches are people who can break the rules. When you complete the task of this world, you only need some offerings to return to your original body. Elise's gaze became urgent as she quickly asked, what offerings? Medea's eyes suddenly became sharp, that is. The next second, she suddenly burst into laughter, I haven't found it yet. As laughter continued to come from the mirror, Elise seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Why? Even the witch didn't know. Medea comforted her, don't be too disappointed. My sisters and I are working hard to find it. Elise gained a deeper understanding of her current situation. It seems there's no way to escape this world no matter what. After all, there doesn't seem to have been any foreigners in this empire. Huilis also said no one could leave alive. Even witches would find it difficult to easily find a way, right? But isn't the reward a bit too little? Medea wasn't worried about the reward. As for the reward, I'll naturally get it later. Because you've already drunk the contract paper. I drank the contract paper? Elise exclaimed. She suddenly remembered drinking a bowl of red magic potion the first time she met Medea. Was it that mysterious liquid? At this point, Medea's languid voice came through. You shouldn't drink things given by strangers so casually. Elise suddenly sat up angrily and shouted, I don't even know the content of the contract, this isn't fair. Medea told her, how is it unfair? I hold your life in my hands, and isn't my life in your hands too? So it's very fair. Also, if I discover anything, I'll contact you again. Remember to always carry the mirror. Elise replied that she understood. Before leaving, Medea didn't forget to remind her, if you encounter danger, find a large mirror. After the witch disappeared, Elise sat on the bed sighing quietly. Learning so much information at once made her feel like her brain wasn't sufficient. Then she remembered, it seems I haven't seen Anakin since returning home. I wonder what the room assigned to him is like. She whispered Anakin softly. Suddenly the door opened. Anakin spoke up asking, were you calling me? His action startled Elise. How did he hear such a small sound? Could it be that her conversation with Medea was also overheard? Anakin brought her thoughts back. May I come in? Elise silently consented. He walked into Elise's room and knelt down. Anakin expressed his stance to Elise, saying that one of the most important virtues is never revealing the master's secrets. Elise understood. This meant he had heard everything said to Medea just now. Apart from engineering mages, who else could hear such a small sound? Elise thought of something and blurted out, could you be a sword saint? Anakin answered, more or less. Elise got a bit angry, either you are, or you're not. What does more or less mean? Anakin explained, although I can sense tiny movements, I can't fully manifest sword energy yet, so I can't say I'm a sword saint. Elise wasn't very interested in these details and continued to ask, you heard everything just now, didn't you? What do you think? She thought to herself, if Anakin reports her collusion with a witch, she'd have to make a decision. Should she kill him or accuse him of talking nonsense? At this point, Anakin asked the question in his heart. He asked Elise, are you really not from this world? Elise had also made her calculations. To make Anakin her confidant, she could only do this. So she stood up and firmly told him, that's right. To be precise, I'm not Elise and I don't belong here. Anakin continued to ask, then do you want to return to your original place? After getting Elise's affirmative answer, Anakin expressed his attitude, then my task is to help you go back. Elise looked at his calm face. Why wasn't he surprised that she was a foreigner? Even though she had committed the taboo of colluding with a witch. Anakin, seeing Elise hadn't answered, continued, are you doubting me? Elise spoke lazily, because I said such crazy things and you don't suspect I've gone mad. Anakin explained, living in the back streets and alleys, there are countless things crazier than this. After a long time, you can't tell what's normal anymore, because for us, this is everyday life. Normal people can only survive there by going mad. Elise walked towards him, somewhat doubting if Anakin was human. She caressed his cheek, able to feel the warmth. Anakin continued, the master's true identity doesn't matter to me, because my duty won't change because of it. Elise asked him, then what is your duty? Anakin answered solemnly, just like the oath, you give orders and I obey. Elise sat down. This man wouldn't let love interfere with his duties. It seems that even if he fell in love with Helena, his loyalty to her shouldn't change. Anakin asked her with some concern, do you regret choosing a knight who talks such nonsense? Elise revealed a beautiful smile, no, I'm very satisfied. This day, Elise once again woke up in this world. But today she was in an unusually good mood. She and Anakin disguised themselves as commoners. They came to the largest sweet shop in the imperial capital, because someone wanted to see her. The little boy told her he had found the residence of Priest Messias. He looked around for a while, seeing no one around. He handed Elise a small piece of paper. Elise took the paper, which had an address written on it. It was the current address of Priest Messias. Just as she finished reading, the little boy snatched the paper back and put it in his mouth, chewed it a few times, then swallowed it. Seeing his actions, Elise exclaimed, "Why did you eat it?" The little boy was a bit embarrassed. "Didn't you say to keep it strictly secret? Besides, I can't read anyway." Elise was a bit worried. "What if you feel unwell?" The little boy didn't mind, saying he grew up eating food thrown on the street. A small piece of paper was nothing. Elise pushed the dessert in front of him, telling him to eat as much as he wanted. The little boy's eyes lit up instantly. He asked incredulously, "Can I really eat it?" Elise smiled gently, saying this was ordered for him. The little boy, hearing this, started eating in big mouthfuls. He had never eaten such delicious sweets before. Elise, who was drinking coffee, noticed Anakin's gaze and told him to sit down too. Anakin said he was fine, but Elise got a bit annoyed. "I just don't like you standing there like that, it's too conspicuous. After all, we're just pretending to be wealthy commoners now." Anakin had no choice but to sit down. He told Elise it would take half a month to get to that place, asking what she planned to do. Elise's hand holding the coffee cup froze. In half a month, it would be Elise's coming-of-age ceremony. Should they wait until after the ceremony to set out? Elise put a money pouch on the table. This was the agreed payment. Also, this is for the informant. I'll give you your share separately. She then asked the little boy, "Did you sell the earrings I gave you last time?" The little boy answered with a dejected face that he hadn't. Elise was confused. The little boy said he couldn't bear to sell it. It was the first reward he hadn't been robbed of. Hearing the word robbed, Elise angrily glared at Anakin beside her. "Was it you who robbed him?" Anakin was a bit exasperated and quickly explained, "It was this child's father. He's addicted to alcohol and gambling, so he makes the child beg, then takes the money away." The little boy chimed in with some disgust, "But that scumbag is gone now. He died picking a fight while drunk." Anakin spoke again, "This child doesn't have any relatives, so I live there to protect him in lieu of rent." Only then did Elise realize this was a little girl. She couldn't help but worry. "Then what about now?" The little girl said she now protects herself. Children in the slums around this age mostly take care of themselves anyway. Elise slowly took a sip of coffee. Since she said it was fine, there was no need for her to meddle. Suddenly the sweet shop became lively. Elise turned to look. It was actually the High Priest Huilis, and the woman beside her was Helena. The novel's female lead Helena had just accepted Ashen's nightly confession. Yet today she came to the sweet shop with High Priest Huilis. The waiter enthusiastically invited them to sit upstairs, but Helena declined. Elise couldn't help but grumble inwardly, to meet annoying people at this time of all times. Seeing the two whispering, she asked Anakin to listen to what they were saying. She heard Helena saying quietly to Huilis, "We're not nobles, we'll be scolded if we go upstairs." Hearing this, Elise was speechless. Helena was still so naive. Huilis's attire was clearly different from ordinary priests, but she still didn't know Huilis was the high priest. Does she also not know that the luxurious tray is only for nobles to use? The onlookers around were all discussing them, marveling at Helena's beauty and Huilis's noble air. Elise looked at the two sitting together. Indeed, they make a good match. At this point, Anakin asked Elise, "Should I continue relaying their conversation?" Elise said it wasn't necessary. "Isn't it all obvious now?" Helena sweetly said to Huilis, "It's all because you're so handsome that everyone is looking this way. But you shouldn't mind too much. Men can like cakes too. After all, sweets can make people happy." Elise silently ate her dessert. She really couldn't bring herself to like Helena. But she's so beautiful and sweet-tongued, it's probably normal for men to fall in love with her. And Helena's soul color seems to be golden. Elise remembered what Huilis had said to her that day. "There's not a single person in this world with a soul color like yours." At this moment, she really wanted to know what color her own soul was. She should have asked that day. She looked towards Huilis. So Huilis can smile so brilliantly too. And the crown prince who always looked at her with contempt. Ashen who was only politely smiling at her out of courtesy. Is it that they all smile so brilliantly when they're with Helena? Elise put down the dessert in her hand. She suddenly felt so helpless. In this world, is everyone standing by Helena's side while she's always alone? Anakin silently watched her. Elise suddenly realized, that's right, there's still one person standing by her side. The next second, she suddenly ran out of the sweet shop, thinking she had to hurry to see her. Elise, panting, arrived in front of a door, anxiously trying to open it. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't open the door. Elise clenched her fists tightly. "Didn't you say you'd help me when I'm in danger?" At this moment, she felt utterly dejected in her heart. She desperately wanted to see that person. There are days when you suddenly want things you usually don't care about, like cotton candy you don't particularly like, or pestering parents to buy some brand items that all your classmates have. It's nothing more than wanting to confirm that no matter how useless the thing is, will parents still satisfy you to prove their love. No matter what you do, parents will always stand by your side. Thinking of this, Elise shed tears of sadness. She missed them so much, those family members from her original world. If only there was someone in this world who would support her unconditionally like that. But now that person had gone who knows where. Anakin didn't want to see Elise suffering like this anymore. So he stepped forward and asked if she wanted to open this door. After getting Elise's affirmative answer, he stepped forward and drew his sword. With a flash of sword light, the door was cut into pieces. Watching this scene, Elise was stunned. Then Anakin gave the door another kick. The already shaky door completely turned into a pile of debris. Elise looked at this mess and couldn't help but hold her head. "Why did you smash the door?" Anakin said. "Because the door was locked and we couldn't get in. Although I don't know who you're looking for, I thought it would be better to sit inside." Elise mumbled, "Did I do something wrong?" He doesn't seem to feel any guilt about smashing the door. Looking at Anakin moving a chair for her, Elise sighed. Everything she had been upset about just now suddenly became meaningless. She walked, saying, "Yes, if you can't open the door, just smash it." Before she could sit down, Medea returned. She saw the shattered door and cried out in shock. What happened? Medea was so angry smoke was coming out of her ears. "My lady, why smash the door when there's a perfectly good mirror?" Elise immediately shifted the blame. "It wasn't me, he smashed it." Anakin quickly explained, "Because the door was locked, so I smashed it a bit." Medea was completely speechless with these two. She angrily slapped Anakin hard. Elise, watching from the side, couldn't help but laugh. "Don't be angry, I'll compensate for it," she comforted Medea. At this point, Medea calmed down a little. She asked with concern, "Why did you come over?" Elise said, "I'm in a bad mood. Say something to cheer me up." Medea laughed teasingly, "You're too willful." Elise ignored her. "So are you going to drive me out?" The next second, Medea stretched out her hand and cast magic on her door. The fragments of the door began to shake. Under her magic, the pieces gradually floated, slowly piecing together, until a perfect door appeared before them. Watching all this, Anakin gripped his sword tightly with some tension, because magic was known as the study of death. He feared something might go wrong. Elise saw this and was a bit puzzled. "Is it okay to show this to outsiders so casually?" Medea replied calmly, "If you thought he was an outsider, you would have found ways to send him away and come alone, like the first time you came." Then Medea opened the curtain first and let them come in together. Medea led them into the reception room. Here, she performed even more powerful magic. With a light wave of her hand, the teapot and cups slowly floated up. Then the teapot seemed to come alive, skillfully pouring tea into the cups by itself. After the last contract tea incident, Elise let Anakin drink first. Medea drank on her own. "What shall I do to cheer you up? How about I tell you about this world?" This woman crossed over into a novel and became the villainess. This place is a world where divine power and magic coexist. At this moment, sitting before Elise was the witch Medea. She spoke about the difference between magical engineering and magic. Magical engineering is fundamentally similar to theology, or rather, it originates from theology. They say theology is the study of life, while magic is the study of death, but this statement is completely wrong. In fact, both life and death are governed by theology. Theology not only represents good and evil and faith, but is also linked to the truth that constitutes this world. Magical engineering exerts its power entirely under this truth, creating new laws based on the truth of theology. This is magical engineering. Elise found it profound and still didn't quite understand. Medea continued to explain. Suppose a tree is struck by lightning and catches fire. This is a natural phenomenon, which is truth. Humans who had always taken this phenomenon for granted suddenly had this idea one day. If humans could produce lightning, wouldn't they be able to make fire anytime, anywhere? So the earliest magical engineers were similar to inventors. This is also why they are called engineers. They discovered that formulating certain formulas would produce corresponding powers. Once the formula was established, everything else followed naturally. They made water vapor in the air condense into clusters and then rain. They brought wind by changing the temperature of the atmosphere. At first glance, it seems like creating something out of nothing, but that's not the case. Creation is God's domain. Humans touching it is against the truth. Countless magical engineers continuously strived to approach God, but all ended in failure. In fact, many people were cursed and met terrible ends. Therefore, people gradually came to view actions against the truth as taboo. In short, theology is the truth that constitutes the world, and magical engineering can be said to be a discipline that establishes rules under this truth. But magic is fundamentally different from them. Magic will destroy, distort, or ignore all truths and rules. I can send you back to your original world in the same way, breaking the rule of reincarnation here and connecting with your original world. Of course, we have to pay a price, although the consequences of the price are incomprehensible to ordinary people. Hearing this, Elise asked, "Can men use a witch's power? Like magicians or something?" Medea couldn't help but laugh, calling her idea interesting. It was supposed to be her cheering Elise up, but now it was the other way around. She answered Elise, "Last time you asked me why witches don't leave descendants. Actually, this question itself is invalid. Because magic is not hereditary, nor is it like magical engineering or theology that relies on talent." Elise was very confused after hearing this. If it wasn't hereditary or talent, then what was it? Elise's heart was filled with doubts. As if seeing through her thoughts, Medea activated her magic, and a flame suddenly appeared in her palm. Witches are actually a race that evolved through evolution in desperate times, but it requires such strong resentment that it can break through all the truths that bind oneself. After evolution, we are no longer God's creations, but have become completely independent living beings. So we can break free from all the laws of cause and effect and rules of this world. But men are very weak beings, they can't possibly have such strong resentment, because they have never experienced deep pain, so they won't have that sense of urgency. Because in most civilizations here, it is men who make the rules, so they don't need to break them. Elise raised her own question, "If you're so great, why don't people know about the existence of witches?" Medea answered her, "Because many people don't want the existence of witches to be made public. Noble status is bestowed by heaven, this is the foundation for legitimizing power. Once the existence of witches is acknowledged, this foundation will be shaken. It's almost impossible for witches to be born among people of noble status. Most importantly, they fear that people will no longer fear power because of the existence of witches, so they completely conceal it, and erase the existence of witches from history." Elise watched her make the sign of the cross very naturally, and couldn't help but guess, was she once a driver? Elise suddenly realized that if the existence of witches was free from the laws of cause and effect, this could explain why witches had never appeared in the novel. In this novel, the true god is actually the author, and witches are characters outside the author's setting. Medea comforted Elise, telling her not to worry too much. Even with great power, witches cannot destroy the world. Because witches also keep each other in check, and sometimes even vote to discuss the demise of witches. Generally, it's witches who are tired of life and actively apply for voting to end their lives. Then Medea said to her with a grin, "It's a pity, although you're a foreigner, you have the qualifications to become a witch. If you want to stay here, I have more ways to help you." Elise was tempted. Compared to being the crown prince's fiancée, she also felt that being a witch would be happier. Medea continued to fan the flames, "You can even make this man your familiar." Elise silently took a sip of tea. Forget it, she was quite averse to things like familiars. These words were purely hypothetical, this kind of future would not come true. Afterwards, they talked about many hypothetical scenarios for a long time, although they would absolutely never come true, but just imagining them could make one feel comforted about a certain future. Beautiful women of low status all have bumpy fates. Mother picked up that knife several times and put it down again. She wanted to slash my face but couldn't bear to. Finally she threw the knife on the ground. She collapsed, repeatedly crying out, "I'm sorry," then burst into tears. I comforted my mother, saying it's okay, even if she really hurt my face I wouldn't be very afraid. Actually, I really didn't care about those things, but mother's sense of guilt towards me made me feel very uncomfortable. When I was little, father and relatives all died. I vaguely remember mother's desperate expression at that time. She roared that it was all because of that viper Mian who framed my husband. When I grew up, mother told me to act kind. Because she could no longer protect me, no matter what difficulties I encountered in the future, she told me to face them with a smile. She also instructed me not to inquire about anything, even if I knew something, I should pretend not to know. Just like an idiot who doesn't understand anything, because only in this way could I survive. When I first became a maid in the palace, I hugged the bedding and asked, "Is there anyone who wants to wash the bedding with me?" The maids were all unwilling to be close to me. At times like this I felt I was redundant. But I could understand them, although I'm a commoner now and even a low-ranking maid, I used to be a noble. And I'm close to the royal family, no maid would want to get involved with someone like me. Then I sighed quietly while hugging the bedding, "I'll just wash it myself." At this moment, the head maid ran over and told me that the queen and crown prince were looking for me, telling me to go quickly. I asked if I could go after washing the bedding. At this point she scolded me, "How dare you make those two wait for you?" Then she severely reprimanded the surrounding maids, "What are you all busy with? Isn't there anyone who can help Helena wash the bedding?" The surrounding maids hurriedly responded. I wanted to say something more, but the maid who was helping me wash the bedding said, "You'd better go quickly, to avoid us getting scolded again." From that moment on, I knew everyone disliked me, but I still sincerely apologized to everyone. In the past, I had also insisted on finishing my own work before going over, even if I was scolded and beaten by my mother when I got home, but I enjoyed that sense of satisfaction when completing tasks. But in the end I gave up, because one day, I saw the scene of the crown prince berating the head maid because I didn't arrive in time. Afterwards I apologized to the head maid. At that time, the head maid told me, "You are a maid who serves the crown prince, so in the future, don't disobey orders." It would have been better if they had just told me from the beginning that I had no right to refuse. No matter what I do, I'll always cause trouble for others, so everyone doesn't accept me? On one hand they reject me because I'm the crown prince's childhood friend, on the other hand they make me obey the crown prince unconditionally. I was rejected by others every day, and when I got home I didn't dare to complain to my mother. Every night my mother would drink and cry in pain. How could I say anything to a mother like this? Suddenly, my reminiscence was interrupted by the sound of crying. I thought it was my mother, but it didn't sound quite like her crying. This kind of sobbing while trying to hold back pain was not my mother's at all. I saw a small figure curled up in the corner. I walked closer to look, and was stunned by the scene before me. This kind of sobbing that made one feel unbearably sad came from Elise. This beautiful young girl had disliked me since the day we first met. She was Elise. When eating, she would deliberately play tricks, kicking my shins under the table. At that time I would cry out in pain. Then the crown prince would ask me, "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" I would stammer, unable to speak. Elise would mock me, "You can't be so loud when eating." Smiling on the surface but viciously stomping on my foot with her heel underneath. These things happened often. She deliberately embarrassed me, while she herself was very happy. As a commoner, I couldn't resist her, I could only endure silently. But Elise's torment of me became more and more excessive. That day the crown prince invited me to attend a tea party. I excitedly ran to share this news with my mother, and said that Yassine and Elise would also be there. But Elise seemed to dislike me attending. She locked me in a cabinet. No matter how I called out she wouldn't let me out. She even cursed me as a presumptuous lowly maid, saying I couldn't call her by name. Don't think that just because the crown prince is nice to you, you still think you're a noble. I'm the daughter of a traitor. Don't dream of climbing up to the royal family. I nervously told her, "This is the crown prince's order, it's not something I can refuse." Elise said in an almost frantic tone, "You either pretend to be sick, or I can break your leg." Hearing her threats, I was so scared I burst into tears, not daring to make a sound. Elise continued, "If you dare to be so presumptuous again I will never let you off." Tears involuntarily fell on my skirt. I was so scared at that time. My body couldn't stop shaking. It was so dark in the cabinet I was so afraid. I wanted to get out. I kept begging her, "Let me out." After who knows how long, the cabinet door was opened. The crown prince shouted my name loudly. At that time I was almost in despair. The crown prince rescued me. He anxiously asked if I was all right. He asked who on earth did this, saying he would catch that person and punish them. He kept shaking my body asking me to say that person's name. At this moment Elise suddenly ran over and hugged me. This sudden action left me at a loss. She hugged me tightly and said, "Thank goodness, heaven knows how worried she was about me." I weakly called out her title, but she was a little angry and said, "Why call me like that? We don't need to be so formal between us." Then she whispered to me, telling me to call her Elise in front of others. Then she warned me by my ear, telling me to remember what she said. Looking at her pretending to be innocent with a smile, at that moment I also felt a hint of hatred in my heart. From that day on, I started having trouble breathing whenever I entered dark narrow places. What on earth drove Elise to become like this? Elise is a very hardworking person. In order to be the best, she always puts in 2 or even 3 times the effort of others. But the crown prince hates her, because she is the daughter of Marquis Mion. The crown prince believes that the downfall of our family is inextricably linked to Marquis Mion. He thinks Mion is not only cunning and treacherous, but also good at making up stories, and that Elise has taken after her father. So the crown prince has always been very cruel to her. But the more it was like this, the more Elise seemed to push herself. Maybe that's why she wanted to become perfect. But Elise, do you know? If I hadn't passed by the backyard that day, if I hadn't seen you crying secretly that day, I might have continued to hate you. But hearing her painful sobbing, I seemed to understand her pain. I thought I should avoid it. If Elise knew I had seen her, she definitely wouldn't be able to bear it. But just then the crown prince suddenly appeared. He called out my name loudly as he walked towards me. At that time I was at a loss. I was so afraid he would see you crying. I anxiously told him to stay where he was. I would go over myself. But you hurriedly wiped away your tears when you heard the commotion. You came over to me and the crown prince and politely greeted us. I was extremely panicked at that time. You greeted me warmly, and even said it had been a long time. The sunshine was just right. Why don't the 3 of us go for a walk together? At that time I was thinking, how did you become like this? Elise, we probably will never be able to understand each other, right? In that bright early summer, I told myself, no matter what you do to me in the future, I will forgive you. Elise finally found the first clue to return to the real world. She got Mesias the priest's address, and eagerly began to study the map. When she saw the route clearly, she deflated like a balloon. Although she really wanted to run to see Mesias the priest in one go, the place where he lived was both poor and far away, and there was no Marquis villa either, so she couldn't use recuperation as an excuse to go there. How could she go to Mesias the priest's place without arousing suspicion? At this moment Emma walked in. She saw Elise studying the map and thought she was preparing for a summer trip. She happily said, "The magic train is about to open, it can carry so many people." Elise looked confused. Emma explained to her, "The magic train is a train powered by magic engineering. It's much faster than horse-drawn carriages, at least 3 times faster." Hearing this, Elise's eyes lit up. Using the magic train would greatly reduce travel time. Just then there was a knock on the door. It turned out to be people sent by the royal family to have Elise's coming-of-age ceremony dress made. Elise silently complained, "It's finally time for the coming-of-age ceremony, which also means big things are about to happen." In the blink of an eye, it was the day before Elise's coming-of-age ceremony. In this country, you can't sleep on the day of the coming-of-age ceremony. It is said that on this day, God's protection is temporarily lifted, so once you fall asleep, you will be possessed by evil spirits. The palace carriage moved steadily on the road. Elise told Anakin that she would stay in the palace tonight, go to the temple early tomorrow morning to receive the high priest's blessing, and then return to the palace to attend the banquet. Anakin asked her, "How long will the banquet last?" Elise looked a bit tired as she replied, "The banquet will last until the next morning." Then Elise curiously asked, "How did you spend your coming-of-age ceremony? Did you have a coming-of-age ceremony ritual?" Anakin said, "The temple's relief activities also include coming-of-age ceremonies for children from the slums. For children from the slums who have been working to earn money since childhood, the coming-of-age ceremony doesn't have much meaning. But after the coming-of-age ceremony, the temple distributes food and clothes, so most children attend." Hearing this, Elise became a bit impatient. She wasn't interested in other children from the slums, she only wanted to hear his story. Anakin was a bit speechless. This young lady actually wanted to hear his story. But he couldn't refuse Elise's request, so he began to slowly narrate. Today is the day before Elise's coming-of-age ceremony. On the way to the palace, she kept asking about Anakin's coming-of-age ceremony story. Anakin slowly began to recount. On the day of the coming-of-age ceremony, he was woken up early, quickly grabbed some breakfast and then began to pray. The people from the temple dripped a little holy water on his head, then to keep him from sleeping, they kept hitting the ground with sticks hanging bells. They were tortured like this until dawn. They didn't have any all-night banquets, only a night that seemed endless. Elise silently complained, "The capital's temple should have quite a bit of aid money, looks like someone secretly transferred it away. But at least they got clothes and food at the end." Elise said if they gave you money it might be stolen, looks like they put some thought into it. Anakin explained, even if they give items, many adults would steal them and exchange them for money. Elise curiously asked, "What about your things?" Anakin calmly replied, "I sold them as soon as I got them, to avoid them being stolen." Hearing this, she couldn't help but laugh. "What did you want? You even sold the clothes and food." At this moment Anakin's gaze darkened, he said he wanted a sword. Elise looked at him puzzled. Anakin continued, "Not one roughly trimmed from a branch, but a real sword with a sharp blade." Hearing this, Elise's gaze towards him seemed to gain a touch of color. The carriage finally arrived at the palace before dark. Elise slowly walked towards the carriage, holding Anakin's hand. She tentatively asked, "If you want, why don't I buy you a good sword?" Anakin refused her kindness and bowed to express his gratitude. He said he was already used to his current sword, and it would be more convenient to protect the person he wanted to guard. Elise didn't expect Anakin to refuse. She said a bit angrily, "Suit yourself." Elise walked a few steps and suddenly realized. Anakin always maintained a distance of 3 steps from her. Does he always keep this distance from the person he's protecting? But this suited her just fine. Early the next morning, Elise came to the temple to receive the priest's blessing. When holding the coming-of-age ceremony in the empire, they all wear veils, which is said to trap the sins of the flesh and prevent them from escaping. The high priest would pour holy water on it to wash away the sins. Huilis poured the holy water splashing down onto Elise's head. Elise felt uncomfortably wet. Huilis gently lifted her veil, to prevent life from being tainted by sin. The high priest would apply anointing oil on the eyelids and lips, and bestow blessings, thus ending the ceremony. But after a long while Huilis still hadn't moved. Elise was puzzled. What was he dazed about? The belated Huilis finally moved. His hand slowly approached Elise's face, finally touching her eyelids. At this moment Elise quietly reminded him, "You forgot to get the anointing oil." At this moment, Huilis finally came to his senses, fumbling to get the anointing oil. Elise couldn't help but complain in her heart, "He's done this many times before, what's going on?" Huilis reapplied the anointing oil to Elise's eyelids. Next was only the lips left, but Huilis's hand suddenly stopped. Elise looked at him puzzled, she just wanted to finish quickly. At this moment Elise was furious with the man before her, he was really dawdling. In the next second she made a shocking move, directly bringing her lips close to him. Before Huilise could react, she quickly pulled away. Then she asked if it was all finished. Huilise replied, yes. Elise turned and left with Anakin, letting the veil fall to the ground without care. Huilise watched the two leave, lost in thought. No one knew what he was thinking at that moment. Elise walked hurriedly, but kept complaining in her heart, this damn coming-of-age ceremony, I really hope it ends quickly. Suddenly Elise saw Helena. She probably doesn't know what kind of situation she's about to face, right? Forget it, it's good for her to suffer a bit this time, maybe she can become more mature, anyway I can't reveal anything to her. Thinking of this, Elise didn't care anymore, she'd better worry about herself first, now she has to go to the palace to attend the banquet. As soon as she opened the door, she saw her maids. Their previously tense faces finally broke into smiles. She asked, when did you arrive? Before she could finish speaking, with the sound of the door opening, Anakin came in to tell Elise that he would be waiting outside during the banquet. Elise still had something to say to him but was interrupted by Emma, there's no time if we don't go now. Emma had even specially learned how to tighten the corset for today. Hearing this, Elise started trembling, she didn't want to wear that nightmare of a corset again. Looking at Elise in her ceremonial dress, Emma couldn't help but exclaim, you are so beautiful, it's indescribable. Elise ordered to quickly bring the mirror over. She looked at the pile of accessories in her hand with inexplicable displeasure, complaining in her heart, why are there so many random things to wear? But thankfully, after her pitiful begging, she was spared the torture of wearing the corset. Elise looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't help but admire, truly breathtakingly beautiful. But then she turned her head and sighed quietly, what a waste of effort. Even if she's this beautiful, the crown prince's heart is ultimately elsewhere. Elise said to get up and set off. Emma told her the crown prince hadn't arrived yet. Elise said a bit sarcastically, he won't come, because she knew the crown prince had gone to pick up Helena. Then she pushed open the door. Looking at the attendants bowing to her, from their expressions some people should already know the situation. She now urgently wanted to know who else was involved in this matter. She could only go to the banquet hall to confirm. As she imagined, soon after she left, people in the banquet hall began to discuss where the crown prince had gone. Faced with rumors and gossip, Elise suddenly stopped walking, she began to look around. Then she said calmly, Sir Carl, can you hold my hand? Today is Elise's coming-of-age ceremony, it's her engagement ceremony with the crown prince. But unexpectedly, the crown prince was absent, so she had to walk to Yassine's side and ask if he could hold her. Yassine was a bit surprised, he thought he had misheard. Elise didn't wait for his answer and reached out her hand to him. No knight would refuse the request of the protagonist of the coming-of-age ceremony. After hesitating for a moment, Yassine still reached out his hand. At this moment, the announcement sounded, the eldest daughter of Marquis Mian, fiancée of His Highness the Crown Prince, Lady Mian enters. As soon as the words fell, the venue immediately erupted, voices of dissent were endless. Just then, Elise slowly walked towards the venue holding Yassine's arm. Yassine asked her quietly, why don't I see the Crown Prince? Elise said in an icy tone, haven't you figured it out yet? He must have gone to pick up your date. Yassine looked dumbfounded, obviously not believing what she said. Elise continued, you don't think Helena is standing you up, do you? You also know she's not a cold-hearted person. Yassine murmured, it can't be, today is your coming-of-age ceremony. Elise felt the man beside her was really stupid, her tone a bit impatient. They say love blinds people's eyes. Yassine's gaze was sharp, how do you know they're together? Elise silently complained that this man was really talkative. At this moment Marquis Mian entered, he called out to Elise asking what on earth was going on. Elise didn't have a chance to answer, the announcement sounded again. Their Majesties the King and Queen enter. As soon as the king saw Elise he laughed heartily, praising her beauty today. Elise and Yassine bowed politely, she thanked the king for preparing the ceremony for her, saying it was an honor for the family. She said she would pay more attention to inner beauty in the future, not be vain, and be loyal to the royal family. The king noticed someone was missing beside Elise, he asked where the crown prince had gone. Just then, the announcement sounded, the crown prince and Helena entered together. At this moment, the venue fell silent, this silence was the eye of the storm. The crown prince brought another woman to his fiancée's coming-of-age ceremony banquet, and he even had her wear the exact same dress as his fiancée. This woman before them, with silver white hair and beautifully romantic purple eyes. Like an angel fallen to earth, even Elise had to admit she was no match for her beauty. Helena followed the crown prince into the venue, but she suddenly froze, she finally realized her dress was the same as Elise's. The next second, she cried out in shock, wanting to go change her dress. The crown prince quickly grabbed her hand telling her to be more confident. At this moment Elise broke the awkward situation, you can go change your dress now, Miss Andrew. Hearing her words, Helena broke free from the crown prince and ran out hurriedly. No matter how hysterically the crown prince shouted behind her, At this moment, the Crown Prince was furious to the extreme. He glared at Elise viciously, like a fierce beast about to tear her apart. The king also looked dumbfounded. Obviously he hadn't expected the Crown Prince to do such a thing. Elise came to the king's side. She requested to speak a few words with the Crown Prince first. Elise glanced at the queen. The queen noticed her gaze and immediately turned to look elsewhere. Regarding this matter, actually everyone knew what was going on. The dress Helena wore was a backup, prepared in case something went wrong with Elise's dress. The Crown Prince alone couldn't have gotten the backup dress. There must have been the queen's help behind it. Being able to do this was not just about doting on Helena, but really disliking Elise. Elise came to the Crown Prince's side and said she wanted to talk to him. In the moonlight, the two came to a pavilion. Elise opened by asking, "Do you really hate me that much?" The Crown Prince was confused by this sudden question. He hadn't expected Elise to be so direct. Elise stepped towards him. "You do hate me, don't you? As long as you can make me suffer and feel sad, you're very happy." She approached the Crown Prince and continued, "So when you entered the banquet hall, you first noticed my expression, not the king's. You just wanted to see me hurt and upset, right?" Perhaps because she hit the nail on the head, the Crown Prince couldn't say a word for a long time. Elise leaned against the railing. "But do you know, Your Highness? My greatest wish is to die." Hearing this, the Crown Prince was shocked. Was the woman before him still the Elise he knew? At this moment Elise's gaze was sharp. "So don't try to find ways to hurt me. These tricks mean nothing to me." After saying this, Elise strode away, leaving the Crown Prince standing there stupidly, unable to come to his senses for a long time. Elise returned to the banquet hall. Seeing Yassine still standing there, she couldn't help but silently complain, "Why doesn't he go after Helena?" She went up and questioned Yassine, "Why don't you go take care of Helena? Although the Crown Prince stole your date, weren't you the one who invited her? You should see it through to the end." Then she told Yassine to move aside, displeased. Yassine nodded to her, then stepped aside to make way for Elise. Watching her departing figure, Yassine was lost in thought for a long time. It seems Elise wasn't the only one who changed their view of her tonight. In the original novel's plot, Elise, who arrived late to the banquet hall, saw Helena wearing the same dress and deliberately made trouble and threw a tantrum. But now Elise had arrived at the banquet hall early, so many things had changed. She didn't want to become the tragic heroine, nor did she have tears to shed for those who expected Elise to make a fool of herself. If this novel were to write a spin-off, Elise hoped it would be a story about Elise. She really wanted to know what kind of feelings Elise had when she was jealous of Helena and in love with the Crown Prince. Even after entering Elise's body, she still knew nothing about Elise. In Elise's world, no one understood her. Elise walked towards the king, who was chatting with Marquis Mion. As soon as the king saw Elise, he called her child and asked how her talk with the Crown Prince went. Elise politely replied that it went well. In her heart she was silently complaining. It seems the king was afraid she would ask to break off the engagement, so he called her daughter-in-law to gloss over the matter. The Marquis beside him also quickly smoothed things over. Seeing Elise's bright expression, the misunderstanding should have been cleared up. The Marquis definitely wouldn't do anything to damage Elise's reputation. In the royal family where polygamy is allowed, today's incident actually doesn't amount to much. If Elise becomes infertile in the future, the royal family would unhesitatingly bring Helena into the harem. It seems only if the Crown Prince personally requests the king to break off the engagement would it work. Elise couldn't help but complain. If this guy wants to cause trouble, he should do it thoroughly. Lost in thought, Elise was interrupted by the king's voice. "Do you still remember what I told you before?" Elise's gaze darkened. She lowered her head and replied, "I remember." The king gave an approving look, not forgetting to praise the Marquis for raising such a gentle and virtuous daughter. The king and Marquis continued to chat. Elise stood silently beside them, lost in thought. Poor Elise, this world is so cruel to you. No one really cares about you. Today's banquet is equivalent to an engagement ceremony, but it turned out like this, yet they won't allow breaking off the engagement. What is this? Does she have to cause an even bigger scandal to successfully break off the engagement? At this moment, Elise's mood hit rock bottom. She thought carefully about how the plot would unfold later. In the novel it was originally Elise who fled from the banquet hall, but now it had become Helena. This huge change in the plot left her even more confused. She walked alone but heard crying. Elise walked closer and saw it was Helena crying bitterly. A feeling of irritation immediately surged in Elise's heart. What is this Helena crying about here again? At this moment Helena looked up and also saw Elise. She suddenly stood up and hurriedly explained, "I'm sorry, I really didn't know this dress was yours." Before she could finish speaking, she burst into tears again. Helena's tears kept flowing down. She sobbed, "It's all my fault." Just moments ago, Elise had experienced a dramatic coming-of-age ceremony, becoming the laughingstock of everyone. And one of the culprits, Helena, was now crying and apologizing to her. She wiped her tears while trying hard to suppress her sobs, not letting herself cry out loud. Looking at the pitiful Helena, Elise softened. The man who brought her to attend the ceremony and made her wear this dress hadn't apologized to her. just because Helena was the weakest among them, so she's always the one apologizing. Elise had always thought Helena lived happily without worries. It seems that wasn't the case. Even if there's not a single scar on her hands, it doesn't mean there aren't any in her heart. Elise said to Helena, "You can cry, it's okay, cry if you want to." Although Elise still disliked Helena, she had no reason to fully blame her. After saying this, Elise turned and left. She sat on a bench, feeling depressed. She asked Anakin to bring some wine. She just wanted to know if Anakin was nearby, so she said it tentatively, but didn't expect him to actually hear. Soon Anakin brought over a lot of food. Elise asked him, "Are all these desserts for you to eat?" Anakin said caringly, "I saw you hadn't eaten anything, so I brought them over. If it's not enough, I can go get more." Elise said it was enough, but she was puzzled why he only brought 1 cup. Anakin explained he couldn't drink alcohol while on duty. Elise was curious, "Is it not allowed even if I permit it?" Anakin calmly replied, "If it's in order, I would drink, but I don't think this is an important matter." Suddenly Elise cupped his chin with her hand. "Whether it's important or not is for me to judge." Seeing Anakin's serious expression, she couldn't help but laugh out loud, saying she was just joking. "I won't force you if you don't want to." After this little episode, the atmosphere relaxed a lot. Elise's mood also seemed less gloomy. After drinking a little, she asked Anakin to tell her about himself, but Anakin looked at Elise in surprise. Elise continued saying he could talk about anything. She wanted to know about his past. She was just very curious about how Anakin lived. Why did he become a knight? Did he have any other dreams? She wanted to understand Anakin. After all, they were in the same boat now. Anakin told her about his background. He was an orphan. Whether his parents deliberately abandoned him or they had some difficulties they couldn't speak of, these things didn't matter to him. Because in his memory there was no trace of them, and he didn't miss them. She didn't think people with parents were all happy, because in some families parents are the root of their children's unhappiness. He grew up in an orphanage and left when he felt he could earn money on his own. Then he met that little girl Elise had seen before. Afterwards, the two of them chatted about many, many things. In the soft moonlight, Anakin was telling Elise about his story. After leaving the orphanage, he met that little girl. At this point Elise interrupted him, "What's that little girl's name?" Anakin replied, "The little girl is really looking forward to telling you her new name herself. If I say it first, she'll definitely be very deflated, and she'll blame me too." Hearing this, Elise didn't ask further. Instead she asked, "So besides being a knight, did you have any other dreams?" Anakin said he hadn't received much education, couldn't read much, so naturally couldn't do intellectual work. And he wasn't suited to be a mercenary either, because he wasn't good at socializing. "If I hadn't met you, maybe one day I would have become a mercenary too." Elise teased, "Actually he's more suited to be a wandering knight. Traveling alone, helping those in need along the way and receiving some compensation. The compensation might be food, or a place to sleep. Occasionally some people would give money. After finishing the task, even if someone asked him to stay he wouldn't, just walking his own path, that's a wandering knight." The drunk Elise suddenly sighed, feeling the stars were very beautiful tonight. She asked Anakin, "Do you know there are constellations above the stars?" Then the two sat under the vast starry sky for a long time, chatting about many things. Slowly, Elise looked at the man before her. She began to feel uneasy. If she died and returned to her original world, what kind of punishment would Anakin face? Would he be executed? What about those maids, and Helena? Would they be implicated? How many innocent lives would have to be sacrificed for her to leave here? Elise suddenly felt it was so difficult, because she no longer felt Anakin was just a character in a novel. Seemingly sensing Elise's gaze, Anakin asked with concern, "Is something wrong, my lady?" Elise awkwardly turned to look at the sky. "I'm fine." Actually, she really wished all the stars in the sky would come crashing down. The next day, Elise packed her luggage. She was going to use the coming-of-age ceremony incident as an excuse to say she needed to go out to clear her mind, riding the magic train to enjoy the lakeside scenery along the way and then come back. Emma was a bit worried. There's no Marquise villa there. How would she manage food and lodging? Elise reassured her, anywhere is more comfortable than in the royal palace. And in Randall District, there's no Marquise villa, so she could avoid Marquis Mion's surveillance. As she was leaving, Emma shouted to her, "You must come back safely." Elise knew Emma was afraid she wouldn't return. But then she thought she was being self-important. After all, Emma loved Elise, not her. At the bustling magic train station, announcements were constant, as it was the train's maiden voyage, so many people had come. Elise turned to Anakin, "Did you do everything as I instructed?" Anakin replied, "Yes, as instructed. Tickets for all stops along the route have been purchased." Elise was somewhat excited. This way, even if someone was tracking her, they wouldn't be able to trace her for a while. In the carriage, the conductor warmly greeted her, thanking Elise for riding their magic train. He had specially prepared a first-class compartment, an entire car for her use alone. Elise took off her hat and was calculating her next move. She planned to disappear mid-journey, because she intended to use this trip to really show them, the royals, the Duke, and At this moment, Elise revealed a wicked smile. Who else had she thought of? Elise began her journey of escape. She was now sitting with Anakin on the magic train, elegantly enjoying fine cuisine, but Anakin hadn't eaten yet. Elise curiously asked, "Is the food not to your liking?" Anakin was a bit embarrassed, saying, "You didn't need to order a meal for me." Hearing this, Elise immediately became upset, saying, "What, am I supposed to let my knight go hungry?" Anakin hastily explained, "No, I meant I could eat your leftovers. Besides, going hungry for a few days is no big deal, I'm used to it anyway." Hearing him say this, Elise immediately flew into a rage and slammed the table. "Stop talking nonsense and eat." Under Elise's stern attitude, Anakin slowly began to chew. Elise glared at Anakin angrily, thinking, no wonder he's so skinny, there's nothing but muscle on his entire body. Although she liked such thin men, he wasn't her lover, but a knight meant to protect her, so it was necessary to fatten him up by 10 pounds in 7 days. Thinking of this, she called the waiter to bring 2 more vanilla ice creams. Before they knew it, the train had been traveling for 3 days. In other words, now was the perfect time to escape. Elise began her plan, first drawing a mole by her mouth. Then disguising herself as a dancer, she asked Anakin if her imitation looked convincing. Anakin was clearly shocked by her disguise, saying that with his limited perspective, it was hard to understand. "Do you really have to do this?" he asked. Elise replied, "This is how we fool others. Who would imagine that the haughty Miss Mion would disguise herself as a dancer?" She told Anakin, "The disguise and tone of voice aren't important. What matters is that I am your master. This fact won't change." In truth, Elise was also helpless, her body type made it impossible to dress as a man. Elise said sternly, "Anakin, who am I standing before you?" Anakin knelt before her, "You are the one who gave me my name, my sword, and my life, my master." Elise told him to stand up. She informed Anakin that now the prey in the trap was waiting for her. During this trip, she planned to humiliate 3 people, the Duke, the royal family, and the Grand Priest Heuris. By the time they reached the Landor district, the Duke would likely have many spies watching Elise's every move. She had to pretend to be a dancer accompanying Heuris and get off the train with him before they arrived. Elise was a bit worried, unsure if Anakin was following properly. At this moment, Anakin had climbed onto the roof of the train to avoid detection. As she walked past the seats, she caught a glimpse of Duke Mion's confidant. Suddenly the confidant stood up. Elise panicked a little, wondering if he had recognized her. No. He couldn't have confirmed it at a glance. She continued walking forward, with the man still following. Soon she calmed down and said softly, "Anakin, come quickly." She knew Anakin could hear her voice, but wasn't sure if he had heard clearly. As the man got closer and closer, just as he reached out to grab her, Elise suddenly started running. She needed to quickly find a place to hide. At this crucial moment, Anakin suddenly appeared. Elise grabbed him, and in the next second, she leaned in close, saying, "Kiss me quickly." Can you believe it? This noble young lady actually asked a commoner knight to kiss her. Anakin looked at Elise leaning in, too scared to move. Elise told him not to worry, it was just pretend. Their gazes suddenly intertwined, eyes locked for a long moment. Elise hugged Anakin and said with a slight pout, "I'm a bit out of breath after running all that way." The next second, Anakin held Elise tightly, as if this could give her strength. The man outside the door looked at the two embracing tightly inside and was somewhat surprised. Anakin glared fiercely at the man, seeming to be angry that he had disturbed his moment. The man immediately turned and left, thinking to himself that he must have been mistaken. Elise pulled away slightly and asked Anakin, "Has the man left?" Anakin replied that he had gone far away. Elise also relaxed, finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Then she apologized to Anakin. "Did it make you uncomfortable when I suddenly asked you to kiss me?" Anakin calmly replied, "No." Elise told Anakin, "If there's an order you don't want to follow, you can refuse. If I make you do something terrible, don't forgive me." Elise knew that Anakin would never refuse her orders. She just hoped he wouldn't try to understand her by making all sorts of efforts. Because in the days to come, she would only do bad things, and these would only dirty his hands. Afterwards, Elise went to the compartment where Grand Priest Heuris was. She opened the compartment door and walked in. Heuris recognized Elise and was shocked by her strange appearance. Elise found it a bit amusing that rather than her sudden visit, he was more concerned about her disguise. Then she sat opposite Heuris. "You're going to see Priest Mesius, right? Please take me with you." Time went back to a few days ago, when Elise learned that the magic train was faster than a carriage. An idea formed in her mind. She instructed Anakin to have that little girl send a message to Heuris. The content was, "Former Grand Priest Mesius is critically ill, please visit urgently." Heuris was confused. "Aren't you supposed to be going to the Landor district?" Elise seemed a bit excited. "That's what I said publicly, which is why I need the Grand Priest's help." Hearing this, Heuris finally understood. "So you dressed up to avoid attention." Elise praised his cleverness, but said this disguise would need the Grand Priest's help to complete. That man was the Empire's Grand Priest Heuris, and he was looking at this unexpected visitor in shock. The visitor was Elise, who said, "For my sake, please be a grand priest who lusts after beauty just this once." Eurus felt exasperated, wondering if this woman was joking. At the train station, everyone was gossiping. They couldn't imagine that the grand priest would be arm in arm with a dancer, and the dancer was smiling radiantly. Elise looked at Eurus's sour expression, knowing that due to his position, he cared a lot about others' opinions. The current situation must be making him feel very embarrassed. They changed to a horse-drawn carriage and traveled along a forest path. Eurus stared intently at Elise, and Elise noticed his gaze. She asked why he was staring at her, and Eurus immediately turned his head, stammering without saying anything. Eurus then looked at Anakin, and Elise's languid voice came, "If you have something to say, just say it. He's my man." Eurus didn't beat around the bush anymore. "It's been a few days, and your soul seems much more stable." Elise was surprised. "You can see that?" Eurus stated, "It seems you've finally accepted your life in this world." Elise coldly replied, "You could see it as preparation before completely disappearing." Eurus told her not to do anything foolish, and Elise thought he was going to try to dissuade her again. She teased, "What? Are you going to say this life is given by God again?" Then Elise's tone changed. "You don't need to say such things anymore. You don't really care about Elise's life or death." In the original novel, Grand Priest Eurus was actually Elise's unknown half-brother. When Elise found out, she quickly became dependent on him, but when Elise needed help, Eurus coldly turned his back. To save Helena, he exploited Elise's loneliness, which was a complete betrayal. Elise pulled back her thoughts and said coldly that she wouldn't die so easily, so there was no need to worry. Everyone has an ending suitable for themselves, right? In this novel, Elise's death was the most brilliant climax. And what the readers of this novel most wanted to see was the tragic ending of the villainous Elise. If this world was a huge theatrical stage, what song would be played at the curtain call? Can you believe it? Grand Priest Eurus was actually Elise's biological brother, and she had no goodwill towards this so-called brother. After a long bumpy journey, they finally arrived at Priest Mesias's residence. He looked at the group in bewilderment, asking Eurus, "Why did you suddenly come here?" Eurus said he was relieved to see him in good health. Elise greeted him warmly, saying she had questions to ask, so she came without notice. Mesias stared at her in shock, and Elise continued to introduce herself. "You can call me Miss Mion, or you can call me the outsider." After all, he could see her soul colors, so there was no need to hide. Hearing the introduction, Mesias knew her intentions and quickly invited everyone inside. While Mesias was preparing tea, Eurus asked her, "Was the little girl who sent me the message dispatched by you?" Elise smiled innocently. "You just realized? I thought you knew on the train." Eurus accused her of being so calm despite using lies to deceive. Elise lazily replied, "It's worrying that you believe others' words so easily. I'm concerned someone might set a trap for you." Eurus retorted angrily that God would guide him on the right path. Elise had used Mesias to deceive him. Of course he was angry. Mesias was like a father to him. But who knew that this seemingly honest and simple Eurus was actually Duke Mion's illegitimate child? And no one could have imagined that the dancer who was pregnant with the Duke's child would entrust the child to the temple. Mesias came out with the tea. He asked Elise, "Why come to this remote place?" "I'm afraid this inconspicuous old man will disappoint you." Elise replied, "How could that be?" This is a question only Priest Mesias can answer. Back then, the dragon sacrificed Yasin's entire life to achieve its own goal of death. What exactly was the prophecy the dragon gave to Mesias? Yasin said the dragon violated the law of causality, forged the prophecy, and thus reversed fate. "Didn't you notice that the dragon's voice was different from God's when prophesying?" Mesias said, "I didn't notice at the time, it was only after a while that I realized the difference." Elise continued to ask him, "Do you still remember the content of the prophecy?" Mesias put down his teacup and said slowly, "Of course I remember. I still remember it very clearly. The child born on the 9th day after the full moon in March must thrust the sword into the arrogant dragon. Only that child can destroy the mad dragon. Therefore, on the day the mad dragon's life ends, everything will return to its original position according to the law." Elise had mysteriously crossed over into the novel. This was a world where divine power and magic coexisted. Only by following causality could everything return to its original position according to the law. Priest Mesias said, he didn't know what the law was, but compared to truth, it was just a small and foolish existence. Elise persisted in asking, were there any other prophecies? Mesias thought for a moment, no, because God doesn't make prophecies at all. It was said that Mesias was the only one who accepted God's will, and thus became the grand priest and received the highest honor. So when he learned that what he heard wasn't God's oracle but the dragon's words, he couldn't honestly confess to people. Even though this matter ruined someone's life, he didn't tell the truth until the end, just because he couldn't give up the honor he possessed. Mesias shed tears of remorse, feeling he was too cowardly. Elise was trying hard to recall the plot in the novel. Yasin's fate as the dragon slayer was set by the author. In this work, the author was equivalent to God. Could the law the dragon spoke of refer to this? Then what exactly did the dragon's words change? Did it really change anything? Or did the dragon lie to Yasin? What if the dragon Yasin killed wasn't the mad dragon but another dragon? The novel only said that the hero Yasin killed the dragon, but didn't specifically say it was the mad dragon. There was only one reason why the dragon went to such lengths to forge a prophecy to involve Yasin. Could it be? She quickly asked Mesias, can dragons not end their own lives? Mesias said, this is a very strange question. Have you ever seen nature end its own life? The so-called dragon is the strongest creature created by God. Their existence is like nature itself, only flourishing with the passage of time. Of course, such great creatures will die one day, but how dare insignificant humans speculate on how long that period of time is? After hearing his words, Elise believed she had guessed correctly. Indeed, the dragon couldn't die either, just like herself. Elise suddenly started to retch, quickly running outside. Anakin thoughtfully handed her a handkerchief. Elise turned to look at Anakin before her, as if he was her savior, radiating brilliance at this moment. He would always be there whenever she needed him. Elise took the handkerchief. She asked if he had brought a mirror. Anakin said, yes, do you need it now? Then the two walked into the woods. As night fell, the road became increasingly dark. They came to a small river, and Elise felt that no one would hear them here. So she took out the mirror and shouted, Medea, I have something to ask you. Medea immediately appeared in the mirror. What happened? You even used the mirror. Elise raised her doubts, asking if the mad dragon had forged the prophecy to use Yasin's hand to kill itself. Medea was startled by her words, you always surprise me. Elise continued, after all, Yasin's fate was just to kill a dragon, but it wasn't specified which one. Medea answered her, yes, because the mad dragon, like you, is also an outsider. Just now, Elise learned a shocking secret. The witch Medea said that the dragon in this world was also an outsider. But this news didn't shock her. Instead, she was unusually calm. Medea continued, the outsider attached to the dragon's body was initially very satisfied with her new life. Because dragons are the strongest creatures in this world, so she feared nothing and could do anything. For her, helping humans establish a kingdom was also easy. She tried hard to live, met a dragon she admired, and quickly fell in love with him, even raising baby dragons together. But the seemingly eternal happiness slowly disappeared with the passage of time. The subsequent period of boredom tormented her for a long time, and she gradually went mad. Having become a mad dragon, she found the witches, wanting them to kill her. The witches said this wasn't impossible, but thinking about the aftermath made it a bit troublesome. So the witch Circe made a deal with the mad dragon. Although she couldn't kill the dragon herself, she told her how she could die. The mad dragon willingly accepted the price Circe proposed. This world was about to welcome a hero burdened with the fate of slaying the dragon, and the mad dragon had to steal the hero's fate. On the day the hero killed the mad dragon, the entire world was also pierced. On that day, a poor dragon not only lost her beloved partner, but even the death that originally belonged to her was lost. The dragon who lost her death became completely desperate. She thought and thought, how could she regain her fate? Finally, she made up her mind to offer her heart as a sacrifice to this world, thereby violating the world's law of causality and regaining her fate. Coincidentally, at that time she heard the wishes of two women, one was Elise and the other was her maid, Emma. In a sense, it could be called a miracle, but it could also be called unfortunate, or perhaps both. That day, Emma prayed that the wish of the young girl in her arms would come true, and Elise's wish was to disappear from this world. So, the dragon fulfilled their wishes, and thus the girl's soul and the dragon's heart disappeared together. At the same time, the law of causality in this world found a new soul. The soul that entered the empty shell of the girl's body to live in her place as you. Hearing this news, Elise broke down, tears streaming down her face. She kept repeating, why? Why me? What did that woman do wrong? Just because of a young girl's prayer, she was forced to cross over to another world. After hearing Medea's story, Elise had a splitting headache, and at this moment, her emotions took a long time to calm down. Her hand holding the mirror trembled with anger. She threw the mirror violently into the river, not wanting to hear Medea's mood-affecting words anymore. Suddenly, a commotion arose. It turned out that Eurus had been eavesdropping on their conversation and was caught red-handed by Anakin. Anakin asked Elise how she wanted to handle it. Eurus was also unable to remain calm at this moment, because he had learned a secret he shouldn't have known. Suddenly, the usually gentle and refined man shouted, "You actually collude with witches, don't you know this is a serious crime?" Elise stood up and walked towards him. "It's a serious crime for people in your country, but what does that have to do with me, an outsider?" Eurus said firmly, "Since you're possessing her body, you are a person from here." Elise sneered, "So what? Are you going to report me? I would very much welcome that. Since I can't die when stabbed by a sword, maybe I can die at the stake." Then Elise told Anakin to release Eurus so he could go report her. Elise seemed to think of something. She abruptly pulled out Anakin's sword and threw it in front of Eurus. Come to think of it, you don't need to report me. As the Grand Priest, you have the right to deal with me immediately. So use this sword to end me right now. After all, isn't a witch who communicates privately with witches also a witch? In the novel, Eurus used this authority to threaten Elise. He clearly knew she wasn't a witch but his sister. But he said Elise had dirty blood and insulted him. But now he was sincerely pitying me. Because I haven't bullied his beloved Helena yet. In any case, just like Helena, I can't bring myself to like Elise at all. She told Eurus, if you don't kill me now, then please continue to pretend you don't know anything in the future. I'll die soon anyway, but I promise it won't be in front of you. Eurus's eyes were filled with tears. He didn't understand why Elise always said such things. And he didn't say those things earlier out of fear, he just felt very sad about her sorrow. Eurus didn't know what to do. He wanted to seek forgiveness and absolution from Elise's anger, so he begged her not to die. Elise slowly reached out to wipe the tears from Eurus's face, saying softly, don't pity me, it's very off-putting. At this moment, Anakin suddenly took action, knocking Eurus unconscious. Then he carried him, preparing to throw him back to the small cabin from earlier, telling Elise to wait here for him to return. Elise put her feet in the river, wanting to calm herself down. She knew she had to recall the content of the novel to prepare for future events. But now she didn't want to do anything, suddenly feeling it was all meaningless. From now on, she could only live on as Elise, like a puppet, until the day prescribed by the law of causality when she could die. In her original world, as long as she tried hard, things could still be changed, but here she could do nothing. Soon, Anakin rushed back. Elise teased him about walking so fast. Anakin looked serious, because I was worried you would leave me alone and go off by yourself. Elise found it a bit funny, are you afraid I might take my own life? Anakin hesitated for a long time but still couldn't help saying, I want to understand my master. I want to know what your life was like before, and what kind of life you want in the future. I shouldn't have such thoughts, but I'm more afraid of not having the chance to understand you. Elise felt regretful at this moment. If only Anakin's story had appeared in the novel like the other male leads. After a moment of silence, Elise spoke, come here and carry me. Elise just lay quietly in Anakin's arms. She was too tired, she didn't want to walk. Her face was close to his chest, his heartbeat was very steady, without a trace of love yet. Anakin's current pure kindness and goodwill, even if it wasn't love, felt very comfortable. Elise closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Afterwards, they boarded a carriage heading to the Landor district. Elise also began to tell Anakin about her original world. The level of development there far surpassed the Empire, with religious freedom. Although there was no magical engineering, there was technology called science. There was no class system, no royalty or nobility. Anakin expressed confusion, if there's no status, how do you distinguish between noble and lowly? Elise patiently explained, similar to here, it's distinguished by money. Those who accumulate a lot of wealth gain power as a result. In that world, she wasn't a noble like Elise, but poor and ordinary. Anakin asked with concern, did you have a family too? Yes, she lived with her parents and younger brother. Elise continued, at the time, I once really disliked my family. But looking back now, it was actually quite warm and harmonious. Anakin interrupted her, why did you hate your family? Elise replied with slight sadness, because I felt my parents favored my brother. No, they really did show favoritism. I even blamed myself for it, thinking I was a disobedient child and that's why I couldn't get love. Poverty made me mature earlier than others. Perhaps all I wanted was just a word of praise, but my understanding slowly became taken for granted. No child in this world should be treated differently, so I won't forgive my parents. But even if I dislike them, resent them, I still miss them. Now I just want to find what I've lost. If we could meet again, I want to ask them why they treated me that way. Soon they arrived in the Landor district and came to an inn. The innkeeper asked if they were newlyweds. Elise was about to say no when Anakin quickly answered. He instructed, the best room for this lady, and give me any room. Then they each went to their rooms to rest. Elise sat on the bed after washing up. Her body ached all over after a night in the carriage, but Anakin still looked so energetic. At this time, a little girl knocked and came in to deliver clean towels. During their chat, Elise learned that there were many lively places in the Landor district, and recently a night market had opened. Elise became interested when she heard about the night market, wondering how it differed from the night markets in her original world. This man accidentally learned a secret he shouldn't have known. He was knocked unconscious by Anakin and thrown back to his residence. Now he slowly regained consciousness. Then he sat up, holding his still aching neck. Recalling Elise's words from last night, are you going to report me? Go ahead, I'd welcome it. Eurus didn't understand why the women he wanted to keep always left him. Eurus sank into painful memories. Before giving birth to him, his mother was a young, beautiful, and prominent dancer. But to give birth to him, she changed the god she believed in and endured hardships to bring him into the world. After that, she lost everything she had. Every time he brought up his father, his mother would fly into a rage and throw things. Then she would hysterically accuse him of why he ruined her life, saying that seeing him every day made her not want to live. At those times, he would only cover his head and cry bitterly, believing it was all his fault, that he shouldn't have been born into this world. Whenever he woke from nightmares, he would go and caress his deeply sleeping mother's cheek, feeling her warmth. He was very afraid that his mother would really leave him. To lessen his mother's burden, he went to find priest Mesias and expressed his desire to become a priest. Mesias agreed. So he decided to leave his mother to become a priest, but when he returned, he was dumbfounded. His mother had ended her own life the night before he left. He deeply regretted it. If he hadn't gone to find priest Mesias, if he had been by her side that day, if he could have held his mother back one more time, would this not have happened? Eurus was heartbroken. He hated himself for his choice. Until that day, the moment he first saw Elise. If I said seeing you reminded me of my mother, would you believe it? The moment he first saw Elise, her shattered soul looked extremely similar to his mother's deeply wounded soul, emitting blue and red colors all over. That day Elise urgently wanted Eurus's help, wanting him to return to the temple to find historical records. Would she believe me if I told her that I was as eager as she was at the time? That night, his mother appeared in his dream, still complaining about him, still crying, praying for God's grace, when performing the coming-of-age ceremony for Elise that day. Under the torn soul, those eyes like an early summer landscape were breathtakingly beautiful. Perhaps that beauty made him hesitate. Was he trying to save her? Whenever she said things about wanting to die, Eurus would think of his mother who took her own life. He began to fear, could he not save Elise either? Eurus prayed to God, praying that this time he must be able to grasp Elise's hand. But Elise rejected his help. It seemed God wasn't on his side again. Meanwhile, Elise and Anakin arrived at the bustling Landor district night market. It seemed even livelier than imagined. Elise asked Anakin if he was hungry, if there was anything he wanted to eat. Anakin replied absent-mindedly, I'm fine. At this moment, he seemed more focused than usual. Elise couldn't help laughing seeing him so serious. She teased, although the surroundings are chaotic now, we came out to relax today, so don't be so tense. Anakin seemed to relax a bit after hearing this, quickly nodding. She held Anakin's hand and couldn't help acting coy. I'm hungry, let's go eat something together. Then the two came to a grilled sausage stand. Looking at the sizzling sausages, Elise immediately ordered 2 skewers. The stall owner looked at Anakin's handsome face and asked, are you two a married couple? So young and still shy, you must be newlyweds. Anakin looked somewhat helpless, wanting to say no, but Elise immediately jumped in, yes, we're on our honeymoon. She smiled and said he wasn't originally so cold, just shy in front of strangers. The owner laughed heartily, saying he had never seen such a beautiful wife, that they really were a perfect match. Hearing these words, Anakin couldn't help but blush. Elise took the sausages and eagerly started eating. As soon as the sausage entered her mouth, she immediately covered it. The spicy grilled sausage was so hot, it could rival the taste of her homeland. Anakin looked at the scene before him, his mood also improving. It was the first time he had seen Elise eat so heartily, and smile so happily. At this time, a wine vendor nearby started calling out. Elise told him, to have more fun, wine is essential. While Elise was focused on watching a performance, Anakin brought 2 cups of wine. The two joyfully drank wine and watched the show. The performance began. Today's program was a tragic story that happened in a family. The father was deceived by an evil plot, suspecting his son and wife, ultimately foolishly killing his own son with his own hands. Seeing this, Elise pondered. The stage continued vividly. If there were an evil witch, she could turn back time, but then she would be beheaded for treason. Elise suddenly thought of something. So this was a story about the royal family, it must be interesting. This woman was happily dating her Black Knight. Elise said to Anakin, what's playing on stage now is a play, but the ending is already arranged. You just need to act according to your role. The protagonist of this play might not be you, it could be a supporting role or a passerby. Anakin didn't care about these things, he couldn't change fate anyway. Elise was puzzled, you're not the protagonist, why aren't you angry? Anakin believed that living life to the fullest was enough. Elise got a bit angry, so because you're a supporting character, it's okay if your honor and love are taken away? Anakin really didn't care. Actually, he was originally not someone who attracted attention. If he wanted those things, he wouldn't have chosen this profession. Elise was completely speechless with him, saying he was a human without will or goals, uninteresting. Anakin retorted, did he really seem that way? He felt he had always been living hard. Perhaps everyone was trying hard, so it wasn't noticeable. Hearing what he said, Elise also felt it made sense. How could one casually measure others' efforts? She wanted to return to her original world, trying so hard. Perhaps in others' eyes, it was also so laughable. The closer to light, the more obvious the shadow. Perhaps those efforts are most clearly seen when approaching death. Anakin continued, actually, there's no need for everyone to know how hard you're trying. As long as you, my master, know, that's enough. What do you think? Is this a confession? Elise felt her mind go blank. How should she answer his question? Once said, it can't be taken back. I'm very scared, Anakin. The scene shifts, and the two came to a restaurant and ordered some snacks. The waiter thought she looked like Miss Mion. Elise teasingly replied, many people think so. She saw a report in the newspaper about her disappearance on the magic train, raising various questions about her disappearance. Could the magic train safely reach its destination and return successfully? Now the royal family and the Duke's plans were obstructed. They must be very anxious, right? Thinking of this, Elise felt truly vindicated. Taking this opportunity, she also planned to stay here for a while. Then she asked Anakin to borrow a boat from the inn, intending to go boating on the lake. Anakin also thought this proposal was quite nice. Then the two set off with prepared food, full of interest. On the way, Elise met the little girl from the inn. The little girl looked at her expectantly, then she placed freshly picked flowers in her hair. Looking at Elise like this, the little girl couldn't help but exclaim, "You're so beautiful." Elise also quite liked this little girl, praising her cuteness. She gave her some gold coins, and told her not to let others take them away. At the center of the lake, Elise was still pondering Anakin's question from yesterday. After thinking all night, she still felt it was better to say it out. Then she said seriously, Anakin, you are a character from a book I've read. Anakin's or suddenly stopped. Elise said seriously again, this world is a world from a book I've read. Anakin was stunned for a moment. Elise continued, you are a supporting character around Elise, and you've fallen in love with her. This girl's greatest wish is to return to her original world. At this moment, she looked at her face reflected in the lake water, a woman so beautiful it was startling, and she was afraid of gradually becoming familiar with this face. What if, after returning to her original world, the face in the mirror becomes unfamiliar? Meanwhile, Anakin's mind kept echoing Elise's words. This is a world from a book she's read, and he has fallen in love with Elise. As he was lost in thought, Elise's voice sounded again, I'm sorry, I've taken away the woman you were supposed to fall in love with. Anakin, however, said he was confused. Was he fake? How could he be sure he would fall in love with Elise? Elise explained, because that's how it's written in the book. I've already read the ending of this story. What if I don't act according to what's written in the book? Anakin continued to ask. Elise replied, if you don't follow the content of the book, it will be modified according to the law of causality. Even if you try to cut off my head with a sword now, I won't die, because it's not yet time for my death in the book. Anakin asked seriously, so does this mean that one day I will fall in love with you? Elise was momentarily speechless, she hadn't thought about this question. Anakin would fall in love with her, not Elise. Anakin then asked her, will you fall in love with me too? Elise turned her head away and answered coldly, no, I won't fall in love with you, so you shouldn't fall in love with me either. At this moment, Elise was thinking, actually, I'm afraid I might fall in love with you. Then she felt a bit frustrated. How could she think of such a selfish answer? I was determined to leave this world, how could I be so irresponsible? Feeling upset, she told Anakin to continue rowing. Suddenly, Elise had an idea. She hadn't tried jumping into the river yet. She asked Anakin to row to the edge of the cliff, but Anakin said it was too dangerous. But Elise said, the law of causality in this world will protect me, and even if something really happens to me, you will save me. Elise stood on the edge of the cliff. She had seen a movie before where the protagonist had only two ways to return to reality from a dream, either die or jump into water. She looked down the cliff and seemed a bit panicked, but it couldn't stop her determination to try. With a splash, water droplets flew up. Elise kept sinking. She suddenly enjoyed this feeling, believing that the deeper she sank, the sooner she would return before getting too deep. Suddenly someone wrapped their arm around her waist. With another splash, Elise was grabbed by the arm and her head emerged from the water. She kept coughing on the shore. Suddenly, a pair of hands grabbed her tightly. What on earth are you doing? Are you crazy? It turned out that the one who saved Elise was Yasin. Elise was stunned when she saw who it was. Seeing this woman being pulled by two men, the men's eyes met, as if a great battle was about to erupt. Just now, Elise, who had jumped into the water, was rescued to the shore. She had thought it would be Anakin heroically saving her, but unexpectedly, it was Yasin who came. Elise couldn't help but wonder, why was Yasin here? At this moment, a pain shot through her arm. She saw Yasin tightly gripping her arm. Elise told him to let go, secretly wondering where Anakin had gone. The next second, Anakin used his cloak to cover Elise's wet body. Anakin's dissatisfied voice came, how can you touch a lady's body so casually? Then the scene from the beginning appeared, with Yasin mocking him, a knight who can't even protect his own master dares to lecture others. The atmosphere dropped to a freezing point, and Elise looked at them awkwardly, thinking, what's going on? Back at the inn, she changed into clean clothes. She had originally planned to stay here for a while. Who could have imagined that Yasin would suddenly come looking for her? She sighed quietly, thinking it was such a pity to leave so soon. Just as she was about to leave the room, Yasin appeared, saying mockingly, "You're not trying to run away again, are you? Are you monitoring me?" Elise expressed her dissatisfaction. Yasin explained that things in the capital were now in chaos because of her. The magic train was also using her name for promotion, yet she had suddenly disappeared. Yasin also reminded her that although she hadn't been enthroned yet, the coming-of-age ceremony had been held, so she was already considered a royal-to-be. Elise clearly hadn't expected Yasin to put so much effort into finding her. She said casually that she wanted to go to the souvenir shop and would be back soon. Yasin said that Anakin was packing his luggage, so he probably couldn't accompany her, right? He suggested he accompany her instead. Elise sighed deeply. "Do as you please, then." Soon, the two of them arrived at a boutique diamond shop. The salesperson warmly welcomed them. "Are you looking to buy a gift? Is this gentleman your husband?" Hearing this, Yasin flashed a handsome smile. Elise answered irritably, "We're not married. I want to buy a gift for my attendant." Yasin teased her. "You denied it so firmly, it's truly heartbreaking," Elise said coldly. "That's none of my business." She then asked Yasin how he knew she was in the larder district. Yasin looked innocent. "You caused such a big trouble. Did you really think no one would track you?" Elise said it was just later than she had expected, but she hadn't thought Sir Carl would come personally. Yasin continued to say that he had volunteered to come find her. Elise casually asked, "You haven't been back home for a long time, shouldn't you visit your elders?" Yasin replied, "I don't really like chatting with old folks." As soon as he finished speaking, Elise's voice came, "I also don't like chatting idly with Sir Carl." Just now, this woman had bluntly said, "I don't like chatting with you." Yasin didn't get angry, instead he had a mischievous expression. He said, "Then shall we do something else instead of chatting?" Elise stepped on Yasin's foot with lightning speed. Then she looked at him coldly. She never thought of being nice to people she didn't like. Yasin didn't seem to feel any pain. For someone trained since childhood, this was nothing. Instead, he thought Elise was a bit rude. Elise retorted without any courtesy, "Talking nonsense naturally deserves punishment. It was just a little step, are you not happy with it?" Yasin was stumped by her words. He couldn't help but say, "Your words and actions all concern me." Elise said in an icy tone, "Are you blaming me?" Yasin got serious too. "Yes, so please tell me how not to care about you." Elise angrily replied, "Why ask me such a question? I've never cared about myself." Yasin was stunned. He clearly hadn't expected to hear such an answer. At this moment, the salesperson suddenly appeared, successfully breaking the awkward atmosphere. He happily held a box. He took out a gem called the Tears of Vivian, the Lake Fairy, saying this was a precious raw gem that only he had. Elise looked at it with satisfaction and ordered a few necklaces to be made with it. Yasin was also looking at the gems on the counter, picking one up to examine closely. Elise slowly walked towards him. She asked if it was for Helena. Yasin said he wanted to make it himself for her, so Elise was speechless. She suggested Yasin buy a ready-made one, saying if it's not made well, the person receiving the gift would also feel awkward. Yasin said emotionally, "I just want Helena to carry something I made myself." Hearing this, Elise got goosebumps, secretly criticizing him for being such a lovesick fool, even more lovesick than Huli's. She wondered why there wasn't a single normal person here. Suddenly, Elise felt a bit sorry for Helena. She noticed a gem that was different from the others. The salesperson told her, "This gem is the hardest to sell. Its color is murky, it's not hard enough, and it's easily scratched." Elise pondered the salesperson's description. Murky, not hard enough, not shiny enough, so it can't be sold. This seemed just like herself. She immediately asked the salesperson to make another necklace with this raw gem, and in this style. The salesperson repeatedly reminded her, "It will be very uncomfortable to wear like this." Elise didn't pay attention. After all, she wasn't going to wear it herself. As they walked out of the store, Anakin was already waiting there. He said, "Some thieves learned that Elise was in this village and are lying in ambush in various forests, so he would drive the carriage himself to ensure her safety." Before he could finish, Elise interrupted him, telling him to kneel down immediately. The next second, Elise took out the gem necklace she had just customized. She gently put it on Anakin. Anakin looked at the woman before him with emotion in his eyes. He didn't know if he would fall in love with her in the future, but right now he had good feelings for her. After putting it on, Anakin gently touched the necklace. Elise asked if it was uncomfortable. Anakin nodded, and Elise was pleased. She loved Anakin's honesty so much, but her purpose was to make him uncomfortable. This way, when he feels uncomfortable in the future, he will think of her. Suddenly she turned her head away, feeling a bit embarrassed. She was annoyed at herself for having such thoughts. Wasn't this just like Yasin? Meanwhile, Yasin had an expression of watching a good show. They soon set off on their journey. Yasin's voice kept coming from the carriage, "A noble lady eloping with her knight. do you know what kind of ending that would bring? If the royal family and the Marquis find out, your knight will be beheaded for this, and you will be imprisoned in the palace forever. Elise looked displeased. Eloping? I didn't expect Sir Carl to be so romantic. You saw me jump off the cliff, don't you understand? I came to the larder district to seek death. Yasin didn't believe Elise's words, thinking that women in love would all be blinded by love. Elise impatiently said, if you don't want to believe it, fine. Suit yourself. Yasin also started to be shocked. He asked why. Elise threw him a sentence. Does this need a reason? Yasin persisted in asking, why do you want to end your life? Elise said coldly, it's not because I can't see a way out, but because even if I die now, I have nothing to be attached to. For Yasin, who carries the fate of the dragon slayer and has a strong desire to live when going to slay dragons, no matter how she explains, he won't be able to understand. She told Yasin that he had a strong desire to see Helena in his heart, but she didn't. So she asked him not to waste words with that insignificant sympathy. Yasin said that if Elise really knew his heart, she wouldn't say such things. Elise became more impatient. That's enough, don't talk about these overstepping topics anymore. Before they could finish talking, a commotion was heard from outside the carriage. It turned out to be a group of fierce bandits. This man who was arguing with the woman just a second ago, now stood in front of a group of bandits to protect her. Make way now and I'll spare your lives. The bandits laughed after hearing this. Relying on their numbers, they told him to get lost quickly. Yasin, after all, was the dragon-slaying hero. These bandits successfully aroused his desire to conquer. He told Elise and Anakin to leave first. Elise was a bit anxious, she didn't want Yasin to face them alone. Yasin firmly said, the bandits must have accomplices. He needed to stay and fight them, and after returning to the capital he would willingly accept Elise's punishment. Elise shouted loudly, hoping he wouldn't be rash. At this time, Anakin rode over on a horse and reached out to Elise, urgently wanting to take her away from this dangerous place. Elise put her hand in his. Sitting on the horse's back, Anakin felt Elise's uneasiness and told her to relax and lean on his chest. It would be more comfortable that way. They galloped on the road home, getting further and further away from Yasin. Although Elise didn't like him very much, she still hoped he would be safe. As the sun was setting, Elise softly asked Anakin how far it was to the capital. Anakin said it would take 2 more days. Hearing this, Elise felt inexplicably sad, thinking her bottom would be rubbed raw by the time they reached the capital. Anakin immediately expressed concern and suggested, shall we buy a cushion in the village? Elise said lazily, no need, it's too much trouble. Anakin saw Elise's gloomy look and felt a bit heartbroken. He said, then let me tell you a story. Sure enough, Elise perked up a bit and asked Anakin if he was going to tell his own story. Anakin said his own story was too plain and uninteresting, not worth telling. If he had to tell his own story, he would talk about the present, because he didn't want to dwell on the past. Hearing him say this, Elise fell into deep thought. If one day she also became Anakin's past, would he still be so nonchalant about not dwelling on the past? Perhaps she wasn't an important person to Anakin, he was only loyal to her because she was his master. Anakin continued, so please don't order me to look back on the past, and don't ask me what I'll do in the future. I'm foolish, I can only do one thing at a time. Elise leaned against his chest. Then what do you want to do now? Anakin said gently, now I just want to get you safely back to the capital. Elise suddenly realized, indeed, I do like this person. No matter how selfish and willful she was, he never blamed her. He was the only one who stood by her side, the only person who belonged to her. Perhaps even after returning to the original world, I won't be able to forget you, so I hope you can remember me like I remember you, remember me for a long time. Elise and Anakin returned to the capital. As soon as they got home, she was scolded harshly by the Marquis. It seems her escape this time had thoroughly angered him. He told Elise not to think she could escape his eyes. Elise expressed confusion, saying she didn't understand what her father meant. The Marquis continued to accuse her, saying the purpose of arranging a night for her was to avoid others' attention and secretly handle those dirty, ugly matters for her. Elise was even more confused. After all, she had chosen the night herself, not the Marquis. Hearing this, the Marquis was furious, because he noticed Elise hadn't used an honorific when addressing him. Elise also wanted to take this opportunity to clarify things with him. It was you who first broke this relationship. That's right, it was you. I'm not your daughter, you already know that, don't you? Since you know, I don't need to cater to you anymore. The Marquis couldn't believe she was talking back to him, his fists clenched tightly as he trembled with anger. Elise continued in an icy tone, if you don't want to die, do as I say. Don't bother with those old-fashioned threats, because I'm wholeheartedly seeking death. The Marquis glared at her dissatisfied, saying the most vicious words, to think such a despicable and shameless thing has occupied my daughter's body. Hearing this, Elise couldn't help but laugh. You never truly loved your own daughter, yet you speak so righteously. If the Marquis truly loved Elise, he wouldn't have spoiled and indulged her so much. He would give Elise anything she wanted. To be precise, he made Elise want things that were beneficial to him. Elise continued, if you truly loved her, you would have let her break off this sham engagement long ago. But for your own power, you've been pretending not to see. You're a clear-sighted person, you discovered long ago that I'm not your daughter. Who would believe that you didn't know she was devastated because of the crown prince? The Marquis shouted at Elise to shut up, saying he truly loved his daughter. It was because he loved her that he wanted her to sit in the highest position. Elise told him, the highest position doesn't represent happiness. Look at those so-called supreme people around you, look at those faces in the palace, are they really happy? The Marquis was left speechless. After calming down, he said, so what do you want to do? Elise asked him back, if I tell you, will you help me? The Marquis coldly replied, that depends on the situation. Elise didn't have much hope for this. She continued calmly, never mind, I've already found a better helper than you. Anyone could guess that if she said she wanted to die, the Marquis definitely wouldn't help her. She wasn't Elise, so he didn't know what kind of person she really was. To the Marquis now, she was just a chess piece that he would regret discarding, but that threatened him if kept. The Marquis wanted to say something but was interrupted by a knock on the door. Someone from the palace asked Elise to go there immediately, as the Queen had urgent matters to discuss with her. Elise naturally didn't dare to keep the Queen waiting. She curtsied to the Marquis and took her leave. In their confrontation, Elise had gained the upper hand. Soon she arrived at the palace to meet the Queen. What was the Queen's purpose this time? This woman was very anxious. The Queen, who had always despised her, suddenly summoned her. Had she had a change of heart? Elise picked up a cup of tea but found the tea was black. At this moment, the Queen's voice came, why aren't you drinking? Afraid I've poisoned you? Elise put down the teacup calmly, how could that be? It's just that I can't drink things that are too hot. I'll drink it when it cools down. She also thought that the Queen naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to poison her personally. The Queen spoke coldly, I thought you would lock yourself in your room and not come out. Isn't that your personality? If you're not the one in the spotlight, you get jealous of others. Elise smiled, saying she didn't understand the Queen's meaning and asked for her guidance. The Queen was amused by her manner and said, didn't you act quite smart at the coming-of-age ceremony? The Queen got straight to the point, you knew early on that I gave your ceremonial dress to Helena, didn't you? Elise hadn't expected the Queen to admit it was her doing. Elise answered calmly, I know that to be prepared for any eventuality, there's always a spare dress. If it weren't for your Majesty's care, Helena couldn't have gotten that dress. Of course, this is just my guess. Am I right, Your Majesty? The Queen suddenly felt a bit of admiration for her, teasing that she seemed more suited to be a detective than a crown princess. The Queen continued, saying she had the shop owner hand over that dress, then disposed of the dress Yasin gave to Helena and had her wear Elise's ceremonial dress instead. Although Elise knew the Queen disliked her, she couldn't help but ask, why did you do this to me? The Queen spoke coldly, I just don't like you. You, who are to be the crown princess, are too vicious and cold. If the Mian Marquis family truly becomes the royal in-laws, how arrogant would their power become? Elise asked back, so you chose Helena, the daughter of a traitor with a commoner status? She's just a maid. She doesn't understand anything about the duties of a queen or state affairs. The Queen felt that Helena was her ideal choice. She had no powerful relatives, was kind-hearted, and most importantly, would be obedient to the royal family. Her beauty had already captured the crown prince's heart, so there was no need to worry about the issue of heirs. As for the Queen's duties, she could teach her when the time came. Indeed, what the Queen wanted was not a daughter-in-law, but her own puppet. Poor Helena, no one respected her as a person. The Queen no longer beat around the bush. I humiliated you like that. You may hate me or resent me, it doesn't matter. But no matter what you think, I will only hate you more, Elise. I even want to kill you. Although it wasn't you who killed my son, you are the most beloved daughter of the Mian Marquis. After losing my most beloved son, my heart bleeds every day. My life is already hell, so it doesn't matter if I fall into hell again by killing an innocent woman. After all, the Marquis also killed my innocent son, didn't he? The Queen continued through gritted teeth, if I really wanted to torment you, I would have let you become the crown princess, and then slowly tortured you to death after you entered the palace. But when I saw those two men who killed my son trying every means to make you the crown princess, I couldn't stand it anymore. At this point, Elise also stated her position, I don't want to marry the crown prince. Hearing her words, the Queen was stunned, haven't you always loved the prince? Elise replied, isn't love the easiest thing to spoil in this world? You understand this very well, don't you? She continued, although I once thought it was all worth enduring, it's not anymore. If you allow, I want to sever all ties with this place. The Queen looked incredulous and quickly asked, does the Marquis know about your thoughts? Elise calmly stated her attitude, whether my father knows or not is not important. I just hope you can know my thoughts. This woman was too fierce. Not only did she want to break off the engagement with the crown prince, but she also wanted to personally teach the next crown princess. Elise applied to the queen to let her teach Helena some responsibilities, because if the queen taught her herself, it would certainly cause a lot of unnecessary gossip. In fact, Elise's desire to teach Helena was also out of self-interest. She needed opportunities to be alone with Helena. If the story develops according to the novel's ending, she must kill Helena once. This way, she would be sentenced to death, but in the novel, there was no plot of her teaching Helena. She didn't know if it would be rejected due to the law of causality. After a long wait, the queen finally agreed. She said, "Indeed, you are not the best wife for my son. He needs someone more obedient and docile." After receiving the queen's permission, Elise stood up to leave. She also breathed a sigh of relief, finally able to enter the next stage. Since she had obtained the queen's help, she should quickly start by setting a study time with Helena. As she was walking, she suddenly saw a large mirror, and in the mirror appeared Medea's figure. Elise hurriedly walked over and asked Medea if she could control people outside the visible range. Medea didn't think this was control, just suggestion. She told Medea to get to the point. After all, they were in the palace and couldn't talk for long. Medea happily told her she had found a method, asking her to come to the shop immediately. Elise arrived at Medea's shop. Medea used magic to float a small package slowly towards Elise. Elise carefully opened it. A small blunt sword appeared before her eyes. Elise was a bit surprised, thinking this sword couldn't even open an envelope. Medea told her not to underestimate this sword. It would change its purpose according to the wielder's intention. She should use this sword for the assassination. Hearing this, Elise was stunned. "Assassinate who?" Medea said. "Who else could it be? The person this body's owner was supposed to kill." Hearing this, how could Elise not understand the meaning? She looked at the sword in her hand. Was she to use it to assassinate Helena? She hesitated. Even if it was an event from the novel, she couldn't kill an innocent person for no reason. It would be better to be treated as a witch and burned at the stake. Although in the novel, Elise would die as long as she killed Helena, but at this moment, Medea's voice sounded again, reminding her to soak it in fresh blood. Elise still didn't believe the sword could hurt humans, it was clearly just a blunt object. Medea emphasized again that it would change according to her intention. She needed to have a genuine intention to kill her. This woman dreamed of leaving this place, but when she found the real way to go back, she hesitated. Elise felt a bit lost. Had she been careless? She thought she could go back without killing anyone. She didn't want to poison Helena, but now she had to stab her with her own hands. Although it's the same act of killing, the sense of guilt would be completely different, right? The last time she saw her, she looked so pitiful. Elise replied, "Isn't it enough just to kill her? Why must it be assassination?" Medea was a bit confused by her reaction. "Why are you suddenly soft-hearted? Didn't you say you would do anything to return to your original world?" "I finally found a way, but you're backing out. You're not getting attached to her, are you?" Elise snorted. What a joke. But could she really sacrifice an innocent person to save herself? She silently asked herself. Would those sacrificed people feel angry or wronged? Helena must really want to live on, even though life is hard now. She always believed that happiness would come one day, and she had enough qualifications to enjoy happiness. But for me, I am the most important. Medea interrupted Elise's thoughts. She slightly opened her palm and magic was born in her hand. A bottle floated in front of her. Medea said she needed another sacrifice, which was tears. Put the tears in this bottle. Elise didn't understand. What tears? But Medea played coy, saying she didn't want to tell her, let her figure it out herself. Then she playfully poked Elise's forehead. You're so smart and clever, you'll surely find the answer. Elise was speechless. This Medea seemed to really enjoy this situation. Elise returned home. She took out a money bag and gave it to Anakin, telling him to give it to the little girl, so he could rest at home for a few days. Anakin said what his sister did wasn't worth that much money. Elise was a bit annoyed. It's not your money, why are you managing so much? Anyway, I'll be at home these few days, so you can go back with peace of mind. After saying this, she turned to leave. Anakin anxiously tried to grab her hand. Elise paused for a moment and turned to look at him. Anakin seemed a bit embarrassed, but still asked, will you come back with me? Elise expressed confusion. Why should I go? Anakin's voice came slowly. I hope the master can come with me. He looked serious. I don't want to leave the master alone at home. This elegant woman was saying the most vicious words. Alec has no feelings for you. You can try dressing up like a street prostitute and then go seduce him. This woman was none other than the queen. She told Elise that Alec didn't want to marry her, he wanted to marry Helena. Elise stood there expressionless. The queen continued, this way, if you happen to have a child, maybe Alec will choose you. Although your looks can't compare to Helena's, you're not ugly. A maid nearby couldn't help but chuckle. Unexpectedly, Elise showed a bright smile. Thank you for your advice. I'll keep it in mind. The queen was surprised. She hadn't expected Elise to react so nonchalantly, so she told Elise to leave first. She watched Elise's slowly retreating figure. Suddenly leaning back in her chair, she slowly said, quickly call Helena over. After a while, both the Crown Prince and Helena came. The Crown Prince spoke first. "We happened to meet Helena on the way here." Helena hurriedly apologized. "I should have come quickly. It's my fault for being late." The Crown Prince immediately defended her, saying coldly, "This isn't your fault. If Elise hadn't insisted on walking with you, you would have arrived earlier." Helena couldn't help but explain, "Elise didn't know the Queen wanted to see me." The Crown Prince scoffed, "Humph, who cares about her? Helena, you're just too kind." Hearing this, the Queen spoke calmly, "Did you see Elise on your way here?" The Crown Prince started complaining, "Yes, we just saw her in the back garden. I didn't even summon her, yet she keeps entering and leaving the palace. It's giving me a headache." The Queen asked again, "Didn't Elise cry when she saw you?" The Crown Prince said, "No, she's the daughter of that poisonous snake of a marquis. How could she have something like tears? I've never seen Elise cry, and she always wears that unpleasant smile. Today was no exception." Helena was startled by the Crown Prince's denial, while the Queen looked at the reflection in her cup. She couldn't help but think, indeed, Elise never cries, just like him. Even when she had just ruthlessly insulted her, she didn't cry. They say the Queen doesn't cry, because she thinks a woman who was stupidly deceived, leading to her son's death, has no right to cry. But why doesn't Elise cry? In fact, what both the Crown Prince and the Queen didn't know was that just as Helena was coming over, she saw Elise. At that time, she was secretly crying in the back garden. Covering her mouth and crying silently, Elise was crying so sadly and helplessly. The Queen pulled herself out of her memories. She thought of what Elise had said to her today. "Isn't love the easiest thing to spoil in this world? I believe your Majesty understands this very well. If you allow, I want to sever all ties with this place." The Queen couldn't help but pity Elise. Knowing nothing, yet losing the love of the one she loved because of her father's crimes. Finally losing all hope, what a miserable life. But in the Queen's view, she herself was the most pitiful. No matter how wronged or miserable Elise was, it was still a bit better than herself, who had been betrayed by her loved one and lost her child. Her position was never sustained by love in the first place. The expiration date of love is shorter than a season of flowers. Today, the Queen was also thinking, so there's an old and ugly monster in this mirror. This man was now blushing with embarrassment. Just now, he had invited a girl to his home for the first time. Elise was very surprised. Anakin usually wouldn't make requests of her, but she seemed to have understood his thoughts. She then sighed and said to him, "Go prepare quickly before I change my mind." Soon after, they arrived at Anakin's home. Anakin knocked on the door forcefully. Hearing the knocking, the little girl came to open the door, muttering, "Who is it?" Anakin told her not to be naughty and opened the door quickly, saying he had brought a guest. The little girl opened the door while complaining, "What guest do you have? I've never seen you bring a girlfriend home before." Before she could finish, she spotted Elise beside him. After welcoming Elise in, the little girl quickly pulled her brother aside and whispered that the house was a mess and hadn't been cleaned yet. Elise overheard their conversation and teased, "I originally wanted your brother to go home by himself, but he insisted on bringing me along." At this moment, Elise thought to herself, "I was originally worried about how a child would live, but it's cleaner than I expected. Now I can relax." She had originally planned to send Anakin home and cry alone, wanting to give herself some time for self-pity before becoming a cruel murderer. Just then, the little girl's voice interrupted Elise's thoughts. The little girl asked if she wanted some tea. Elise asked her to come over, saying she had something to tell her. She asked Anakin to prepare the tea, okay? She asked the little girl what her name was. The little girl said timidly that her name was Petty. Elise then asked, "What about the new name you gave yourself?" The little girl shyly whispered her new name, Kendia. Elise praised the name, saying it sounded nice. She thought to herself that the name given by her drunken father would inevitably be disliked. It was quite thoughtful of her to think of giving herself a new name. Then Elise took out a money bag and placed it in front of her. "This is the hard-earned money I promised you last time. The reward for luring hoolies out is also included, and of course, your hush money too." Kendia looked at the money bag with shining eyes, asking in disbelief, "Is all this for me?" Elise nodded. The hush money was buying her life, so it wasn't really that much when she thought about it. Kendia was thrilled holding the money bag. Elise told her to buy some food for her little friends in town. After all, it's not easy to get others to do things for you. Anakin brought the prepared tea to Elise, then stood beside her. Elise suddenly remembered buying gifts for her maids during her journey, and she also brought one for Kendia. So Elise took out a ruby necklace and gently helped her put it on. Kendia looked at the necklace that now belonged to her with a happy face. It was her first time seeing such a beautiful ruby. Elise said now that she had this necklace, she should sell the earrings she gave her last time, which could also supplement the household income. Anakin looked at the woman before him, his eyes full of emotion and admiration. She was truly so gentle, as beautiful and kind as an angel. Elise said to Kendia, "Actually, I wanted to ask you to help with something this time." Kendia gladly agreed, telling her to go ahead and ask. Alisai expressed that she needed someone well-versed in royal etiquette, but that person couldn't have any connection to the royal family, preferably someone who hated the royal family. This woman, in order to return to her original world, ultimately decided to assassinate Helena. So she asked Tia to help her find someone who hated the royal family and understood royal etiquette. Because she didn't understand royal etiquette herself, to properly teach Helena, she needed someone who understood etiquette to help. Tia readily agreed, saying she would definitely find someone satisfactory within a week. Then Tia gave 2 gold coins to her brother, asking him to help buy cookies and bread. She was going to distribute them to her little friends as Alisai had instructed. Anakin left after getting Alisai's permission. He also said he would be back soon. Watching Anakin's retreating figure, Alisai sighed to herself. Looks like he's used to being ordered around by his sister. She asked Tia, has Anakin smiled recently? Tia still had a stiff demeanor, answering formally, he hasn't been seen smiling, but he looks very happy recently. Before, she would think her brother was scary, like a puppet controlled by a witch. Though he breathed, he didn't seem like a living person. Alisai continued to ask, he now has a new name, called Anakin. Tia thought the name was cool when she heard it. Alisai asked her, why didn't you give your brother a name? Tia looked a bit sad. It wasn't that they hadn't given him one, but he felt it unnecessary, saying no one would call him anyway, so having a name was meaningless. Maybe he didn't want others to remember him. In these back alleys, developing feelings would only lead to disadvantage. Then she shyly said, thank you for giving my brother's life meaning. Alisai found her shy demeanor instantly adorable, and her ears turned red, just like Anakin's. Alisai asked herself, it's mutual, isn't it? He also gave meaning to my life. She asked Tia if she was interested in becoming her maid. Tia understood her good intentions but still declined. She thought that as long as she had money, life here was quite good. Most importantly, it was more convenient for her to help with tasks and gather information for Alisai from the outside. As the sound of the door opening was heard, Anakin returned. Alisai looked at the girl before her, thinking that if she could grow up in a better environment, she would surely become someone important. What a pity, this child might become the ruler of these back alleys in the future. Maybe she should introduce her to Medea before leaving, she would definitely like her. Alisai and Anakin were walking on the way home. Suddenly she stopped and asked Anakin why he didn't refuse. Anakin was puzzled. Alisai continued, saying why didn't he refuse when she gave him a name? Didn't he firmly refuse when Tia wanted to give him a name? Anakin asked her in return why she wanted to give him a name. Before, he had thought that if someone were to give him a name, he hoped it would be the person who called him the most. After all, a name wasn't for calling oneself. Then he slowly walked up to Alisai. This man gently placed the woman's hand on his forehead. Anakin said with deep affection, actually, Master didn't need to give me a name. You could have just used me like a tool, like everyone else around me. But Master chose to give me a name. At that moment I knew that Master would definitely call my name often in the future. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, you will always call my name. Anakin's eyes were full of gratitude, so it's truly my honor to serve you. Hearing Anakin's heartfelt confession, Alisai's eyes dimmed. She felt indescribably sad at this moment. What if I return to my original world? What will you do with this name? Anakin answered honestly, I've never thought about it, but Master said before that I'm suitable to be a wandering knight. Maybe I'll try that. It wouldn't be bad to become famous using the name Master gave me. Hearing these words, Alisai was very touched. Anakin meant that even if she left, he would still be her person. Did Alisai give you a name? If she did, what name would she have given you? What's your ending after Alisai's death in the novel? How did you live afterwards? The original story didn't write about Anakin's ending, so I have no clue. Alisai was very worried. Could Anakin still live after her death? Could she still save his life? After Alisai returned home, Emma brought an envelope. It was an invitation to a tea party from Duke Carl's mansion. Alisai asked what kind of tea party it was. Emma said it's for Miss Carl's debut into society. Looks like they need your guidance. Alisai thought to herself, could Miss Carl be Yazin's sister? A few days later, the day of the tea party arrived. The carriage was moving steadily on the road. Alisai recalled the contents of the letter. My little girl is about to enter society. How can she become as beautiful and cultured as Ms. Mian? Knowing that you, as the fiancé of the Crown Prince, are very busy every day, if you could personally guide my little girl, she would be honored. Alisai, dressed in a yellow court gown, slowly stepped down from the carriage, looking at the group of Duke's daughters. Could that sentence mean she absolutely doesn't want me to come? The carriage reached its destination. Alisai, dressed in a yellow court gown, slowly stepped down from the carriage, looking at the group of Duke's daughters before her. Alisai seemed to understand. She didn't want to leave Alisai out, so she reluctantly sent the invitation. Now I've become the inconsiderate one. No wonder the maids were so desperate to dress her up. They didn't want her to lose face. At this moment, a voice came. You look younger than usual today. And these words full of gunpowder came from the Duchess of Karl, Yazin's mother. Today is Miss Carl's tea party. Alisai had just arrived at the scene when she was mocked by the Duchess of Carl. She ridiculed Alisai, saying that when she stands next to the Crown Prince, they look like very close siblings. Alisai naturally wasn't one to be bullied and immediately retorted, saying she suddenly looked very mature. It seems the women of the Carl family always grow up very quickly. The Duchess, unwilling to back down, counterattacked, because unlike the Mian family who hold gold, the Carl family's destiny is to hold swords, so the women of the family mature and become steady earlier. Alisai mocked her, saying she needs to work hard on maintaining her looks, otherwise aging faster than others wouldn't be good. Luckily she holds gold, so she should age slowly. The Duchess was left speechless, only able to glare at her viciously. Alisai silently complained to herself. This Alisai really has a lot of enemies. They all want to dampen her spirit before she officially becomes the Crown Prince's fiancée. The tea party began. Everyone took turns mocking Alisai. The girl in pink pretended to apologize. If I had known it would be so boring for Ms. Mian, I wouldn't have invited you. The girl in yellow immediately chimed in. It's understandable. When first entering society, one usually follows mother's traditions. The girl in pink gossiped. Although Ms. Mian's mother passed away early and she didn't learn much, but her debut was still very outstanding, extremely luxurious. Hearing these cold remarks, Alisai was very angry. How dare they treat the Marquis mansion like nouveau riche, truly audacious. She picked up a cup of tea and slowly opened her mouth. Do I look very bored to you? But I could fully enjoy myself with just one gesture. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone looked at her with terrified expressions. Alisai continued, the tea is still very hot. The girl in yellow looked a bit scared, saying this joke was going too far. Alisai coldly replied, you think I'm joking? The girl in pink next to her shouted, are you threatening her? Are you going to pour tea on her? Just because you're so vicious, that's why you were abandoned by the Crown Prince. People started whispering again. Who doesn't know about what happened at Alisai's coming-of-age ceremony? Alisai, who was already in a bad mood, felt even worse now. So annoying. It's not that I was dumped by the Crown Prince, but that I dumped him. I really want to say it out loud. Suddenly, a hand rested on Alisai's shoulder. This woman is the Crown Prince's fiancée, but right now, she's being mocked by a group of noble young ladies. Just when Alisai couldn't take it anymore, Yazan appeared. He interrupted their topic, and said he wanted to take Alisai away. He had something to say to her. The others were just hoping Alisai would leave, so they readily agreed to Yazan's proposal. Alisai's expression was cold, inwardly complaining, shouldn't you get my consent? Alisai was about to object, but Yazan grabbed her hand and pulled her away with big steps. They came to a small garden. Alisai told him to let go of her hand first, but Yazan acted as if he hadn't heard and kept walking on his own. Alisai, who was already in a bad mood, forcefully shook off his hand. Her wrist where she had been grabbed was in pain. At this time Yazan's voice sounded, you don't need to thank me. Alisai loudly questioned him, why should I thank you? Yazan replied without thinking, because I rescued you from such an ugly situation. Alisai retorted irritably, it's not that you rescued me, but that you rescued your sister. Because if I had stayed a bit longer, I would have thrown hot tea on her face. Yazan found it a bit funny. I didn't expect Alisai to still be so interesting. Seeing Yazan's smirking face made her even angrier. Yazan then said, I had prepared myself to be scolded by the lady before coming to find you. Alisai knew it was about the matter of confronting the robbers. He had insisted on staying to fight despite her objections. Alisai said, I don't reprimand mistakes at the time, I forget about them afterwards, so you shouldn't have any entanglements with me either. Unexpectedly, Yazan said, then can I tell the Crown Prince about your mental illness? Alisai was stunned for a moment. Then she angrily said, do you know what you're saying? Yazan's tone was cold, of course I do. Even if the Mian Marquis family is powerful, the royal family won't allow it. After all, there can't be madness in the royal bloodline. Alisai wasn't intimidated at all. She thought to herself, say it if you want to. She retorted, let's see who ends up being seen as the madman. Also, you seem to have a big misunderstanding. I no longer have any attachment to the position of Crown Princess. Yazan looked at her with surprise. Alisai asked him why he was looking at her that way. Did he think she would love the prince forever? Yazan answered, I'm just surprised. Weren't you only kind to the Crown Prince? Only to him alone. Alisai explained, because I understood that one-sided passion won't get love. Perhaps this applies to Sir Carl too. Can you believe it? This woman, as the Crown Prince's fiancée, is solely focused on breaking off the engagement. And if she could dissolve the engagement, Helena would be the next Crown Princess. In the original novel plot, the current Helena hasn't fallen in love with the Crown Prince yet. If Yazan wants to win Helena's heart, just being kind and pleasing won't work, but it's also not about Yazan revealing his inner darkness and perversion. Alisai told Yazan, she understood that the Crown Prince would never love her in this life, so now she just wants to calm down and rest for a while. Hearing this, Yazan was shocked, so that's why you plan to die? Alisai felt like talking to him was like playing the zither to a cow. she just wanted to roll her eyes at him. She said, "Anyway, you won't believe what I say, so think whatever you want." She was about to leave after saying this. Yazan quickly replied, "I believe you, so tell me more." Alisai said, "Now I don't trust you. How can I trust you when you keep trying to threaten me?" Alisai loudly questioned, "Using a lady's weakness as a threat, don't you feel ashamed as a knight?" Yazan reflected that it seemed to be so, but for some reason he always became so embarrassing in front of her. Alisai turned her head indifferently. "It's okay, if you pretended to be a good man in front of me, it would make me despise you even more." Yazan shook his head, "Although I'm quite bad too, you're too harsh on me." Alisai was instantly speechless, because unlike certain people, I treat everyone fairly. "But do you have time to care about me like this? If I withdraw, the next candidate for crown princess will be Helena." Yazan was stunned on the spot, speechless for a long time. Alisai asked him, "Have we finished talking? Then I'll take my leave." Then she left without looking back. It took Yazan a long time to react. He actually forgot. How could he completely forget about Helena? A week quickly passed. Tia indeed found an etiquette teacher according to the agreement, and it fully met Alisai's stated conditions. Alisai looked at the person before her. She seemed quite strict. What did she do before? Anakin answered, "She was the late crown prince's wet nurse." Alisai was full of admiration upon hearing this. Tia was really good at picking people. Not only was she proficient in royal etiquette but also hated the royal family. Most importantly, she hated the Mian family more than anyone else. Truly the best candidate. As soon as the wet nurse walked in, she asked, "I heard my enemy is looking for me?" Alisai asked Anakin to go fetch Helena, secretly delighted. Now all the pieces are in place, just waiting for Helena. Anakin came to where Helena was and called her to come over now. Helena asked softly, "Do you have something?" Only to hear a reply, "The lessons are about to start now." This old woman is too bold. Facing the villainous Alisai, she actually splashed a cup of tea on her face. It all started half an hour ago. Alisai found a suitable candidate. She was not only the late crown prince's wet nurse but also an excellent etiquette teacher. The wet nurse was puzzled. Shouldn't Alisai have received a good education since childhood? Now she actually needs me to teach etiquette. Alisai had her own plans. After all, the stance when receiving education and when teaching others is completely different. The wet nurse inquired, "Who is this others you're referring to?" This was important to her, as she needed to assess where to start teaching from. Alisai told her, "That person is Helena. She's the daughter of Prince Alex's wet nurse, now a lower-ranked maid." The wet nurse began to ridicule Alisai. "To teach an uneducated country girl, looks like you'll have to start from scratch too. As you know, before I became Prince Taisho's wet nurse, I was the crown princess's tutor. It was precisely because I was the queen's teacher that I managed to keep my life in that great purge after the prince's death." Alisai pondered, "This person is not only the late crown prince's wet nurse but also the queen's teacher. Perhaps her hatred for the royal family is deeper than I imagined." The wet nurse had just finished speaking when she picked up the teacup. The next second, she threw the tea at Alisai. Alisai let the tea slide down her face. She didn't get angry but looked up at the wet nurse. The wet nurse could no longer contain her anger. "I stepped into this detestable Mian mansion for only one reason. I came to see how the hateful person who harmed other people's children is raising her own daughter." Emma, seeing this scene, cried out, "How dare you treat the young lady like this?" Then she took out a handkerchief and sympathetically helped Alisai wipe her face. Alisai gestured for Emma to stop talking and asked her to leave first. The wet nurse asked her why she sent the maid away. Alisai told her, "Because I don't want others to hear what I'm about to say." "Why do you think I would have a girl from the commoners' district find you? Do you remember who I want to teach? Why do you think she needs to learn royal etiquette?" The wet nurse was stunned, her mind in chaos. Alisai stood up and continued, "His Majesty and the Marquis don't know about this yet. The only ones who know are Her Majesty the Queen, myself, and now you. I think the common point among us three is that we all hate those two men, am I right?" The wet nurse said she had never heard of Alisai disliking her father. Alisai asked in return, "Don't you understand the principle that family shame should not be aired in public?" The wet nurse told Alisai, "Even if you give up being the crown princess, it won't have much impact on the Marquis." Alisai confidently opened her mouth. "Don't worry, I have my ways to make that man fall. So what's your answer?" The wet nurse straightened her back and agreed to Alisai, but said she was very strict. "You need to be prepared." Alisai's expression was determined. "All right, teacher." This girl was an ordinary office worker in her previous life. When she woke up, she found herself transported into a cliché romance novel. Looking at herself in the mirror, she once again felt the malice of fate towards her. The girl's name after transmigrating was Alisai, the vicious female antagonist in the novel. At this moment, she strode into the palace with her head held high, but drew sidelong glances, because her attire today was too plain. Usually, Alisai would dress as lavishly as possible, but today she was completely different. Alisai glanced at them. These people are really too idle. What does it matter to them how others dress? If she dressed lavishly like before, it would only cause inconvenience when teaching Helena. Since they've all seen it now, I really hope this could start a trend of comfortable clothing. No, what's important now isn't this, but hoping that Helena isn't a fool. The door slowly opened. Helena looked at Alisai with an innocent face. I heard you were looking for me? Alisai looked at her little white flower expression and felt helpless. This child can't possibly not be stupid. I just hope she's not hopelessly stupid. Alisai told her to come in, then stared at her intently. Helena immediately panicked. She softly asked Alisai, why did you suddenly call for me? Alisai was puzzled. How did she survive in the palace with such a timid personality? But everyone in the palace likes her, so of course there's no problem. If anything happens to her, she just needs to smile. There's no need for her to dirty her own hands, because others will actively seek revenge for her. In the end, the villain who makes Helena cry is still me. Alisai told Helena she had initially wanted her to go to the Marquis mansion, but she's a palace maid and can't leave the palace at will. Her Majesty the Queen wants to find someone to teach you, and I'm that suitable person. You have a lot to learn, come sit down quickly. Helena nervously asked, can you at least tell me the reason? Why does Her Majesty want to teach me? Alisai didn't explain to her, telling her to ask in person after class. Don't waste my time anymore, Helena stuttered, wanting to say something. Alisai frowned, slapping the table, startling Helena. Her body instantly stiffened, she could only think hard. Alisai slowly walked towards Helena. She told Helena to open her shoulders, then look her in the eye. From now on, don't avoid my gaze. Helena looked directly at Alisai. Slowly she became less panicked. Alisai moved closer to Helena. From now on I'm going to turn you into a person. This girl's appearance was pure, a real little white lotus. Everyone who had contact with her liked her. Of course, except for Alisai, the vicious female antagonist. Although Helena grew up in the palace, she was timid and didn't dare to look nobles in the eye, and the reason she could avoid the nobles' gaze was because nobles had no need to talk to Helena. If she wants to be treated as a person by the royal family and nobles, she can't be as weak as before, because this is a world where the strong prey on the weak. His Highness the Crown Prince can't protect her all the time. Helena needs to make others understand that she's no different from them. Alisai put her hand on Helena's shoulder. To achieve this, the first thing to change is her gaze and posture. Alisai straightened Helena's shoulders. How can you talk or become close to them if you don't dare to look them in the eye? Alisai pondered. Her walking posture is still acceptable. Correcting these should be enough for now. Then she asked Helena, can you read and write? Can you dance socially? Helena answered that she had written before, but didn't really understand the meaning. As for dancing, she knew nothing about it. Alisai sighed. Anyway, in the original novel, Helena only started receiving formal education after becoming the queen. So before teaching etiquette, let's start with writing practice. From trivial table manners to methods of choosing attire and elegant gazes, what Alisai taught Helena seemed endless. The most important point was that Helena was forbidden from saying things like, how dare I, no matter what, I can't, in the future. Although there was a lot to learn, Helena was a bit smarter than Alisai had thought. Her learning speed was even faster than her own. Is this the female protagonist's halo? Oh right, she still had to teach her horseback riding, but let's leave that task to the Crown Prince or Yazan. Now it's time to enter the next stage of lessons. Alisai turned to leave. Now she needs to change clothes first. Taking off the cumbersome dress, Alisai exclaimed how comfortable it was. Finally, it's time for social dance. Because Alisai had to learn both male and female roles, the social dance training was extremely rigorous. This also caused Anakin a lot of suffering, stepping on her feet countless times, while she only said it's okay to step on them casually. He even practiced all the dances with me, polonaise, waltz, mazurka, salon dance. We finally practiced them all. Alisai quickly changed her clothes. Now let's start with the mazurka. This is the most slacking villainess I've ever seen. Not only does she not want to be the crown princess herself, she even gave the novel's female protagonist a lesson to help her become the crown princess faster. Helena asked confusedly, you'll be my dance partner? Alisai said this was only temporary. Inwardly she complained, in the future, Helena's dance partner will only be His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Helena was stunned for a moment. Is this really appropriate? Then she placed her hand on Alisai's. She began her dance practice journey, but it wasn't very smooth, making quite a few mistakes, either missing dance steps or stepping on Alisai's feet. Alisai didn't relax her requirements though, then pulled Helena's waist towards herself, causing Helena to let out a surprised cry. Alisai told her to learn to relax. The stiffer her body, the harder it is to keep up with the rhythm. Helena shyly said this was too close. Alisai told her, dances like the waltz are like this, but to reassure Helena, she still slowed down the teaching pace. Alisai looked at Helena somewhat absent-mindedly. Helena was beautiful and charming no matter how you looked at her. Even this dazed and blank expression was so beautiful. How much more beautiful would she be when she falls in love? Even using all the beautiful words and phrases in the world wouldn't be enough to express her beauty. However, you falling in love with the crown prince, and me staining the dull sword with your blood, which one will happen faster? Suddenly Helena spoke up to ask Alisai, are you planning to make me the crown princess? Alisai told her, to be precise, Her Majesty the Queen wishes so. Of course I agreed. Helena didn't understand. Why? Alisai, don't you like His Highness the Crown Prince? Alisai was surprised for a moment. I really didn't expect to hear why from your mouth. Haven't you thought that all this might be because His Highness the Crown Prince loves you and hates me? That's why I'm taking the trouble to teach you? Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Helena pitifully mumbled, but none of you asked me. You didn't ask if I like His Highness the Crown Prince. How would you deal with this pure little white lotus? After hearing Helena's aggrieved question, Alisai snorted coldly, a light laugh escaping. Because there's no need to care about your feelings at all. Alisai thought that the current Helena should come out of excessive protection and hear some truth. Alisai slowly walked towards her. This is a political struggle between me, the Marquis, the Queen, and His Majesty. And you, who are powerless, are just a pawn. Do you think I became his fiancée because I love His Highness the Crown Prince? Helena widened her innocent eyes. Isn't that so? Alisai thought she was really too naive. Life isn't a fairy tale. I became the Crown Prince's fiancé because he was the most suitable person to be my backing. Even if I loved someone else instead of His Highness, I would still get engaged to His Highness. Alisai stared at Helena, so I advise you to try to fall in love with His Highness. If you fall in love with someone else, that person will lose their life because of it. Helena didn't believe it. Alec isn't such a cruel person. Alisai turned away, not bothering to continue talking with Helena. Whether she regrets it later or not is none of her business. Anyway, no matter how many people the Crown Prince assassinates, it won't affect her anymore. Helena still wasn't convinced. She asked Alisai, why do you want me to marry His Highness? Alisai was indifferent. The reason is simple, because I dislike His Highness, so I feel tired of him. Helena became agitated after hearing this. She loudly questioned Alisai, how can you dislike His Highness so quickly? Just because of such a reason you make this kind of decision. Alisai was very cold. Do you feel wronged and angry? But I can change my mind at any time just because of such a reason. Because I have that qualification and right. If you feel wronged, then become the Crown Princess and confront me. Only when you have power can you implement your will. If you understand, then let's continue the lesson. Don't cry and whine anymore. Review the content we learned today when you have time. I'll quiz you next lesson, she said before leaving gracefully. The scene changes, Alisai sitting on the sofa lost in thought. At this moment, a maid walked over, telling Alisai that Her Majesty the Queen was waiting for her. Alisai stood up. She looked at herself in the mirror, suddenly feeling very tired. Alisai recalled what Helena had said. Why didn't anyone ask if she liked His Highness the Crown Prince? She had actually asked, although not Helena but the Queen. The Queen had answered like this at the time. A man as outstanding as Alec confessing his love to her, she would definitely fall in love. I'm just relaying the Queen's answer to you. If it really turns out as she said, that would be for the best. At least before I thrust the sword given by the witch towards you. This woman is the most slacking female lead I've ever seen, with no ambition, just wanting to quickly return to the real world. The Queen asked Alisai, what have you taught Helena so far? Alisai looked at the high and mighty Queen. She's really pushing all the trouble onto me while maintaining an elegant demeanor and staying idle. But Alisai could only report truthfully. I've taught Helena noble greeting etiquette and dining etiquette, among other things. The Queen thought it was still far from enough to become the Crown Princess. But at least teaching Helena the basics, praising Alisai for doing quite well. Alisai endured it, just treating it as serving a superior. Then the Queen instructed the servants to all withdraw, and then told Alisai about her plans, first arranging for Helena to make her official debut at the ball for Karl's daughter's entry into society. Alisai thought this was a good opportunity. It would indeed leave a deep impression on the nobles. The Queen told Alisai, if we miss this ball, we'll have to wait for a long time. After all, introducing the future Crown Princess can't happen at a casual occasion. Alisai also agreed, I'll teach Helena well before the day of the ball. She recalled the novel's plot. Anyway, the Queen will always entrust Helena's education to her, because the weight of the original novel still remained. Now she remembered it completely. In the novel, Alisai wasn't relieved of her engagement. Helena just became the Crown Princess with the Emperor's permission. Alisai couldn't even dissolve the engagement. She could only watch silently. As Helena replaced her to become the Crown Princess, she even hid in the newlyweds' room. Just like this, Alisai killed Helena. Then she was caught in the act by the Crown Prince, and was sentenced to death. Alisai pulled back from her memories. Hopefully the final outcome will be brought forward to this ball. The Queen then instructed, let Alisai help Helena choose her attire. Although she was a former rival, this wasn't difficult for Alisai. Alisai smiled. Of course. After all, if Helena chose a very childish gown, I would be embarrassed too. But if it were the real Alisai, she would probably cry for several nights. The queen is truly a cruel woman. After taking leave from the queen, Elysai planned to return home. Unexpectedly, she encountered the crown prince on the way. Elysai felt a bit helpless. It seems she'll have to keep having bad luck before getting home today. Elysai lowered her head, planning to ignore the crown prince. She hadn't eaten properly all day, and had been tormented everywhere. She really had no energy to argue. Just as the two were about to pass each other, the crown prince grabbed Elysai's wrist. He looked at Elysai arrogantly and said, "Have you made up your mind to ignore me?" This female lead is too much. Faced with the crown prince who used to always give her the cold shoulder, she decisively chose to ignore him. "You used to be indifferent to me, now I'll make you unable to reach me." Elysai's unusual behavior made the crown prince very uncomfortable. As they were about to pass each other, the crown prince grabbed Elysai's wrist. "Are you determined to ignore me now?" Elysai turned her head and said perfunctorily, "I might be too tired lately, my vision has narrowed. Please forgive my rudeness." The crown prince looked down at Elysai, saying he didn't expect her to kneel when apologizing, but at least she should look at him properly. Then he forcefully squeezed Elysai's hand. The intense pain made Elysai cry out, "Please let go of my hand. I've been running around all day and haven't eaten anything. I'm feeling a bit unsteady now." Seeing Elysai's uncomfortable appearance, the crown prince asked with surprise what was wrong with her. Did she eat something wrong? If she's not feeling well, he could call the royal physician for her. Elysai had nothing to say to him. She hadn't eaten anything at all. Just then a man appeared behind Elysai. He gently supported Elysai's shoulders. Elysai turned her head to look back. It was actually Yazan. Elysai couldn't help but complain inwardly. Why does this guy always suddenly appear? Elysai slapped his hand away. Yazan smiled sheepishly and said, "Don't be like that, you can lean on me." The crown prince watched the two of them banter. He questioned Yazan, "What are you doing?" Yazan fearlessly looked straight at the crown prince, then slowly opened his mouth. "What can I do?" This is purely out of goodwill. The confrontation between the two made Elysai, who was caught in the middle, very uncomfortable. Why do these two guys have to cause trouble in front of her? Never mind, whether they break off their friendship or form a strategic partnership is up to them. "I'm going home," she called softly. "Anakin, come out." In less than a second, Anakin walked out from behind the crown prince. The sunset shining on him made him incredibly handsome. This is truly the gentlest sight in the world. But Elysai had no time to admire him. She instructed Anakin to carry her. She had no strength left now. The crown prince and Yazan were also momentarily speechless. Anakin picked up Elysai without a word, and Elysai also wrapped her arms around his neck. Then she said to the crown prince, "You probably don't want to see me, so I'll take my leave, your highness." Yazan had a look of schadenfreude, while the crown prince wore a serious expression. After Anakin bowed to the two of them, he left carrying Elise in his arms, his gaze fixed straight ahead. People gossiped about this woman, the crown prince's fiancée, being held in another man's arms. Lady Mion is actually being carried by another man. Even if he's her guard, a lady shouldn't casually entrust her body to another man. She's not worthy of being his highness the crown prince's fiancée. Leaning in Anakin's arms, Elise slowly spoke, "If you come to hate me someday, tell me immediately. Give me time to try to understand. I'm used to being hated, but it still hurts." Even so, she still wanted to put on an act in front of Anakin. At least she couldn't let him see her fall apart. Anakin answered very seriously, "Have you forgotten? I've already sworn to be loyal to you, to obey you. I said that no temptation or hardship could make me yield." He set Elise down on a bench to rest, then knelt on one knee. "If you're willing, I'll make another vow now. Even if someday you come to hate yourself, I will never abandon you." Looking at the sincere Anakin, Elise thought, does he mean that she can treat him however she wants, because he completely belongs to her? Indeed, she really needed someone who wouldn't mind even if her twisted inner self was exposed. And only Anakin was that kind of person. Elise suddenly felt a tingling sensation spreading from her toes. She was afraid Anakin would hear her heartbeat, but also thought it might be nice if he noticed. She placed her hand on Anakin's cheek. At this moment, Elise understood more clearly than anyone that falling in love doesn't require any grand reason. But right now, Anakin was truly inspiring love. Yet what Elise said was, "Anakin, are you crazy?" Anakin asked softly, "Have I disappointed you?" Elise pressed her forehead against his, not at all disappointed. "Why is this? Why is Anakin so blind? He's rushing towards me like those meteors that created Earth in ancient times." Elise continued, "I'm very, very satisfied. You make me feel special." The next day, Helena was shocked to learn she would be making her debut at a ball in half a month. She anxiously said she wasn't mentally prepared yet. Elise told her there was plenty of time, no need to worry too much. Today's lesson was over, but there were other things to do now. Elise ordered the servants to bring in Madame Toileau's. As soon as she finished speaking, a woman with long pink curls walked in. Elise told her she hadn't called her here to make clothes for herself today, but to make an outfit for Helena. Toileau smiled slightly, "Pardon my boldness, but I only make clothes for ladies of status." Even if the young lady beside you is a great beauty, I'm afraid I can't help. This is the most dispassionate villainess I've ever seen. Not only giving up her fiancé to the White Lotus, but also having a custom gown made for the White Lotus. However, Twalo smiled and politely declined, saying she only made clothes for ladies of status. Even if the girl beside her was a great beauty, she couldn't help. Elise countered, "Didn't you secretly let her wear my clothes on the day of the coming-of-age ceremony?" Twalos laughed apologetically. That day was a special situation. How could a mere clothing seller dare to disobey a royal command? Elise told Twalos, "Then this time you need to be even more meticulous, because she will soon be entering society by royal decree. In half a month, she will attend Miss Carl's ball. You need to make her a gown." Twalos glanced at Helena. It seemed she had crash-coursed in etiquette in a short time. Twalos raised a doubt, will she be able to survive among so many noble ladies? Elise coldly replied, "If she appears wearing the most expensive gown, even the most arrogant noble ladies won't be too harsh on her." Upon hearing she would have a gown made for her, Helena hurriedly refused. Elise stated the cost would be covered by the royal family. Helena suggested she could just buy one herself. Unexpectedly, Elise suddenly slammed the table. Politely declining and constantly crying poverty are two different things. And what you're doing now is crying poverty. The man who stood beside you that day is the noble future ruler of this country, His Highness Crown Prince Alec, yet you want to stand beside him in common clothes? Do you think the nobles will praise you for being frugal if you wear cheap clothes? That's impossible. They'll only insult the royal family, saying the royal family collects so much in taxes yet can't even give a commoner companion a decent gown. Think about it, wouldn't that end up implicating the royal family instead? Helena's face turned red with embarrassment. She said she would follow Elise's arrangements. A maid beside them took out a measuring tape, and began taking Helena's measurements. Twalos asked what color the gown should be. Elise said purple. Twalos paused, then asked again, because purple is the color symbolizing royalty. Therefore, non-royals wearing purple clothes would be seen as treason. Elise answered definitively, purple it is. It matches Helena's eye color well, doesn't it? In other novels, the female lead would engage in a battle of wits with the White Lotus. But this female lead handed over her fiancé willingly, and even picked out a gown for her. At this moment, Elise looked at the gorgeous gown before her and expressed satisfaction. Twalos smiled and said, "We stayed up several nights for the embroidery." Just then, the door opened. Two maids reported, "Helena's skin and head massage are both completed." Helena was nearly dozing off at this point, she was very tired. However, with one command from Elise, she was told to go try on the gown to see the effect. The maid gave Helena a new hairstyle, but it was vetoed by Elise. This hairstyle made her look too mature. As for jewelry, diamonds were chosen. She should wear both a necklace and earrings. Elise was selecting a fan when Twalos asked, "What should we do about Helena not having pierced ears?" Elise was quite ruthless, immediately saying then pierce them. After hearing this, the maid immediately grabbed Helena, quickly and deftly pierced Helena's ears while she looked bewildered. Helena was in pain, tears welling up, about to cry the next second. Elise told her not to cry, or her makeup would run. After a series of procedures, Helena was finally dressed up. The exquisite gown, elegant purple color, Helena's beauty, plus the noble crown, made her the perfect image of an aristocratic young lady. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. Helena looked at Elise, wanting to hear her evaluation. Elise looked her over and said it was not bad. Actually, it was perfect. She felt proud after personally tutoring this child. With heavy makeup, she looked even more imposing than before. Elise reached out her hand to Helena, saying let's practice dancing one last time. After everything was done, Helena took off the gown and sat on the sofa. In the past, she had envied those ladies in gorgeous dresses. Dressing up like that and dancing once had been her dream. But after experiencing it herself, she found that beauty was more difficult and inconvenient than she had imagined. Was she being ungrateful for her blessings? But Elise said those things had nothing to do with beauty. The hardship and inconvenience you experience today are just someone's created standards of beauty. Anyone can become beautiful at any time. Just then, a maid brought in lemon cake. Helena was very excited to see it. Elise told her to eat quickly, saying she wanted something sweet today too. Occasionally eating sweets could help ease her irritable temper. If she didn't have this, she definitely would have quit long ago. But the next second, Elise's expression changed. She actually found sand in her cake. But Helena's expression remained calm, so it seemed only her cake had a problem. So now she was just the crown prince's fiancée in name only? Elise looked around. So who exactly did this? This usually calm woman suddenly flew into a rage, even laying hands on a servant. Just now, after realizing there was a problem with the dessert, Elise looked around, then walked up to a maid. Isn't this the girl who accused her before? Does she think she has backing now? Seeing Elise being unfriendly to the maid, Helena hurriedly tried to stop her. Unexpectedly, Elise slapped her across the face. The maid was struck so hard she fell to the ground. Helena screamed and then covered her mouth in shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. Elise ordered the other maids to help her up, then questioned her. You look down on me, yet keep following Lady Helena. Why is that? Is it because she's nice to you? Or because she's scarier than me? You're relying on Helena's backing from His Highness to be so brazen towards me? Elise raised her hand again. I don't blame children, but knowing power advantages and weighing pros and cons from that, this isn't something a child can do. Helena anxiously grabbed Elise's hand. You can reason with her kindly, she'll understand. Elise glanced at Helena, this child being so arrogant, you bear some responsibility too. Then she shook off Helena's hand. Watch carefully, I'll show you now how you should deal with those who look down on you when you become the crown princess in the future. Elise coldly stared at the maid. Another slap landed on her face. She's not truly following Helena, she just wants to cling to power. She's just pretending to be powerful. Just like when the crown prince slapped me based on her word alone. She was just enjoying that moment of power. Of course, she can betray Helena at any time. Elise was about to continue disciplining her, but Helena stood in front of her. Please stop. This child's actions are my responsibility, so please don't hit her anymore. Elise wanted to continue reasoning kindly. Please distinguish clearly between those who truly like you and those who are just trying to gain benefits from you. However, the saintly female lead lived up to her reputation. Helena said with great righteousness, I don't mind if others benefit from me, so please don't use violence against others. If you're not satisfied, you can punish me today, but please promise me you won't lay hands on anyone again from now on. Elise said coldly, are you ordering me? This is truly a typical White Lotus female lead, not only saying she doesn't mind others taking advantage of her, but also confronting Elise for the sake of a servant. Elise said coldly, are you ordering me? Helena nervously explained. The day you were slapped by His Highness, I stupidly stood by and did nothing. I swore to God then that I wouldn't make the same mistake again. No reason can justify violence, this is what you taught me. Elise knew Helena was different from that maid, because from the beginning, Helena never thought of relying on others' power, nor was she someone who put power first. Her reason for not daring to confront the crown prince then, but confronting Elise now, wasn't a calculation of power. Others might not know, but Elise understood clearly. Helena said to Elise, there should be more appropriate ways to handle this. I will drive out the person who tampered with your cake and their accomplices in the kitchen. These words frightened the maid to the point of breakdown. She directly knelt down, clutching Helena's legs and begging for mercy, saying she was willing to accept punishment, just pleading not to be driven out. However, Helena just looked at Elise expressionlessly, waiting for Elise's permission. Elise nodded in agreement. Since this maid was more afraid of being driven out, this way of handling it was better. Elise admitted she had a bad temper. If someone sabotaged her, she had to get back at them twice as hard to be satisfied. As for Helena, that foolish kindness was her true nature. Take what just happened, Elise's an eye for an eye approach, and Helena's completely opposite reaction. This was exactly what angered Elise. Only she was the most admirable, the most noble and pure. Elise asked, you just said it's okay if others use you and benefit from it, right? If someone who loves you heard those words, they would be very hurt. Then she left, inwardly criticizing Helena's self-sacrifice as nauseating, because Elise knew Helena was indeed sincere. Returning home, a servant brought in the gift box sent by Twalos, and handed the letter to Elise. Twalos apologized for not being able to visit in person due to busy affairs. I once promised that from your first outfit to your last, I would make them all by hand. You are my biggest customer and my only muse. I keep that in my heart. I hope you will wear this gown and illuminate the ball as always. This was an exquisitely beautiful and gorgeous gown, but the villainous Elise who received this gown wasn't very happy. Instead, she was very confused. Elise stared at the gown before her, lost in thought. This wasn't just a piece of clothing, it could be called a work of art. One look and you could tell more effort was put into it than Helena's gown. But why? To Twalos, Elise should be a kite with a broken string. In the novel, Twalos used Elise to solidify her position in social circles. In the end, she also went to support Helena. Could there be some other insider information here? Oh right, she still needed to get a matching outfit for Anakin. Thinking of this, Elise finally snapped out of it. Just then Anakin said, this gown is like a bouquet of flowers. Elise turned her head, how long have you been standing there? Anakin said he had been there from the beginning. Elise spoke, good timing, come over and get measured for clothes. Seeing Anakin's confused expression, Elise explained, for Miss Carl's ball, I want you to be my escort. So you should at least wear a proper outfit, right? But from your expression, are you unwilling? You don't have the right to refuse though. Anakin shook his head. He wasn't unwilling, but he already had a uniform, so there was no need to make other clothes. Elise looked puzzled, what uniform? Anakin explained, the one worn at the commissioning ceremony. Elise had no recollection at all, because at that time she didn't care much about Anakin. Elise said slowly, the outfit I want to buy for you is very expensive. You probably couldn't afford it in a lifetime with your salary. Anakin was stubborn. Wearing my uniform is enough, because the uniform means I'm the master's knight. There's nothing more honorable than that. Elise was stunned after hearing this. She gently caressed Anakin's cheek. How can you be so sweet? Then let's just modify the uniform a bit. After all, it is a ball. Your uniform should at least match my gown. Only then did Anakin not refuse. Just then a maid came to report. Lord Carl had come to visit and asked to see Lady Elise. Elise got a headache. What was this guy doing here? How annoying can a clingy man be? Elise found this very frustrating. She had already been firm enough with him, so why was he still being so persistent? Seeing Elise's reluctance, the maid offered to go reject Lord Carl. Elise stopped the maid. She wanted to reject Yasin herself. Anakin should come along too. In the hall, Yasin gazed at Elise's giant portrait, lost in thought. Just then Elise's voice came. I don't think I received any message that you were coming to visit. Showing up so suddenly without notice will make me very unhappy. Please leave. Yasin acted nonchalant. Just let me off this once. I heard Alec is taking Helena to my sister's ball, so I came rushing over. Elise said impatiently, you should go talk to His Highness the Crown Prince about this kind of thing. I won't be his dance partner. Yasin looked at Elise. That's not what I meant. I came to discuss with you, as two people who've lost their dance partners, why don't we pair up? Of course, you can also take this as my request. Elise rejected without a thought. Sorry, I plan to have my knight be my dance partner. Yasin looked at Anakin. A knight as an escort? That doesn't seem appropriate, does it? After all, there's a difference in status. Isn't that why you chose me on the coming-of-age day? If you go to the ball with that knight, everyone at the ball will mock you for being abandoned. Can you bear that cold ridicule? Lady Elise, I'm here to help you. If you're willing, I can consider this as me begging you. Elise fell silent. Yasin was right. No matter how gorgeously she appeared at the ball, everyone would only focus on her partner, and then judge her based on that partner's status. It was precisely because Yasin knew this clearly that he looked so smug. How annoying. Elise said disdainfully, even so, I still won't go with you. Yasin thought she was just putting on a brave face. He sat on the sofa with a victorious air. Elise stared at him. If I were just putting on a brave face, I would probably accept your suggestion. But I hate you. No matter what others say, being your partner would be more painful for me. Just thinking about it is annoying. Yasin clenched his fists. He didn't understand why Elise hated him so much. He had already apologized. Elise glanced at him. You did apologize, that's true. But I never accepted your apology. This man was too proud and arrogant. Faced with the villainous Elise, he said loftily, do you never want to see me again for the rest of your life? Is it because I showed hostility towards you the first time? Just because of that? Elise coldly replied, how can that be, just? It means I've completely lost trust in you. How can I trust you won't betray me again? Yasin suddenly stood up. If I prove it, will you trust me again? Elise couldn't believe it. How smooth must his life have been for him to be so self-centered about his feelings? If she casually went along with him now, he would probably leave. But Elise didn't want to do that. Now even her own heart was so tired, she had no energy to cater to others. Elise held her head in pain. Then how will you prove it? Yasin said he would do whatever Elise asked. Elise looked at him coldly. I don't understand why you keep refusing to let me go. Elise thought if Yasin had fallen for her, she could understand. But his every action wasn't something one would do towards someone they liked. Yasin looked down at Elise. I'd like to know why Lady Mion rejects others' goodwill so much. Is it so hard to accept help when you're in trouble? Elise was a bit confused. Love or sympathy? She thought he would say something cliched like, you're the first woman to push me away, but he didn't. Yasin turned his head away. That's right, Lady Mion only shows weakness in front of His Highness. It's always been like that. You don't need anyone except His Highness, raising all your quills. You're the type of person who makes enemies for yourself. He grabbed Elise's shoulders. Didn't you say you already know His Highness won't love you? But why? Why do you still torment yourself? Elise was stunned. There was something wrong with Yasin's eyes. Yasin wasn't looking at her now, but looking at himself through Elise. To slay the dragon, Yasin had undergone extremely arduous training. As soon as he learned to walk, he picked up a sword. He never slacked off for a day. Forced to bear an unreasonable mission, but unable to refuse, little Yasin just wanted to survive. He also wanted to run away. Dissatisfied with everything, he was Yasin Carl who struggled desperately to meet others' expectations. Elise gritted her teeth. Actually, Yasin wanted to comfort his past self by saving her. How little must he think of others to do this? This woman had been focused on returning to the real world since transmigrating. She also wanted the crown prince and female lead to end up together. Aside from returning to reality, she brushed off all other matters. However, faced with Yasin, she flew into a rage. Elise shouted, what do you know about me? Then she shoved him away, and gave him a slap for good measure. Yasin's head was turned by the blow. Don't treat me like a weak woman who needs your protection. Don't you really understand? I'm not miserable at all now. Rather, you're hoping my situation is tragic, aren't you? So you can wedge yourself into my wounds. You ask if I hate you. Do you really want to hear what I think of you? Lord Carl, I don't hate you because hating someone requires emotion. But I have no interest in Lord Carl and no feelings whatsoever. Elise pressed on step by step. I really have zero interest in you. What kind of life you lead, what you think about, or what makes you happy or sad, I don't want to know any of it. Even if I knew, I wouldn't want to remember, because you're just a stranger to me. Even if you died tomorrow, I wouldn't shed a single tear. Yasin was dumbfounded. You don't need me? Elise turned around. That's right. Once you understand, stop talking to me. With that, she was about to leave with Anakin. But Yasin still wouldn't give up. Seeing he couldn't stop Elise, he even rudely reached out to grab her again. But the next second, his hand was caught by Anakin. Elise silently turned back, but she didn't stop Anakin. Yasin was very displeased with this. You dare to touch a noble's body so casually? Do you have a death wish? Anakin released Yasin's hand. There were clear red marks on Yasin's wrist, showing how agitated he was. My master is not you, Lord Carl, and if anyone dares to touch my master, no matter who it is, as long as the master is unwilling, I will stop them. Then he turned to Elise and asked how she wanted to handle this. Elise looked into Anakin's eyes. They were full of loyalty to her. How lovable. Elise sighed. This was truly someone who belonged completely to her. Who wouldn't love such a protective little wolf dog? Faced with the arrogant Yasin, Anakin responded forcefully, if anyone dares to touch my master, no matter who it is, as long as the master is unwilling, I will stop them. Elise looked at Anakin before her, feeling somewhat moved. She reached out to caress Anakin's face, but her gaze drifted to Yasin. Was he still watching? Sure enough, Yasin was still staring at them. Elise turned to look at him. I've said everything I needed to say. Stop bothering me and go home. If you need a trash can to vent your resentment, I'd be happy to lend you a mirror. Don't go looking for anyone else. I mean Helena. Elise didn't need to think to know that the foolish Helena would go along with whatever Yasin wanted, as long as he approached her. Elise, walking out the door, ordered, the guest seems to have lost his way. Escort him to the entrance. The maid bowed respectfully and asked Yasin to follow her. Yasin lowered his head in silence. It wasn't like that. Lying in bed, Elise had a headache. She had to ask Anakin beside her to go get medicine. After Anakin left, Elise looked at the ceiling and gave a self-mocking smile. I really have ulterior motives. But she just wanted to confirm. She needed the certainty that even if she was unreasonable, Anakin wouldn't abandon her. She hoped Anakin would continue to work hard for her sake. After locking the door, Elise lay in bed trying hard to endure the pain. She seemed to have stomach cramps from overexertion lately. Please, Anakin, come quickly. Outside the door, Anakin arrived to find it locked. He asked from outside if Elise had fallen asleep. Elise didn't answer. She had already locked the door, but the next second when she turned her head, Anakin was already standing by her bed. Master, are you in a lot of pain? I've brought the medicine. Elise asked how he got in. Anakin answered honestly, I was very worried about you, so I asked the Chamberlain for the key. Elise was feeling low. She had thought Anakin would break down the door or climb in through the window, just like in novels. After all, this was the world of a novel. After drinking the medicine, Elise brushed back her hair. Anakin held a towel, saying he wanted to wipe her face. Elise's face was expressionless as she let Anakin wipe her face. Anakin didn't speak either, just silently doing his task. Just then Elise asked, Anakin, do you like me? Anakin's hand paused. He looked at Elise in disbelief. Elise was also praying silently, say you like me. I'm not asking if you love me, just like. But what can I do if I hear he likes me? I'll have to leave sooner or later anyway. Wake up. I can't give him anything. Just as Anakin was about to speak, Elise stopped him. Don't say it. Anakin still wanted to continue, but Elise covered his mouth with her hand. I told you not to say it. Elise felt she was bad. She had scolded Yasin for treating others as emotional trash cans, but she had done the same thing. She knew this man couldn't refuse her. This is the most conflicted villainess I've seen. She clearly likes the knight before her but doesn't dare express her love. When Anakin was about to answer, Elise covered his mouth, telling him not to answer, but Anakin also reached out. His hand enveloped Elise's hand. This startled Elise, but she didn't pull away. Anakin didn't speak, but cherished this moment immensely, wholeheartedly feeling Elise's touch. Elise's face turned red. I like you, so I only want you to see my excellence and strength. I want to accept your help in time, and I don't want to be your burden. If you like me too, is it really me? Could it be the causality of this novel forcing you to like Elise? I'm very afraid. I'm afraid I'll want to stay here because of you. If I stayed in this world, I'm afraid I'd end up resenting you in the future. After a moment's thought, Elise withdrew her hand. She turned away, saying Anakin could leave now, and thanked him for bringing the medicine. Anakin looked at Elise silently for a while, but in the end he stood up, telling Elise to rest well, then turned to leave. Lying in bed, Elise listened to the footsteps. She couldn't help looking back, praying in her heart for Anakin not to leave, to stay and keep her company. Anakin paused at the door. He looked back, his gaze meeting Elise's. Elise's face suddenly turned red. She hurriedly sat up to explain, "I just wanted to check if you had left." Seeing Elise tossing and turning, Anakin asked, "Is the pain keeping you from sleeping? Then I'll stay until you fall asleep." With Elise's permission, Anakin closed the door. He came to Elise's bedside and quietly watched over her. Elise really didn't want to be a burden to Anakin, but today she was still sick. Everyone gets sick sometimes. Elise comforted herself that this wasn't because she was weak. She was just sick, so she hoped Anakin would continue to tell her that he was always there. That way she could feel at ease. Anakin reached out and held Elise's hand. This sense of security lulled Elise to sleep. The next morning, Elise praised Helena, "You review everything so thoroughly each time. That makes my teaching very meaningful. Tomorrow is Miss Carl's ball, and our final lesson has ended." Elise felt relieved. She also had to attend the ball tomorrow, so she needed to go home early today. The next second, the door was suddenly flung open. The person who came was the Crown Prince. "I know Helena isn't here. I've come to see her." This man, noble as the Crown Prince, now disregarded etiquette and insisted on barging in, all to find a common girl. The Crown Prince shouted Helena's name. Elise asked what reason made him violate etiquette to break in like this. The Crown Prince's face was terrifyingly gloomy. He walked straight to Helena and then shielded her behind him. Then he questioned Elise, "Why are you with Helena?" Helena anxiously explained, "I invited her to have tea." The Crown Prince retorted, "You're really too trusting. Aren't you afraid she'll harm you?" Elise said helplessly, "Am I some kind of monster?" The Crown Prince made no effort to hide his disgust. "You're more vicious than a monster. If she was with a monster, I wouldn't be so worried." Then the Crown Prince looked at Helena, "You'll go to Miss Carl's ball with me, as my partner. You know that girl, right?" Helena instinctively looked to Elise for her opinion. Elise nodded. She had planned to speak to the Crown Prince about this today anyway. Better to let him reject her than for her to reject him. The Crown Prince asked Elise if she would also attend the ball. "You don't even have a partner. Are you going alone?" Elise thought he was really shameless. Wasn't he supposed to be her partner originally? But Elise still answered good-naturedly, "My partner will be Anakin, the personal guard you saw before." The Crown Prince retorted, "Isn't that person a commoner?" Elise smiled, "Pardon my boldness, but Lady Helena is also a commoner now." This left the Crown Prince speechless. "Are you trying to turn against the royal family?" Elise didn't mince words, "Yes, Your Highness. I'm taking this opportunity to completely sever ties with the royal family. Of course, my father may repair relations with the royal family again, but it definitely won't be through me. Your Highness, we will break off our engagement soon. After that, we'll be strangers and won't see each other again." The Crown Prince didn't agree at all. Hadn't she thought about how this would cause trouble? Elise told him this was allowed by the Queen, so he should just enjoy this surprise. Isn't this what His Highness has always dreamed of?
For copyright reasons, please go to the original manga. The end of the video corresponds to chapter 54 of the manga. Thank you for watching.